We're talking about Sunungju, a girl who had it all. Born into a super rich family, living the dream, until she wasn't. One minute, she's cruising in luxury. Her family's broke. Gone. Over. Like overnight. Her mom calls her frantic. Don't come home. But Sunungju's not about to leave her mom hanging when everything's falling apart. Of course she goes home. She walks in to find her house completely trashed, and people are looting the place. And when they see her, they turn on her and her mom, just heaping insults on them, then start grabbing everything that isn't nailed down. See, Sunungju and her mom have always been used to the good life. They have no idea what's actually going on. All they know is her dad is in jail, and they need to find someplace to live fast. So they end up in this tiny, cramped apartment. Talk about a downgrade. Her mom is not happy. She's used to luxury and insists that Sunungju call her rich friends and beg for money. Sunungju is mortified. The last thing she wants is for anyone to know how far her family has fallen. Later that night, Sunungju is out to dinner with Chayiel. He can tell something is seriously wrong. She's totally distracted and not eating. He thinks the food's bad and offers to take her somewhere else. But then, they hear a commotion outside. Sunungju thinks someone just bumped their car. It's the loan sharks, and they've tracked her down. They're right there waiting for her. This is Sunungju's worst nightmare come true. Her secret is about to be exposed to her boyfriend. All she can do is hand over the keys to her car. She wanted to keep some dignity in front of the man she loves. But it is all gone. Sunungju loses it. She starts crying on Chayiel's shoulder, and he's just standing there, totally awkward, not knowing what to do. Then Sunungju looks up at him, and they have this moment. She slowly closes her eyes, ready to kiss the guy she's been crushing on for years. But he pulls away. Turns out he only sees her as a friend. Rejected and heartbroken, Sunungju goes out and gets wasted. And who should find her but Jau Suk? He takes her back to a hotel. Jau Suk has always been in love with Sunungju, but he's just a poor guy, and she's always been this untouchable rich girl. Just as Jau Suk is about to leave, Sunungju suddenly sits up and asks him if he still likes her. If he does, she tells him not to leave. Okay, things are about to get interesting. The next morning, Jau Suk wakes up to a message from Sunungju, telling him to forget about last night. She knows they're from different worlds, so she thinks she is doing him a favor. A month later, Sunungju discovers she's pregnant. This poor guy lost his virginity, and now the girl doesn't want anything to do with him. Before she leaves him a note asking him to pretend last night never happened. Even though Jau Suk has been in love with Sunungju for a long time, he never dared to dream she'd be with him because he's poor. Now, her family is broke, and she lives in the same neighborhood as him. Soon after, Sunungju is having dinner with her mom, and she suddenly feels nauseous. Her mom jokes that she must be pregnant. They both freeze and stare at each other. Her mom can't believe her daughter would do something like that, and they get into a huge fight. The next day, Sunungju goes to the doctor, who confirms that she's pregnant. She does not know what to do because she does not like Jau Suk. She decides to have an abortion and throws the test results in the bathroom. Dong Hi finds them, and thinking Sunungju dropped them, she runs after her. Sunungju denies that the test results belong to her. What a crazy coincidence. She runs into Jau Suk right there. When she sees Jau Suk, she freaks out and runs away. Jau Suk grabs the report from his sister and sees Sunungju's name. He knows the baby is his and chases after her to talk. Jau Suk has the pregnancy test in his hand, and Sunungju is cornered. She finally admits it. Yes, this baby is his. But she straight up tells him she doesn't want anything to do with some poor guy who has no future. He quickly tells her he just passed the bar exam, so he actually can take care of her and the baby. He promises to love her and treat her well forever. But Sunungju pushes him away. Why? Because she's still hung up on Chayiel. Sunungju goes home, and her mom is all over her, demanding to know who the baby's father is. Sunungju doesn't want her mom interfering in her mess, but mom keeps pushing. So Sunungju finally tells her that the father wants to keep the baby. Hearing this, mom is actually pleased. Seeing that he's at least willing to take responsibility, mom is happy. Given their current situation, finding a decent guy like that is a lucky break. But Sunungju still needs closure. She wants to know if Chayiel likes her too. Sadly, she faces rejection. Totally heartbroken, Sunungju decides to marry Jau Suk. But this isn't going to be a fairy tale. Because Sunungju is super entitled, her first visit to Jau Suk's house is a disaster. She walks into their place and immediately starts covering her nose, complaining about the smell. She looks around at all the old furniture and can't believe this is her life now. Jau Suk's grandma sees her new granddaughter-in-law and is absolutely delighted. Sunungju forces a smile and brushes off the compliment. When grandma finds out Sunungju is pregnant, she starts crying tears of joy. She never thought she'd live to see her great-grandchild. Jau Suk is happy to see his grandma so happy. Dong Hi is ecstatic that she's going to be an aunt. The whole family celebrates Jau Suk's baby news. Plus, Jau Suk even takes out a loan to buy a new house. But when Sunungju's mom sees the place, she scoffs and says it's too small. Like mother, like daughter, Jau Suk, embarrassed, says he'll get Sunungju a bigger house when he has more money. Then, Jau Suk gets a bunch of calls from work. He says he has to leave because there's an emergency at his firm. Sunungju's mom thought she was going to have a ticket out of poverty thanks to her son-in-law, but it is turning out to be more difficult than she thought. But the only good thing is that Jau Suk doesn't have parents, so Sunungju doesn't have to deal with a mother-in-law like she did. When she gets home, mom starts grilling Sunungju about her husband's family situation. But Sunungju isn't in the mood to talk about it. Today, Jau Suk is planning on visiting home for his grandma's birthday party. Dong Hi still hasn't met her sister-in-law, so he wants to bring Sunungju along, but Sunungju doesn't want to go to that dirty, cramped house. Hearing that her son-in-law is driving home, Mom swipes the car keys, saying she's going out with her friends. Knowing the road is long, she still refuses to give him the keys back. So Jau Suk reluctantly says he'll just take the bus. After celebrating his grandma's birthday, Jau Suk sits down to talk with his sister. Hearing that Dong Hi wants to study fashion design, Jau Suk promises to buy her the best sewing machine one day. At that moment, Sunungju's mom calls saying Sunungju is having labor pains and might give birth early. She tells him to come home right away. It's already late and it's pouring rain, so there are no buses back to the city. On top of that, his mother-in-law keeps rushing him. Desperate, Jau Suk decides to risk it and stands in the middle of the road, trying to flag down a ride. So dangerous. Sunungju delivers the baby, but Jau Suk isn't there. Furious, Mom tells Sunungju to call her husband. But the person who answers is a police officer, who tells her that Jau Suk was in a car accident and died. Earlier, Jau Suk got a call from his mother-in-law saying his wife was going into labor. But it was midnight and raining cats and dogs, so no cars were heading back to the city. Then, a car appears, and desperate to find a ride, Jau Suk flags it down. Because it's dark and the car is speeding, the driver doesn't have enough time to stop and accidentally hits Jau Suk. And who's the driver? Chayiel's brother. Seeing that his brother hit someone, Chayiel gets out of the car to check. As Jau Suk is dying, he keeps calling out the name of his unborn son. Chayiel sees this and urges his brother to call the police. But his brother is freaking out and calls their mom instead. Mom's first question? Are there any security cameras around? It's pouring rain, so they can't see anything clearly. Mom tells them point blank, don't call the police. Chayiel grabs the phone and demands to know why. Turns out, he and his brother's dad are running for office, and they can't afford any scandals. Chayiel is incredulous. No matter what, they can't just leave someone to die. Chayiel refuses to be complicit and is about to go back to the car to get his phone and call the police. But his brother punches him out cold. Over at Jau Suk's house, his sister Dong Hi keeps calling him, but he's not answering. She has no idea her brother was in an accident. When Grandma finds out her grandson died, she's so heartbroken she collapses. After paramedics tried to revive her, she died overnight. Within 24 hours, Dong Hi loses 2 of her family members. Meanwhile, Chayiel wakes up back home. He jumps up, ready to turn himself in. His mom sees this and threatens to kill herself if he does. Turns out, Chayiel's biological dad died when he was young. He's been raised by his aunt and uncle, but everything his aunt and uncle own was actually inherited from Chayiel's dad. That's why his uncle agreed to raise him. He was hoping that Chayiel would run the company one day and give it to him. But the aunt is greedy and selfish. She's always been worried that Chayiel would try to take their family's wealth. Now that her son has committed a serious crime, she'll do anything to cover it up. Chayiel tells her she'll regret this decision for the rest of her life. Over at Sunungju's place, she never wanted to keep the baby in the first place. Now that her husband is dead, she doesn't even glance at the baby. She snuck out of the house and left the baby at Jau Suk's place. Dong Hi comes home after losing her brother and grandmother and finds a baby in the house. She's shocked. Looking at the note Sunungju left, she realizes this is her brother's child. But Dong Hi has never even met Sunungju, so she has no way to contact her. Desperate, she takes her brother's phone and tries to find Sunungju's number. But that cruel woman has already turned off her phone. Cradling the baby in her arms, Dong Hi doesn't know what to do. She decides to leave a voice message for Sunungju. Hearing her sister-in-law's message, Sunungju learns that Jau Suk's grandmother died from the shock of hearing about her grandson's death. Now, the only family member left is a high school student. This makes Sunungju's mom worried. She urges her daughter to go get her baby and take care of it. But Sunungju stubbornly refuses. Jau Suk promised to take care of her. Now that he is dead, his sister must take care of the baby. Mom points out that Jau Suk's sister is still in high school, and Sunungju cruelly says that if Jau Suk's sister is not able to care for the baby, she will drop off the baby at the orphanage. Hearing her daughter say these heartless things, Sunungju's mom can't believe she gave birth to such a cruel person. Sunungju even tells her mom to help her change her phone number. Seeing how stubborn her daughter is, Mom decides to stay out of it. Meanwhile, Chayiel is falling apart from the guilt of running away from the accident. He's drinking all the time. His uncle notices that he's been down lately and asks him what happened. Chayiel is about to tell him everything when his aunt stops him. He swallows the words he wanted to say and remains silent. The next day, Chayiel goes back to the scene of the accident. He sees a banner that says, "Looking for the hit-and-run driver." So he calls the number on the banner. But when he hears the person's voice, he loses the courage to say anything. He is hurting so badly. Back home, Chayiel decides to study abroad to escape this messed-up city. Hearing this, his aunt is thrilled and immediately agrees. His uncle, seeing Chayiel's resolve, reluctantly agrees, but with one condition: he has to come back and work for the company in a year. Meanwhile, when Dong Hi visits her aunt's place, her aunt is adamant that Dong Hi cannot raise Jau Suk's child. That night, after overhearing her aunt and uncle planning to take the baby to an orphanage, she sneaks away. Now, a high school student is a single mom. Dong Hi doesn't have a job, and she's wandering the streets with the baby. No one wants to hire her. All this is thanks to her cruel sister-in-law. After her brother died, she secretly left the baby at Dong Hi's house. But the sister-in-law, whom she has never even met, has already changed her phone number. So, Dong Hi has no choice but to wander everywhere with the baby. Today, the baby suddenly has a high fever, and she's terrified. She doesn't have enough money to pay for treatment. Luckily, a kind old man not only helps her pay for the medicine but also takes Dong Hi and the baby home. After hearing about Dong Hi's plight, he advises her to take the baby to an orphanage. After all, she's still a teenager and can't possibly take good care of a baby. He also regularly donates to orphanages, so he knows the conditions are excellent. But Dong Hi doesn't want to do that. She ran away from her aunt's place because she was afraid they'd take the baby to an orphanage. Back at her aunt's place, she is uneasy and can't sleep because she's so worried about her nephew. But the cruel mother who abandoned her child is doing great, with her career soaring at her new company, and the baby's maternal grandmother is even luckier. To change her life, she's hooked up with a rich sugar daddy. She doesn't have time to worry about that poor baby. Then, the baby's formula is running out, and Dong Hi is evicted for not being able to pay rent. She's wandering alone, recalling the old man's advice. She has no other choice but to temporarily take the baby to the orphanage. She talks to the director and explains that she'll come back for the baby when she finds a job. But the moment the staff takes the baby away, the painful feeling comes back. Hearing her nephew crying, she couldn't control her emotions. No matter how hard life is, she can't bear to abandon the baby. So, Dong Hi starts handing out flyers with the baby. One day, Dong Hi accidentally sees the baby's biological mother on the street, but she doesn't know that the woman in front of her is her sister-in-law. At this time, Dong Hi runs into Mr. Jang again. The kind man takes her to his shop and says she can work there, and he'll provide room and board. Overjoyed, she doesn't know how to thank him enough, and is glad to start working at Mr. Jang's shop. Fast forward 8 years. The baby is now in elementary school and is a very considerate child. With Dong Hi's help, the shop is thriving. Meanwhile, after living abroad for many years, Chayiel gets a call from a friend. His friend's kid needs surgery urgently, and he needs money. Chayiel has no choice but to call his uncle for help, but his uncle tells him to come back to the country. Having no choice, Chayiel packs his bags and returns home. But as soon as he gets off the bus, he forgets his camera in the taxi. Coincidentally, he sees Dong Hi making a delivery. Desperate, he steals her moped and chases after the taxi. Dong Hi is dumbfounded. With no other option, she decides to open the bag he left behind to see if there's any contact information. But it's just clothes and a pile of stinky socks. Based on his years of experience, the security guard analyzes that this person is either a hoodlum or a thief. Dong Hi quickly calls the police, but Chayiel just wanted to get his camera back from the taxi. After running half a block, he finally catches up, only to be stopped by the police. Someone reported him for stealing a moped, so they have to take him to the station. No matter how Chayiel tries to explain, the police don't believe him. Just like that, he's taken away by the police. Chayiel finally gets to the police station. Guess who he finds out called the cops on him? It's Dong Hi. After ripping off her car, Chayel's not even sorry. He's blaming her. Dong Hi is not having it. She's like, "Dude, you're a thief." Chayiel tries to explain himself. "Hey, I left her my bag. There's something super important in there." But Dong Hi checked the bag, and according to her, there's nothing valuable in there. The cops say there's a passport in there. Chayel's passport. But Dong Hi said she never saw it in the bag, or she wouldn't have called the cops. Then he's asking her to find his camera. "It's your fault I can't find it. You called the cops." So they get into this crazy bet. She tells him to find the passport. He tells her, "If you don't find my passport, you're on the hook for finding my camera." She's like, "If I find it, you better apologize on your knees." Then Chayiel pulls his passport out of his pocket. Dong Hi's jaw drops. She lost the bet. Now she has to make good on it. Find the taxi that took off with him. But she is like, "How do I do that in a big city like this?" Then Chayiel remembers that the taxi driver stopped to buy something at a convenience store. They head over there, but the owner's not around. The employee doesn't have the authority to show them the security footage. So they have to wait 2 days to come back. After Dong Hi leaves, she's bugged. Chayiel seems familiar. Then, it hits her. 9 years ago, Chayiel came to her family's seafood stand. He even took a photo of her grandma that they used for her memorial. Back at the store, Dong Hi tells old man Jang everything. She knows she's seen him before. Jang asks if she may have seen him around the village before. Dong Hi suddenly remembers the accident 9 years ago when her brother died. Over the years, she's been trying to find the person who killed her brother in a hit and run. She's been getting scammed by people who will lie as witnesses for money. The next day, old man Jang reminds Dong Hi about the appointment with Chayiel. As she's heading out, she gets a weird phone call. Someone on the other end says they're calling about the accident from 8 years ago. Even though she's been tricked before, she can't help but get her hopes up. But of course, it's the same old story, they just want money. After venting her frustrations to old man Jang, Dong Hi feels terrible. She feels guilty that she didn't prevent her brother's accident, so she is determined to track down her brother's killer. Because of all this, she forgets to help Chayiel find his camera. He waits and waits, thinking he's been scammed. Suddenly, Chayiel gets a call from the police. They found his camera. By pure coincidence, Dong Hi shows up at the police station too, but they miss each other. Here's a plot twist. Chayel's dad is best friends with old man Jang. That's why Chayiel always visits when he's back in the country. The reason Chayiel came back this time is to ask his uncle for a loan. A friend's kid needs surgery, like yesterday. But his uncle says he'll help. But Chayiel has to work at his company for a year. If he still wants to leave after a year, his uncle won't stop him. Chayiel doesn't want to go back to that house though. It's complicated. That night, he talks about it with old man Jang, who convinces him to give it a shot. After all, it's his father's company, and it would be his father's wish to have him run the company. Chayiel takes his advice. His uncle is so happy to hear it, but Chayel's aunt is not thrilled. She wants him out of the company forever. She and her son are nervous about him being back in the business. Meanwhile, the company's getting ready for an overseas fashion exhibition. But someone spills coffee on the designs. Sunungju is furious and chases after the designer, but the designer is gone and won't answer the phone. Now Sunungju is the only one who knows how to use the sewing machine, which means they can't finish the clothes by morning. Everyone at the company is freaking out about these ruined designs. But then, totally randomly, the assistant sees Dong Hi making a delivery. Since she's a regular at Old Man Jang's place, he knows she's amazing at sewing. Thinking fast, Sunungju literally cuts her off on the road. Dong Hi's totally startled. Like, "Are you crazy? Why are you blocking my scooter?" Sunungju just blurts out, "Dong Hi, you have to help us sew these clothes." Dong Hi is in total shock. Here's the crazy part. 8 years ago, Sunungju abandoned her 1-month-old baby. Now, 8 years later, the woman who's been raising her son all this time suddenly appears right in front of her. Dong Hi sacrificed her dream of becoming a designer to raise Sunungju's kid. Even though Sunungju is Dong Hi's sister-in-law, they've never even met. Basically, their whole line of clothing for an overseas show is wrecked and needs to be completely redone. Sunungju can't do it all by herself in one night, so these two just happen to bump into Dong Hi at the perfect moment, and the assistant knows about Dong Hi's skills and wants to recruit her. So they ask Dong Hi for help. Since designing clothes is totally her thing, Dong Hi immediately agrees and calls Old Man Jang to watch her nephew. Sunungju is super impressed by Dong Hi's skills. They work all night and finally finish the clothes just in time. To show her gratitude, Sunungju gives Dong Hi a generous payment. Exhausted, Sunungju goes home in the morning, only to find her mom waiting for her. Sunungju is dead tired and just wants to sleep, but her mom's face tells her something's up. Apparently, Sunungju's mom saw the chairman's wife, her boss, at the golf course with her friend. She heard that the chairman's wife is looking for a girlfriend for her son. Being the gold digger that she is, Sunungju's mom immediately starts plotting. The thing is, Sunungju already knows Sungwook likes her, but she's not interested. She still can't get over Chayiel. Meanwhile, Dong Hi is making deliveries when her uncle spots her. He's sure he recognizes her, so he rushes home to tell his wife. She doesn't seem too happy about it. Turns out, she's still resentful because Dong Hi secretly took her grandson out of the house all those years ago. Even though she doesn't say it, she misses her terribly. 3 years ago, they were going to move because the rent was too high, but they stayed because they were afraid Dong Hi would come back and not be able to find them. So, even though the rent keeps going up, she's still waiting for her granddaughter to return. The next day, Jau Suk, her aunt, goes to Dong Hi's store. She sees a woman on a scooter and cuts her off and inspects the scooter. But finding someone like that is no easy task. When she is getting ready to leave, she trips and falls. Then a little boy rushes over and asks if she's hurt and helps her brush off the dirt. Touched by his kindness, she takes his hand and offers him money for candy. She turns to leave and overhears a familiar voice. She spins around and is so overwhelmed with years of longing that the two just fall into each other's arms, crying. So, Dong Hi, despite not finishing high school, catches the eye of a major company. Because she has incredible design talent, the director decides to give Dong Hi an interview. Sunungju doesn't know that this woman has been raising her son for the past 8 years, and that Dong Hi gave up her dream of going to college to raise him. Now, 8 years later, she finally has a chance to make her dreams come true, and she has also found her aunt. Jau Suk is so sorry for making Dong Hi give up her baby years ago. If it wasn't for that, the family would have never been separated. So she hugs her grandson and repeatedly apologizes to the boy. The three of them, Grandma, Dong Hi, and little Suho, head back home, all happy to be reunited. Everyone's hoping Dong Hi will move back in with the family, but Dong Hi's worried about being a burden. She wants to save up money to rent her place for her and Suho. Grandma Jau Suk is not having it. After all this time, she's not about to give up the chance to be with her granddaughter again. Back at the store, Dong Hi tells Old Man Jang everything. He's thrilled that the family is back together and encourages her to quit her job there and go after her dream. Dong Hi is super touched by his support. The next morning, she takes Suho to Grandma Jau Suk's place. Seeing his family, Suho is so happy. Dong Hi finally feels like she can breathe. That night, Dong Hi is meticulously preparing her portfolio for the interview. After several rounds of selections, Dong Hi's work is finally recognized, and Sunungju is impressed. When she hears that her work is approved, Dong Hi cries happy tears. Grandma Jau Suk happily takes out her savings and tells Dong Hi to buy some nice clothes, telling her to buy something expensive for once. So Dong Hi excitedly heads to the mall to shop. Meanwhile, Chayiel has wrapped up his work overseas and is about to go back to work at the company. By pure coincidence, Miss Kang takes him to the same mall, telling him to pick out some suitable clothes. Dong Hi, after picking out her clothes, realizes she left her phone in the fitting room. She rushes back and yanks open the curtain without knocking or asking, leading to an incredibly awkward moment. It's Dong Hi's first time experiencing something like this, catching Chayiel half-dressed. She freaks out, pushes him away, and apologizes like crazy. Chayiel realizes it's her again. The sales associate comes up and asks if she has found her phone. Then Chayiel, smirking, just reaches out and hands it to her. After he gets dressed, Chayiel calls her out for ditching him the other day. Dong Hi awkwardly explains that something really did come up. Chayiel keeps pressing, asking what it was. Dong Hi stumbles over her words, unable to explain. But she feels super guilty about not helping him find his camera, so she asks for his phone number to help him find his camera. To mess with Dong Hi, he doesn't tell her that he has already found the camera and gives her a fake phone number. After he gets home, he starts feeling anxious. Is she really going to try to find the driver? Meanwhile, Dong Hi goes to the convenience store to see the footage from that day. Mr. Kang couldn't see the license plate, but luckily, they could see the license plate of the car behind him. The owner says that the car parks there all the time. To find the owner, Dong Hi starts staking out the store, waiting for the car to show up. After several days of waiting, she finally gets the driver. She explains the whole situation, and luckily, the dashcam footage is still available, which makes Dong Hi incredibly happy. But after contacting the taxi driver, she learns that he has already returned the camera to Chayiel, so she immediately tries to call his number, asking him what's going on. But the number is non-existent. She can't believe she got played. The good news is that tomorrow she has her final interview. Grandma Jau Suk tells her to seize the opportunity, and above all, to never mention that she has a child, understands her worry, so immediately agrees to do it. Even though she doesn't have a high school education, her answers impress the interviewers. When they ask about her family background, she gets flustered. Remembering Grandma Jau Suk's instructions, she feels torn. The interviewer asks if she's uncomfortable answering, and they move on to the next question. After hesitating for a moment, she admits that she has a son. After working as a delivery person for 8 years, she's finally caught the eye of a major company and got an interview, but she has to lie to get the job. Before she left, Grandma Jau Suk told Dong Hi to never mention that she has a child, but she can't help but admit she has a son. Everyone at the interview panel is already feeling good about Dong Hi, but when they find out that this 25-year-old woman has an 8-year-old son, they are shocked. But once they understand the whole situation, they learn that she gave up college for her child. That detail hits Sunungju hard. 8 years ago, she callously abandoned her child for her career. Facing someone who made the opposite choice, Sunungju wonders if Dong Hi regrets her decision. Dong Hi's answer immediately makes Sunungju feel ashamed, but also incredibly impressed. Dong Hi dared to embrace what she wanted. Before Dong Hi leaves, Sunungju stops her and asks if her son would affect her work. Dong Hi's answer is the exact answer Sunungju was hoping to hear. Sungwook sees that Sunungju really likes Dong Hi, but because she doesn't have the right education, he's going to hire someone else. The final decision is still in his hands, so Dong Hi doesn't get the job. Meanwhile, Chayiel goes back to the scene of the accident. An old man comes up to him, and from him, he learns that the victim's sister is still looking for the hit-and-run driver. Hearing this, Chayiel feels a surge of anxiety. That night, he came home drunk. Seeing his grandson in such a state, Mr. Kang feels worried. But he has no idea that Chayiel is still haunted by the accident. Back in his room, Mr. Kang asks his wife to make Chayiel some honey tea. She brings the honey to his bedside. As she's about to leave, Chayiel calls her back and says that the victim's sister hasn't given up searching. That instantly throws her into a panic. The next morning, she warns Chayiel not to go back there. They can't turn back time, so he shouldn't pretend to have a conscience. She wants him to quietly work at the company for a year and then leave quickly. She tells him not to meddle, and every word from his aunt feels like a knife in Chayiel's heart. Meanwhile, Dong Hi is shocked when she gets the call to come to work. She thought all hope was lost. Turns out the company discovered that the other candidate's work was plagiarized, so they finally decided to hire Dong Hi. Sunungju is so excited about this. While helping Dong Hi with the onboarding process, Sunungju suddenly wants to look at the files of the other interns assigned to her team. When she sees Chayiel's resume, her eyes widen in disbelief. She can't believe how small the world is. Sunungju is so confident. Even though she is a divorcee and has a child, she is publicly chasing a younger man whom she has secretly loved for years. A few days ago, she found out that Chayiel was assigned to her team. Knowing he'd be coming to the office today, Sunungju woke up early to get ready, but Chayiel rejected her years ago, and all the makeup in the world won't change that. Even her mother notices something is off and feels confused as to why her daughter is wearing so much makeup. She assumes her daughter is trying to seduce the chairman's son and that she has gone crazy. Then, Sunungju actually sees Chayiel at the company gate. Just as she's about to go over and say hello, a colleague stops her. At that moment, Chayiel bumps into Dong Hi. They start arguing, asking each other why they're there. Chayiel says he works at the company. Just then, Sunungju comes running over to greet him. Chayiel is shocked to see her and can't believe Sunungju is his supervisor. Seeing that she has to work with someone she dislikes, Dong Hi starts complaining about her fate. Knowing that they're both assigned to the same team, Chayiel also feels awkward. On her first day, Dong Hi enthusiastically introduces herself. But when it's Chayiel's turn, his introduction is kind of a joke. He just says his name is Chayiel. That's it. Sunungju, seeing how awkward things are, jumps in to smooth things over for Chayiel. The truth is, she's the only one who knows about his connection to the chairman, but Chayiel doesn't want Mr. Kang to reveal his identity. Then, Sunungju asks the assistant to show them around the company. But when the assistant goes to the restroom, the two start arguing again. When the assistant comes back, he guesses that they have some kind of history. Accidentally overhearing their conversation, the assistant figures out there's some kind of bad blood between them, but they both quickly deny it. While the assistant is giving them the company tour, Chayiel is totally uninterested in the tour itself, but he enjoys messing with Dong Hi. Meanwhile, Sunungju knows he's in the library, and she happily goes to find him. She even proactively invites him to dinner, but Sungwook calls and invites Sunungju to a party, but she flatly refuses. That night after work, everyone suggests they all go out to celebrate and welcome the new members, but Chayiel refuses to give anyone face, and bluntly refuses. Seeing this, Dong Hi just can't understand how someone can be so weird. But Chayiel says that he hates eating and socializing. Dong Hi thinks that to work here, you should get along with everyone. He tells her that he doesn't want to work there, and that she can go socialize if she wants. Dong Hi is annoyed, asking how such a person could exist. This mother has put in so much effort to make it so that her daughter can smoothly enter a wealthy family. Not only has she lied about living in a mansion, but she's also bragged that her husband is running a real estate business overseas. The next day, an old classmate calls and announces that they're coming to visit, and she agrees in an unreserved manner. Turns out the chairman's son is into her daughter, so the chairman's wife wants to send someone to check out the family situation. But at this moment, Ms. Bang seems to have forgotten her own identity. After hanging up, she remembers that her family is bankrupt, but the words have already been said. So what can she do now? You have to give it to this woman. She thinks quickly. Just going around the house, she comes up with a plan. She sends the classmate the address, and the two go to the mansion where she used to live. Seeing Ms. Bang living in such a luxurious mansion, the woman is clearly impressed. As the other woman is about to go inside, Bang quickly stops her, lying that her house is under renovation. So she invited her out to eat first. Seeing that Ms. Bang is constantly making excuses to avoid it, the woman becomes suspicious. At that moment, she suddenly has an idea. She calls the chairman's family's private driver, telling him to greet her friend. The driver doesn't understand what she is talking about, but as she asks him to greet the woman, he is a bit bewildered, but he also does. He doesn't know what she is doing, and she pretends to have a phone call, then pretends to talk to her husband in front of her classmate. The classmate is convinced. Afterwards, the woman reports back to Ms. Choi about the situation and is happy when hearing that Sunungju's mother is in the same situation as them. Meanwhile, Sungwook is sulking. He planned to ask Sunungju out to dinner, but she refused so she could have coffee with Chayiel. He is very upset about this. Even though Mrs. Choi wants to know how far his relationship with Sunungju has progressed, Sungwook doesn't want to talk about it. After Chayiel gets home, he immediately warns Chayiel not to assume he can do whatever he wants in the company just because he's his brother. Chayiel guesses that he's angry about Sunungju, so he doesn't bother explaining. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mom is racking her brain. Although she temporarily fooled the chairman's wife, the truth will come out sooner or later. At this time, her daughter suddenly comes home with a beaming face. She thought she was home late because she was out to dinner with Sungwook, but when she said she went out to eat with a friend, her mom scolded her for wasting time with other people. Seeing that she's about to lose her golden son-in-law, the mother is very worried. Sunungju says that she and Sungwook are just colleagues, but her mom thinks that Sungwook is such a good match that her daughter is probably just insecure because she has a child. Hearing that, Sunungju explodes in anger, screaming at her mom and denying that she ever had a child. She kicks her mom out, so Sunungju has rejected this part of her and completely refuses to acknowledge that she had a child. The enemy that Dong Hi has been searching for 8 years turns out to be her boss. But she has no idea that the man in front of her is the one who drove the car that killed her brother all those years ago. She's actually grateful to him for allowing her to work at the company, but Sungwook is totally ignoring her, making Dong Hi feel awkward. Chayiel doesn't like his attitude and immediately snaps back, but Dong Hi thinks he's crazy. On her first day, he's already talking to the boss like that. Thinking about it, she realizes Chayiel is sticking up for her, and since she has to work with him every day, she doesn't want to create a tense relationship. So she decides to try to smooth things over with Chayiel, but his attitude just makes her even angrier. At a meeting, Sunungju asks Dong Hi to get some company documents from recent years. Dong Hi accidentally discovers that last year's documents haven't been sorted, so this task is assigned to her and Chayiel. But when Chayiel sees the pile of documents, he immediately gets a headache, blaming Dong Hi for talking too much and creating work for him. Dong Hi says if he doesn't want to do it, he can leave, but he can't disobey his boss. Since it's not work that he enjoys, Chayiel isn't enthusiastic about it. While Dong Hi goes to get coffee, he comes up with a plan. Dong Hi comes back to find the documents she just sorted have been taken by Chayiel. So, the two start fighting over them, but how can a delicate woman beat a strong man? Dong Hi angrily knocks over a box, accidentally hitting Chayiel in the eye. Dong Hi is scared and asks if the injury is serious. This gives Chayiel a chance to slack off, pretending it's very serious. Dong Hi is frightened and tells him to go to the hospital, and she'll work overtime to finish the work. Although the injury is minor, Chayiel immediately seizes the opportunity, happy that he doesn't have to work. After finishing all the documents, it's the next morning. Back home, she worries and sends a message to Chayiel. Seeing the message, he pretends to be sick again, then sends her a picture showing how badly he was injured. Dong Hi rushes out to buy medicine for himself. Chayiel didn't expect this girl to be so kind and pretends he can't see where to make the coffee. Dong Hi falls for it and tells him to leave it to her. Chayiel can't help but turn around and grin, saying today's coffee is amazing. Meanwhile, Sungwook asks Sunungju to meet him. He confidently confesses his feelings, saying that because all the girls around him like him, he thinks Sunungju will feel lucky to be noticed by him. But her answer is like a slap in the face. She wouldn't have come if she'd known he was going to say these things. She apologizes and gets up to leave, but Sungwook asks her if he's not attractive. Sunungju says it's not that. They're just not compatible. Sungwook confidently confesses his feelings to Sunungju, but is rejected miserably, which makes an arrogant person like him feel humiliated. He doesn't understand how someone handsome and rich like him is inferior to some random employee. But Sungwook doesn't know that the person Sunungju loves is his close cousin. Being rejected by a woman for the first time makes him feel terrible. The next day, the atmosphere between the two is very awkward at the meeting. Sunwook decides to use work to get revenge, intentionally making things difficult for Sunungju. She can't believe he's being so petty. After going back, she announces the task that the leader has just assigned to everyone, asking her subordinates to work overtime to complete it. Knowing that this task is difficult, Dong Hi proactively offers to work with everyone. The other colleagues are thrilled with her help and tell her to ask if she doesn't understand something. Chayiel shakes his head, thinking she's butting into things that aren't her business. Seeing that Sunungju is in a bad mood, Chayiel knows she must have just been scolded by the higher-ups, so he goes to the break room to comfort her. After all these years, only when she sees Chayiel does she have a bright smile. Before leaving work, Chayiel sees that Dong Hi is frustrated because she can't find a photo, so he proactively picks a suitable website for her. Seeing Chayiel leave work, Sunungju immediately follows him. Seeing that his eyes are bothering him, she proactively offers to drive him home. Chayiel casually gives her the car keys. On the way home, he falls asleep in the car from the pain medication. Gazing at the man she's been secretly in love with for years, Sunungju can't help but lean in to kiss him. But at the crucial moment, Chayiel suddenly wakes up. He tells her to take a taxi home, but she refuses. On the way home, Sunwook happens to see her from afar. Knowing that his mother has investigated Sunungju's family situation, he asks if she also lives in this area. Seeing this, Miss Choi also guesses that something must have happened between the two of them. Could it be that she doesn't like her son? Sunwook asks his mother why she thinks that. Knowing Sunungju doesn't like her son makes her feel strange. A small-time employee dare refuse the chairman's son? So she goes to find her husband, telling him to fire Sunungju immediately, or her son's self-esteem will be damaged while working at the company. After understanding the reason, Chairman Kang feels this is absurd and tells his wife to stop interfering in their children's private lives. Hearing that his son is heartbroken from being rejected, the chairman comforts him, saying that heartache is unavoidable, so don't hold it in your heart. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mom, wanting her daughter to marry into a wealthy family, discusses renting a mansion with her. Sunungju feels her mom is insane and finally says that she rejected Sunwook, so she should stop wasting time on this. Her mom refuses, saying she will never give up this opportunity. This rural girl has suffered so much, coming to the city alone before graduating high school, working as a delivery person for 8 long years, even raising her brother's child. She finally gets to work for a big company, only to be constantly bossed around by her colleagues. But no matter what happens, she's always strong, facing difficulties head-on and never backing down, even staying up all night to finish the work assigned by her boss. When she submits her work to Representative Kim, he is shocked and can't believe that an intern can create such an outstanding piece. Seeing her work recognized, Dong Hi feels thrilled. But Representative Kim waits for Dong Hi to leave and takes credit for her work, submitting it to the team leader. Seeing this outrageous behavior, Chayiel feels outraged. At lunch, when everyone is preparing to go to the supermarket for research, while waiting for the elevator, Chayiel warns Dong Hi not to be so trusting, but she doesn't understand what he means. Chayiel tells her that Representative Kim stole her work, which Dong Hi finds hard to believe. Although she's sad, with her kind nature, Dong Hi doesn't want to dwell on it. After all, everyone is working hard for the company's efficiency. The success of this project is thanks to Chayiel for providing the great photos, and she also sees a photo of Busan among those works. Dong Hi asks Chayiel when he went to Busan. Hearing this location, Chayiel is shaken. And Dong Hi can't believe that on the night of her brother's accident, Chayiel was in the passenger seat. Even though he's been running from it for years, this continues to haunt him. Remembering that night, Chayiel feels terrible. For years, he's only been able to cope by taking medication to calm himself down. After work that night, Sunungju sees Chayiel sleeping in the car and wonders why he didn't come to work. But Chayiel explains vaguely and hesitantly, then takes Sunungju to a bar to confide in her that he has a painful memory. He has no idea that the man they killed that night was Sunungju's husband. After her husband died, Sunungju abandoned her newborn child, and that memory is a stain she can't erase. That night, Sunungju drives the drunk Chayiel home. Chayiel, barely conscious, accidentally falls on Sunungju. As she's about to embrace him, he suddenly pushes her away, then thanks her for driving him home. Watching the man she loves walk away, Sunungju feels a sharp, indescribable pain in her heart. The next day, she prepares to go out alone to do market research. Knowing the roads are difficult, the assistant offers to go with her, but Sunungju flatly refuses. But when she steps out of the gate, she sees Chayiel parked nearby. Meanwhile, Sunwook is still wondering why Sunungju rejected him. Could it be that she likes another man? The more he thinks about it, the more frustrated he gets. He goes out for some air and happens to see Sunungju and Chayiel together. Seeing the woman he likes on a date with his cousin, Sunwook is furious. He grabs Sunungju's hand and pulls her out of the restaurant, but the one she likes isn't him. Chayiel stands up and warns his brother not to bother Sunungju anymore. But Sunwook is afraid that Sunungju is being stolen by his cousin. Seeing Sunwook's attitude, Sunungju feels angry and quickly pulls Chayiel away. The next day, Sunwook calls Sunungju into his office, asking if the reason she rejected him is because of Chayiel. At this point, Sunungju doesn't want to keep hiding it and tells him everything, admitting that she has secretly loved Chayiel for 10 years. Hearing Sunungju say these words, Sunwook feels crushed. He already disliked Chayiel. Now, knowing the woman he likes has been in love with his cousin, Sunwook is even more jealous. At this time, the secretary comes to inform him that he needs to go to an important meeting, but Sunwook is in no mood to go to the meeting. That night, after work, Dong Hi goes to eat with Chayiel. Seeing this odd couple working things out to be able to sit down and eat, will everyone find it strange? As it turns out, a few days ago, after visiting Uncle Jang, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, Uncle Jang enthusiastically gave her a box of kimchi. As she was about to leave, she bumped into Chayiel, who was at Uncle Jang's place to eat. It was at that time that the two found out that each other was the person Uncle Jang often mentioned. Knowing that both were close to Uncle Jang, they decided to resolve their issues to make things more comfortable for Uncle Jang. Chayiel picked a high-end restaurant so Dong Hi could have the opportunity to treat him. Seeing the expensive prices, Dong Hi hesitates, but Chayiel casually picks the most expensive dish, while Dong Hi chooses the cheapest pasta. When the server brings the pasta, Chayiel says he suddenly feels like having pasta and wants to switch with her. Dong Hi complains that if he had wanted pasta, he should have ordered it at the beginning. Why did he order an expensive steak? Such a waste. Seeing her cute expression, Chayiel can't help but laugh. After they finish eating, they happily leave. When they go to pay, they find out Chayiel has already paid for it. Meanwhile, Mrs. Choi is furious to see her son come home drunk. At this time, Chayiel also returns. Seeing Chayiel helping him, Sung-wook suddenly gets angry and blames everything on him. Chayiel, who has put up with his brother for so many years, can't take it anymore. As Sung-wook prepares to hit his cousin, Mr. Kang shouts loudly. Mrs. Choi hurries over to protect Sung-wook, then helps her son up to his room. But Sung-wook, who is drunk, pushes her away, causing her to fall. Seeing his son acting so disgracefully, Mr. Kang immediately slaps Sung-wook across the face. Because Sung-wook acted impulsively, he missed the important meeting today, causing serious losses for the company. Mr. Kang guesses this must be related to Sunungju, and Sung-wook doesn't deny it, also confirming that he will not give up on Sunungju, an action that Mr. Kang finds incredibly disappointing. Seeing that the situation is unstable, Mrs. Choi nervously tells Chayiel to take Sung-wook back to his room. Then she goes to ask Chayiel when he will return overseas. Chayiel asks his aunt what he did wrong. She tells him his very existence is a mistake. Talk about a con artist meeting her match, you don't want to miss this part. To prevent her son from dating a subordinate, she quietly meets with and demands that Sunungju leave the company. But our Sunungju is not one to listen. She agrees without hesitation, saying she's planning to leave the company soon anyway. Seeing her be so cooperative surprises Mrs. Choi. She hasn't even brought out the envelope yet. Sunungju asks if she won't regret asking her to write a resignation letter. Hearing this, Mrs. Choi feels Sunungju is too confident, but Sunungju just smiles and says nothing. The next day, Sunungju actually submits her resignation letter. This action is really unexpected and catches Sung-wook completely by surprise. He thinks it must be because he's been bothering her so much that she's making this decision, then angrily tears up the resignation letter and at the same time says that he will never agree to let her leave the company. Of course, everything is within Sunungju's control. Then Sung-wook rushes after her. Hearing the footsteps, Sunungju takes out her phone and calls Mrs. Choi, informing her that she has submitted her resignation letter and agrees not to tell anyone that she made her do it. On the other end of the phone, Mrs. Choi hears this and feels that this girl is so simple. Now Sung-wook shows up and asks who she's talking to. He guesses the caller must be his mother. Sunungju pretends to deny it, but Sung-wook immediately snatches the phone and discovers that it is indeed his mother's number. At this time, he understands the reason why Sunungju wants to resign and furiously goes home to confront his mother, asking why she did this. Choi believes that only when Sunungju leaves the company can her son let go of her, but Sung-wook angrily says that the more she does this, the more he can't let go, and if his father finds out about this, he definitely won't let it go. Hearing this, Mrs. Choi feels very stressed. Then Sung-wook goes to the company to apologize to Sunungju. At this moment, the chairman suddenly pushes the door open and comes in. The chairman feels extremely angry knowing what his wife has done. And so, Sunungju not only doesn't have to leave the company, but also uses Chairman Kang to vent some of her anger. The whole family is being played by her. After getting off work, Chayiel is still waiting for Sunungju. Seeing his gloomy expression, Sunungju asks him what happened. It turns out that Sung-wook told Chayiel that Sunungju rejected his feelings because she likes him, so Chayiel wants to confirm if this is true. Hearing this, Sunungju is immediately stunned. Chayiel explains that he only sees her as a friend, and he thought that after so many years, Sunungju had given up on that unrequited love. Seeing Chayiel's cold expression, Sunungju knows she can't admit the truth but must retreat strategically. Otherwise, she won't be able to be close to him in the future. She can only explain that it's because she doesn't like Sung-wook, and she's only doing this to make him give up hope, and that she has already let go of her feelings for him. The male lead, as always, is so simple-minded that he actually believes her. Although she successfully eases the awkward atmosphere, she feels very hurt inside. Dong Hi reaches out for the clothes on the rack, accidentally causing them to fall. At the dangerous moment, Chayiel appears and saves her. As their eyes meet, the atmosphere becomes. Sunungju walks by and happens to see this scene. Having secretly loved Chayiel for so many years, she has never been looked at by him with that kind of gaze. Seeds of jealousy begin to sprout. Sunungju's showing up was so ill-timed and completely ruined the moment, making them both awkward. And innocent Dong Hi had no idea that she was about to suffer through days of torture and torment from this woman. Even when she tries to be helpful, it's just seen as an unnecessary action in Sunungju's eyes, which makes Chayiel very dissatisfied with Sunungju. Seeing Chayiel stick up for Dong Hi makes Sunungju even more jealous. But Chayiel doesn't know that the more he defends her, the more difficult he's making things for Dong Hi. Meanwhile, Dong Hi also feels really wronged. When she's in the elevator with Sung-wook, Sungwook asks if something happened between her and Sunungju. Dong Hi says that Sunungju warned her not to get close to Chayiel. Hearing this, Sungwook suddenly understands everything, and even kindly reminds Dong Hi that if she wants to work peacefully under Sunungju, it's best not to get close to Chayiel. At this point, Dong Hi is shocked, with her eyes wide, realizing that Sunungju definitely likes Chayiel. After getting out of the elevator, she's still dazed and stands there blankly. Chayiel happens to step out of the elevator and is about to ask her what's up, but as soon as she sees him, Dong Hi runs away like she's seen a ghost. Chayiel is left standing there, feeling confused and thinking she's acting strangely. That night, Sungwook comes home, and his parents are waiting in the living room, calling him over to ask how he and Sunungju are going to resolve things. His father says that if he doesn't give up on Sunungju, he'll transfer her to another department and won't let him inherit the company. To get the family fortune, Sungwook decides to listen to his parents. The next day, at the company, Dong Hi starts avoiding Chayiel, seeing him like he's a monster. Dong Hi's change makes him feel confused, but she can't avoid being nitpicked and deliberately found fault with by Sunungju. Sunungju comes up to Dong Hi and asks what she's doing, and Dong Hi nervously covers her design. It turns out that interns don't have the right to design jackets, and this work is originally Representative Kim's, who asked Dong Hi to help her. After being discovered by Sunungju, she immediately flies into a rage. Representative Kim doesn't avoid the storm either, and is scolded terribly by Sunungju. But this isn't something to be so angry about. Dong Hi must have offended her. Dong Hi knows Sunungju is making trouble for her because of Chayiel, but she doesn't know how to explain it. Sunungju sees Dong Hi stammering and tells her to just say what's on her mind, but Dong Hi actually says that she and Chayiel are just ordinary friends. This comment causes Sunungju to feel insulted, and she angrily lectures Dong Hi, having just started working. She's already offended and is being suppressed by her superior. And this simple girl even uses half of her salary to buy a gift for her. But Sunungju not only doesn't appreciate it, but also throws her gift into the trash at the company. A few days ago, Dong Hi happily received her first month's salary, and since she had the opportunity to work at the company because of Sunungju's recommendation, she wanted to buy Sunungju a gift as a thank you, but didn't know what Dong Hi liked. One evening after work, Chayiel is already waiting for her at the door. As soon as they meet, he says that he knows what Sunungju likes. This makes Dong Hi very happy, so the two go together to the mall to pick out a perfume for Sunungju. Chayiel sprays the perfume on Dong Hi's wrist and asks if she likes the scent. Dong Hi sniffs it and says it's really nice. Chayiel also wants to smell it and then holds Dong Hi's hand and sniffs it. Dong Hi suddenly feels nervous. At this time, Sungwook also happens to be here. He sees them laughing and talking happily, but as he prepares to leave, he sees Sunungju walking this way. He quickly blocks her, afraid that she'll be hurt and heartbroken if she sees them, but with such a short distance, how can she not see? The next day, Dong Hi brings the perfume to Sunungju. She suddenly remembers that yesterday Chayiel asked her if she liked perfume, and what girl doesn't like perfume? At this point, Sunungju understands everything. Looking at the card Dong Hi wrote, Sunungju gets even angrier and throws the perfume into the trash, but Representative Kim picks it up. Chayiel sees this and asks Sunungju why she threw Dong Hi's gift in the trash. Seeing Representative Kim pick up the perfume, she awkwardly explains that she forgot it in the bathroom. Although uncomfortable, Dong Hi still believes Sunungju wouldn't do that. Soon after, Chayiel seeks out Sunungju to confirm things. Sunungju puts on an act, saying, "How could I throw away Dong Hi's gift?" Actually, Chayiel doesn't believe she could do something like that either, but doesn't realize that Sunungju is no longer the kind, virtuous girl she used to be. In the bathroom, Dong Hi accidentally bumps into the cleaning lady. Dong Hi quickly apologizes and sits down to help her pick up the trash, accidentally seeing a familiar card. Sunungju threw the gift from Dong Hi in the trash, and now Dong Hi knows. She is deeply disappointed. That evening after work, she finally couldn't hold back and asked Sunungju why she threw away her gift. Sunungju indifferently says that she doesn't like it. Dong Hi asks what she doesn't like, her or the gift? Unexpectedly, Chayiel overhears this conversation. He takes Sunungju to the rooftop to talk. Chayiel can't believe she could do something like this. But Sunungju says it's because she saw him with Dong Hi last night. She says she originally planned to invite him to dinner, but he rejected her, and seeing him with another girl made her very uncomfortable. Chayiel gets angry, saying she's being unreasonable, and this isn't an excuse to throw away Dong Hi's gift. Sunungju doesn't understand why he cares so much about Dong Hi. She asks if he likes Dong Hi, and that's why he's acting like this. This question makes Chayiel freeze, suddenly flustered, repeatedly denying it. But women's intuition is very accurate. That night, Chayiel thoughtfully reflects on Sunungju's words. He feels very conflicted, not knowing what his feelings for Dong Hi are. The next day, he goes to see Uncle Jang to talk. He wants to ask him what Dong Hi likes because after getting her first paycheck, she bought him a gift. But he doesn't know what gift to give her in return. Uncle Jang says that Dong Hi once told him that after her phone broke, she lost all the photos of her grandmother, so he should give her a photo of her grandmother. She would definitely like it. These words immediately remind Chayiel that before her grandmother died, he went to Busan and took pictures of her grandmother, and that photo has always been on his computer. The next day, he brings Dong Hi a composite photo of her sitting with her grandmother. The moment she sees the photo, she's immediately shocked and speechless. Chayiel asks if she likes it. She says she loves it and is very thankful. The moment he sees Dong Hi smile, Chayiel is helplessly drawn into love, and he asks himself if he likes the girl in front of him. Chayiel is touched by her, and one of her questions makes him confused. He tries to snap out of it, but he hears a familiar voice. It's too late to be rational. He is captivated by her smile and falls in love at first sight. At lunch, seeing her sitting alone, he plans to bring his tray over and sit with her, but feels embarrassed. He sits at the table across from her instead. Then, a male colleague unhesitatingly sits down in that spot, making Chayiel feel regretful. Then, he sees Dong Hi smiling and feeding the colleague, and he angrily slams his chopsticks on the table, startling the entire dining hall. Representative Kim asks what he's doing, thinking the food today is bad, and that's why he's angry. But he had already drunk a whole jar of vinegar, so how could he have an appetite to eat? Even when Mr. Kang tries to talk to him, he can't concentrate. Meanwhile, Sunungju gives Sungwook Chayiel and Dong Hi's internship reports. After reviewing them, Sungwook asks Sunungju if she's been a bit harsh in her assessment of Dong Hi, because he also recognizes Dong Hi's ability, but she says Dong Hi once asked to leave early to attend her child's school activity. Sungwook knows that Dong Hi had Sunungju's permission before leaving the company that time, but Sunungju still justifies her petty actions of using personal matters for revenge. Sungwook sarcastically says it seems Dong Hi is truly hated by Sunungju. Sunungju understands the hidden meaning in Sungwook's words. He asks her why she's so insecure, using this underhanded way to throw stones at her rival. Wouldn't it be better to bravely express herself to Chayiel? These words make Sunungju speechless. Sungwook agrees with Sunungju that if Dong Hi continues to underperform in 2 months, the company will automatically terminate her contract. Back in her office, Sunungju starts to consider Sungwook's words. If she continues like this, not only will she not get Chayiel, but she'll become a dirty, manipulative woman in everyone's eyes. So she decides to ask Chayiel out to confess her feelings for him. But at this point, Chayiel is going crazy, his head full of Dong Hi's image. The first time he met her and was mistaken for a thief, the first time he made her angry, and the first time he was drawn to her lively personality. As Sunungju prepares to confess, saying she has something to tell him, he speaks first, saying that he seems to like Dong Hi. The wealthy young master Chayiel prepares to confess to the poor girl Dong Hi, but one piece of information makes him give up on that intention. Sunungju tells him that Dong Hi has a child. He doesn't believe her, asking Sunungju who has a child. Sunungju says it's Dong Hi. Chayiel thinks Sunungju is talking nonsense. How could Dong Hi have a child? She's so young. To ruin things for Dong Hi and Chayiel, she reveals that Dong Hi is a single mother. Seeing Sunungju's serious expression, like she's not joking, Chayiel is at a loss. But Sunungju has no idea that Dong Hi's child is the child she heartlessly abandoned that year. Meanwhile, Dong Hi has arrived at the meeting point but hasn't seen Chayiel for a long time. Worrying that something happened to him, she texts him, but Chayiel says he has something urgent and can't make it to the meeting point. So, Dong Hi stood up, thinking that revealing Dong Hi's secret would make her feel better. Sunungju realizes things aren't as she imagined. A sense of guilt overwhelms her, making her feel suffocated. Hearing Sunungju's confession, Sungwook can only offer a few words of comfort. When he gets home, Chayiel tosses and turns, unable to sleep, not knowing whether to find Dong Hi to confirm this or not. The next day, when he sees Dong Hi, he no longer has his usual enthusiasm. Seeing Chayiel's cold attitude towards Dong Hi, Sunungju feels that what she did was indeed the right thing. But Chayiel feels that his attitude towards Dong Hi is a bit too much. Dong Hi is also annoyed by his unusual attitude. That evening, after work, she hurried to find Chayiel, but he didn't want to explain to her, which really annoyed her. But with Dong Hi's personality, she needs to know what she did wrong, so she resolutely gets into Chayiel's car. Then, the two go to the riverside. Dong Hi asks him why he didn't come last night. He can't help but ask her why she hid the fact that she had a child. At this point, Dong Hi understands why he suddenly changed 180 degrees. She understands his feelings, but doesn't understand why he's so angry. Seeing her leave, he asks if she really doesn't know why he's angry. Dong Hi gets annoyed and asks who knows why he's suddenly going crazy. Chayiel excitedly says it's because he likes her. He really likes her. Chayiel is moved by a girl for the first time, but he didn't expect this unmarried girl to have a child, which makes him feel like he's falling into a bottomless pit. This news quickly spread throughout the company. Gossip-loving Representative Kim asked who the baby's father was, but Dong Hi didn't want to mention it. As she struggled to answer, Chayiel angrily reminded her not to gossip about other people's business all the time. Colleagues also felt that her actions were a bit too much, and praised Dong Hi for being able to raise a child alone, saying that it's better than those who heartlessly abandon their children. They feel that she is really doing a great thing for the world compared to these other women. Hearing this, someone felt guilty, seeming that bad people are afraid of retribution. Colleague Han Min asked her if it was difficult to raise a child alone. Dong Hi smiled, saying that she was lucky to have Uncle Jang's help over the years, which is how she managed to get through it. This comment made Chayiel suddenly realize that the person who understands Dong Hi the most is Uncle Jang. So, that evening, he goes to Uncle Jang's restaurant to drink. Uncle Jang knew immediately that he was troubled and asked Chayiel what was going on. He said he liked Dong Hi. Hearing this, Uncle Jang felt very happy. If Dong Hi could marry him, she would definitely be very happy. But Chayiel was still hesitant about the fact that Dong Hi had a child. Uncle Jang understood his thoughts, but also knew that Dong Hi would rather die than reveal this secret. Under Chayiel's questioning, he finally betrayed Dong Hi, revealing the truth about the child, saying that the child is the son of her deceased brother, and she doesn't want him to know because she knows it would hurt him, so she can't bring herself to tell him. Knowing the truth, Chayiel felt both relieved and sorry for her, saying how she was so young and had to bear such a heavy responsibility, and Dong Hi must have suffered a lot of grievances. Unexpectedly, the news that Dong Hi had a child was distorted and spread to the chairman, and they said that the child's father was a married man, so he asked Sunungju to investigate this matter thoroughly. If Dong Hi's character is really that bad, the company will definitely not keep this person. Before leaving, Sunwook told Sunungju to investigate this matter, and he didn't want her to continue to throw stones. Back in the office, she continued to question Dong Hi. Dong Hi didn't expect people to slander her to this extent. Sunungju hoped she could tell the truth, who the child's father was. If she didn't explain this clearly, the company would definitely terminate her contract. Dong Hi wrung her hands, not knowing what to do. Dong Hi has been raising her brother's child by herself. To take care of her nephew, she not only gave up college, but is also about to give up both love and her current job. Poor Dong Hi is being rumored to be having an affair with a married man. To protect her nephew from being hurt, she doesn't want to reveal his identity, but if she doesn't explain clearly, she'll be fired by the company. This puts her in a dilemma. Hearing that Dong Hi has been slandered, Chayiel is very angry. He finds Dong Hi and sees her with tears streaming down her face, and can't help but feel sorry for her, and wants her to explain this. But Dong Hi would rather be fired than reveal the truth. Chayiel stops her, asking why it's so difficult to say this. Hearing this, she realizes that he already knows her nephew's identity, and guesses that Uncle Jang must have revealed it to him. Seeing Dong Hi's firm attitude, he understands her feelings and worries, so he goes to find Sunwook, begging his cousin to keep Dong Hi. Sunwook says that if Dong Hi doesn't actively clarify this matter, he can't help. Mrs. Choi, listening outside the door, learns about this. Knowing that Chayiel likes a single mother, she tells her son that she must try to keep Dong Hi. If Chayiel really intends to marry someone like that, it would be beneficial for Sunwook to inherit the company. So, the family of three takes turns speaking up for Dong Hi to the chairman. Even the annoying Mrs. Choi is now speaking up for Dong Hi, so Chairman Kang decides to keep her on and observe her for a while before deciding. Meanwhile, Himchan is often bullied, his friends saying he's a bastard. Although very sad, the understanding boy doesn't tell his mother. Sunwook earnestly asks Sunungju to marry him, saying it's okay to fall in love after marriage. Seeing that she's not saying anything, he asks if she's going to reject him again. Sunungju replies, of course not, then agrees to marry Sunwook. Aside from the bad deed, Sunwook is truly devoted. Sunungju decides to marry Sunwook, not knowing that this man is the driver who killed her husband in a hit-and-run 8 years ago. And Sunwook also doesn't know that the girl who makes his heart flutter has been married, and has an 8-year-old son. The parents do not agree with their son marrying Sunungju, especially Mrs. Choi, who dislikes this scheming daughter-in-law. Although Sunwook does everything his mother tells him, even his mother can't stop him this time. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mother is overjoyed. She never thought that her daughter, who was originally unwilling to marry Sunwook, would suddenly agree, which made her feel very confused, but a more painful thing is waiting for her in the future. Back then, to help her daughter successfully marry into a rich family, she lied about living in a luxurious mansion, and that her husband opened a resort overseas. Sunungju didn't expect her mother to cause so much trouble for her. Now, Mrs. Choi is no fool. She knows that Sunwook's family will secretly investigate and follow them. Now the fire has grown too big, it can only be relied upon that Sunungju can think of a solution. Dong Hi noticed that her son has been having many secrets lately, and that he hopes to have a complete family with both a mother and a father. Hearing this, Dong Hi felt very surprised. Himchan naively said that if he had a father, then his mother wouldn't have to work so hard, and he would have someone to take him to school so that the other children wouldn't tease him about not having a father. Dong Hi thought that she had been busy working and didn't pay attention to his feelings. She felt very self-reproachful, but the boy didn't know that his mother and uncle had a big argument. After being influenced by Sunungju's words, she thought that Chayiel had such good conditions. How could he like her? Perhaps the truth is like what Sunungju said. He just feels sorry for her. Chayiel was speechless, asking if she believed what Sunungju said. She felt sorry that he liked being with her or something. But the reason behind it is that Dong Hi has always felt that she's not good enough for him because the two people don't come from the same world. Therefore, Dong Hi felt that they would not have a good result. Every word Dong Hi says is like a knife stabbing deep into Chayiel's heart. But after work, he still waits for her, and he unexpectedly reveals a secret that he had been hiding for a long time. Chayiel lost his parents when he was 9 years old, and he was adopted by his aunt and uncle's family. Only his uncle truly loved him. His aunt did not agree to the adoption from the start, so she has always disliked him. He said that he likes Dong Hi because he likes who she is, likes her loving heart, the love she has for her brother, for her grandmother. He likes people like that, and he also wants a little of that love. He asked if she could give him a little bit of that love. He begged her to share some, to look at him. Dong Hi was shocked to learn that the guy who was pursuing her was the chairman's cousin, because their lives are two parallel lines, so she does not intend to accept this feeling. Chayiel revealed that he was adopted just to pursue her, which made Dong Hi feel very surprised. It turns out that the wealthy young master has the same fate as her. It can be seen that this is also an effective flirting technique, and this way, the distance between the two has been shortened by one step. Before leaving, the two were reluctant to part, with no one wanting to go home first, smiling from ear to ear. Chayiel hoped that he could take Himchan out to play tomorrow, but Dong Hi was afraid that everyone would misunderstand their relationship. Chayiel guarantees that he will definitely not let that happen. And so, Dong Hi happily accepted, making Chayiel feel overjoyed. Before leaving, he even ran back and peeked at her. Himchan knew the news and couldn't hide his excitement, preparing his clothes to wear for tomorrow's outing from early in the morning. On this day that would have been ordinary for them, it had turned into something amazing. On this day, which was filled with something great, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, especially for Himchan, as it changed the dynamics of his relationship with both his mother and Chayiel, who was someone who wanted to be like his father. On this side, just as the sun rose, Chayiel woke up to prepare food for the boy, which means we can see that he is a considerate man. As Uncle Zhang said, she will certainly be happy if she marries him. The three people, like a family, cycled together in the park, and Chayiel took a lot of photos of the mother and son. Perhaps in their dark lives they have never felt as happy as today. Himchan happily ate the food prepared by Uncle Chayiel, and at this moment he seemed to feel a father's love. On the other side, Himchan's birth mother was with a new man, unaware that Mrs. Choi had investigated her family situation. What a luxurious villa, what a noble lady, all lies. This information made Chairman Kang very surprised. And then Mrs. Choi sent a message to Sunungju exposing her true face, making Sunungju feel uneasy and fearful, and she hurriedly deleted the message. At this moment, Sungwook happened to arrive, and he took out a ring to propose to her. Sunungju had no choice but to take the initiative to reveal her identity before it was too late, so that the other person would not expect that her mother could be so dishonest. Seeing Sungwook's expression, Sunungju resolutely rejected the marriage proposal, but Sungwook has been blinded by love, so no matter what happens, he cannot let her go, and even promised to resolve this matter quickly, and also wants to confirm whether Sunungju is hiding anything else from him. And that question immediately made her stop. Sungwook asked again, and she quickly came back to reality and replied, "There is really nothing else." Sungwook proposed to her again, and hearing that, Sunungju did not expect that Sungwook loved her so deeply. To be able to marry into a rich family, the scheming woman can do anything. She knelt in front of Mr. Kang, begging him to accept her. In fact, Chairman Kang did not dislike this girl. It was just that Sunungju's mother had lied to them, which was unacceptable. Although this matter was her mother's fault, Sunungju still hoped that Chairman Kang would give her a chance, and seeing Sunungju's persistence, Chairman Kang had no choice but to leave helplessly. Unexpectedly, the chairman was so firm, so Sunungju knelt there for a whole day, until Chairman Kang returned and saw her still kneeling there, and then called his son to come and resolve it. Seeing the person he loved kneeling on the ground, Sungwook thought something had happened. Sunungju told him that she was trying to beg for Chairman Kang's forgiveness. Sungwook was distressed and hurried to help her up, but Sunungju prepared to put on an act. Even so, the chairman remained cold and unresponsive. Sungwook only had to take her out. Although Chairman Kang could not bear to see this scene, this was his son's lifelong matter, so he had to consider it carefully. Sungwook didn't expect Sunungju to use this method to beg his father. She calmly said that she wanted to go through the difficulties of love with him, and this statement made Sungwook very moved and fell into her trap. He immediately promised that he would definitely handle this matter, and told her to just sit and wait for his good news. Returning home in the evening, Chairman Kang told his wife about today's events, but his wife still firmly refused. He asked again if, in the end, his son still couldn't let go of Sunungju and abandon the company to choose Sunungju. What would she do? She knew her son well. He would never do that stupid thing, and also said that she had a way of making her son give up Sunungju immediately. It doesn't sound reliable. At this moment, Sungwook just happened to return, and unexpectedly, the first sentence that came out made Mrs. Choi feel betrayed. She decided to take action, to drive Sunungju away, falsely accusing her of accepting bribes, almost ruining her reputation, but Sungwook did not believe that Sunungju could do something like this. Sure enough, he found out that the person behind the scenes was his mother. She begged her son not to tell his father about this, otherwise she would be kicked out of the house. The chairman felt that the mother and son were acting secretively, so he guessed that they must be hiding something from him. Under his questioning, Sungwook revealed that Sunungju had been framed back then, turning against his mother for the sake of a girl. Compared to Miss Choi's actions, Sunungju's mother's lies were nothing. The chairman asked his wife if she really did that, and Mrs. Choi was flustered, not knowing how to respond. Sungwook then told his parents that if he and Sunungju got married, he would give up his current position, and Mrs. Choi was very angry, saying, "How dare you do that?" The next morning, Dong Hi saw that a button had fallen off Chayel's sleeve, so she helped him sew it back on. Chayiel stared blankly at her, making her nervous. She accidentally pricked her finger, and Chayiel quickly took a tissue to stop the bleeding, a gesture that made her very embarrassed, blaming him for staring at her. She said that this was all his fault for looking at her so intensely that she pricked herself. He could only say that, "It's good I never left because I would not have the chance for any more up-close and personal moments." This sent her into silence as she could not hold her laughter back at his jokes. Dong Hi asked what he was talking about, and Chayiel mumbled that he hoped the blood would flow a little longer, leaving Dong Hi speechless. Meanwhile, Sunungju also received good news because Chairman Kang had agreed to their marriage. Hearing that her daughter was about to marry into a wealthy family, her mother was overjoyed. She said that she never thought that the feeling of turning over would be so refreshing, but the mother-in-law's condition was that the two must live with her. If Sunungju did not agree, then Sungwook would try to convince his mother, but Sunungju unexpectedly agreed to live with her mother-in-law. Sungwook did not understand why she made such an easy decision. After all, her relationship with his mother was no different from that of rivals. Sunungju said that the place doesn't matter. What matters is being together, and this sentence immediately melted Sungwook's heart. Secretly happy to have married such a sentimental wife, the poor Sungwook was really blinded by love. one could only hope that the evil would not get in the way of another, and that she would also be in harm's way, too, one day. Back here, after accidentally pricking her finger again, she felt an ominous premonition. Then, she fearfully learned that her son was injured, so the two hurried to the hospital. It turned out that her son accidentally fell and broke his arm at school. Dong Hi felt heartache when she saw her son. Chayiel stayed at the hospital with Dong Hi to take care of Himchan. Seeing that her son was so happy, Dong Hi suddenly felt sour because she knew that his family would definitely not accept the boy. She was really afraid that Himchan would be hurt, and she was also afraid of the painful feeling of separation. But Chayiel once again assured that he would not let that happen. He was very confident that he could protect him. Dong Hi begged Chayiel not to do that. They were stuck in a repetitive loop of trying to keep everything in place while also fighting to move forward. Coming back to the two who were talking, Chayiel said that he would never let Himchan be hurt, and it was the same with her. Dong Hi was moved. To have a life of wealth, she dreamed of her daughter marrying into a wealthy family, and she was in her wildest dreams. But she had not anticipated all of it to come at once. She was so happy that she did not know what was going on anymore. That's why she made plans for her new life. First asking her son-in-law to move her to a new villa, and then opening a boutique for herself. Having a mother-in-law like that is the misfortune of a lifetime. Sunungju warned her not to make any requests, but her love for glory has been deeply rooted in her blood, and she could not remove it. So Sunungju's mother arranged to meet her son-in-law and said her wishes. Meeting his mother-in-law for the first time, Sungwook was not in a position to refuse, fearing that his daughter would know about this. Shamelessly, the mother also reminded her son-in-law not to say that she made the request, and Sungwook also quickly understood, so he agreed to the other party's request. As soon as she got home, she immediately happily praised her son-in-law for being handsome and talented. Hearing this, Sunungju asked if her mother had gone to see Sungwook, but she quickly lied that she had seen his photos online. Sunungju once again warned her mother not to go looking for her husband's family, and her mother just nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Sungwook came to announce that he was discussing buying a new house for Sunungju and her mother, and then opening a clothing store for his mother-in-law in the mall. Chairman Kang thought Sunungju had asked for it, but Sungwook quickly explained that this was his idea, so Chairman Kang immediately agreed happily. However, Mrs. Choi was not easily fooled. She told her husband to leave this matter to her and promised to handle it properly. The next day, she arranged for Sunungju and her mother to come talk. Seeing her daughter also coming, her mother immediately froze. Unexpectedly, with just a few words, she exposed both mother and daughter, which made Sunungju's mother feel very ashamed. But Sunungju resolutely told Mrs. Choi that she didn't need anything. In this way, Mrs. Choi successfully dealt with the two cunning women, and her mother's actions completely hurt Sunungju's self-esteem. She was so angry that she almost cut off her relationship with her, and her mother knew her daughter's personality and knew she was capable of anything, so she hurriedly apologized to her. After it was over, Sunungju angrily found Sungwook, blaming him for not discussing it with her. She didn't want to live a life of inferiority at her husband's house. Hearing this, Sungwook had no choice but to respect her choice. Meanwhile, Chayiel was also preparing to officially confess to Dong Hi, so he proactively contacted Himchan, asking him to take his mother out tonight. The smart boy quickly understood. As soon as his mother got off work, he pestered his mother to take him for a walk, and pretended to meet Chayiel. Dong Hi saw Chayiel there and immediately guessed the boy's intention. Chayiel asked Himchan if he wanted him to come and take care of the two, but the boy's words surprised them. He said that he liked his mom and his uncle hanging out. Chayiel thanked Himchan. With Himchan's consent, he officially confessed to Dong Hi. Himchan encouraged his mother to quickly accept the flowers, and Dong Hi thanked him. Now it was amazing, and the two smiled happily. The wealthy young master likes a single mother, and he's happily immersed in sweet love, but Dong Hi's aunt, Mrs. Jau Suk, doesn't like this relationship, thinking that with Dong Hi's conditions, even a normal family would have difficulty accepting her, let alone a prestigious family. They will not agree to let her step into their house. In fact, Dong Hi also thought so at first, but Chayiel has a similar background to her. They are both very pitiful, so she can't bear to hurt him. Moreover, the feelings she has for him are genuine, so she hopes to receive the blessing of the family. Seeing Dong Hi's firm attitude, the uncle asked her to invite Chayiel to their home to play, wanting to see his attitude towards their family with his own eyes. So Mrs. Jau Suk told Dong Hi to bring Chayiel home to meet them tomorrow, and this matter should not be dragged on too long. That evening, Dong Hi called Chayiel, telling him about this. Hearing that Mrs. Jau Suk had invited him home, Chayiel was overjoyed. In fact, Mrs. Jau Suk always wanted Dong Hi to find a family that truly loved her, and then she would help her granddaughter raise Himchan, but Dong Hi would rather stay single for the rest of her life than give up. That evening, after work, the two went home to meet Mrs. Jau Suk. Chayiel felt very nervous and had to calm down before daring to step inside. Having known each other for so long, this was the first time Dong Hi had seen him so nervous, which made her laugh, and then she encouraged him a few times before going into the house together. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Jau Suk liked Chayiel at first sight, but you shouldn't judge people by their appearance. She asked him what his plans were for his relationship with Dong Hi because she was afraid that Chayiel would be like those young masters who, once they lost interest, would abandon other people's daughters. But Chayiel resolutely said that after his brother's wedding was over, he would immediately marry Dong Hi, and promised to convince his parents not to hurt her. Jau Suk said that she didn't want to see Dong Hi being hurt like before, and asked if he understood her, and he said that he definitely did. Seeing Chayiel so sincere, the couple felt very satisfied, But the more outstanding the other person was, the more worried Mrs. Jau Suk felt. Dong Hi was preparing to take Himchan to her brother's grave because today was his birthday. Chayiel heard the news and wanted to go with her. Dong Hi was a little hesitant at first, but still agreed to it. Today, Chayiel was preparing to take Dong Hi and her son to her brother's grave. He dressed neatly and was about to set off when Mr. Kang in the living room curiously asked if he didn't know that today was the meeting day between Sunwook and Sunungju's families. Chayiel was stunned on the spot. No one had told him about this. Mr. Kang asked his wife what was going on. Mrs. Choi thought that Chayiel didn't need to go anyway, since he wasn't familiar with team leader Sunungju. He was also about to decline, so he said that he probably shouldn't go. But the chairman thought, why shouldn't his cousin be at his brother's engagement ceremony? With no other choice, Chayiel had to inform Dong Hi, and although she didn't mind, he felt very guilty. Meanwhile, Sunungju and her mother had arrived at the meeting point. Sunungju reminded her mother not to talk nonsense, but the mother didn't get what she wanted, so she wasn't in the mood to talk. When the two families met, Sunungju's mother was very obedient, and no matter what they asked, she turned to Sunungju for her opinion. This action made her a little embarrassed, so she turned to Sunwook for help. Sunwook told his mother-in-law not to prepare a dowry for Sunungju, but she thought that she had to prepare those things properly. Unexpectedly, the mother-in-law directly said that no matter what they prepared, they would accept it, so she didn't need to try so hard, and these words immediately made both families feel awkward. Chairman Kang blamed his wife for talking to the in-laws like that, and then quickly apologized. After Mrs. Choi apologized, Sunungju's mother didn't care. Instead, she kept making additional remarks that made Sunungju's face turn red. Seeing that the apology was not accepted by Sunungju's mother, Chairman Kang awkwardly apologized again, finally appeasing her anger. Then, she got up to go to the bathroom, and Mrs. Choi glanced and followed. She went to the bathroom, and although she had accepted the apology, she still felt angry in her heart and then began to complain, saying that no matter what, there was no one better than her son-in-law, Seo, who had given her and her daughter a house. Mrs. Choi heard this sentence in the next cubicle and immediately became suspicious. Returning to the table, the two families had finished discussing the date of the wedding, but when they were about to leave, Mrs. Choi suddenly asked, "Who is this son-in-law Seo?" The scheming Sunungju hid the fact that she had been married to get into a prestigious family, and even hid the fact that she had given birth to a son 8 years ago, thinking that she could hide it for the rest of her life. But unexpectedly, on the day the two families met, her mother-in-law's question made her freeze. Faced with her mother-in-law's question, Sunungju's mother didn't know how to respond, trying to pretend that she didn't understand anything. The two mothers and daughters felt uneasy, and Mrs. Choi immediately said that she had just said it in the bathroom. Seeing Sunungju's mother stammering, unable to answer, she then turned to ask her. But Sunungju was panicking and didn't know how to respond. Choi suspected that in addition to her son, she had another son-in-law, and Sunungju's mother quickly denied it. Seeing that things were about to be exposed, Sunungju cleverly explained that her son-in-law Seo was her cousin's husband. Seeing her daughter say that, her mother also went along, and it was like she found a life raft. Starting to talk nonsense. In this situation, Mrs. Choi couldn't continue to investigate, but she wasn't easily fooled. Returning home, Sunungju immediately flew into a rage, not expecting her scatterbrained mother to say this, but her mother said that she had already explained it. But Mrs. Choi was not so simple. She would definitely investigate this matter thoroughly and would not sit still. At this moment, her mother became scared. So Sunungju and her mother will now both come up with plans to counter Choi. They would try anything to get their way. Over here, both Sunwook and his dad did not put much thought into the incident that just happened. Mr. Kang wanted his wife not to put much thought into the incident that had just occurred. But there was a lot more that had to be prepped before their son got married. That night, Chayiel happily went to find Dong Hi, saying that his brother had chosen a wedding date, and that after he got married it would be their turn. And thinking of this, the two were very happy. Chayiel felt guilty that he couldn't go to her brother's grave with her and her son today, and promised that he would never break his promise next time. He was also very curious about the death of Dong Hi's brother. When he heard the news that her brother had died in a traffic accident, Chayiel immediately remembered the accident that year, but he didn't think much about it because there was no such thing as coincidence in the world. After telling him the cause of her grandmother's death and the story about Himchan, he didn't expect Dong Hi to have suffered so much, and the more he thought about it, the more sorry he felt for her. The next day, the two took Himchan out to eat, and the boy was very happy to see his mother and uncle together. On this side, Sunwook and Sunungju, who had just finished taking wedding photos, also came here. A close friend of Dong Hi's brother accidentally saw Sunungju, and although they hadn't seen each other for many years, he recognized her as his friend's wife at a glance. Over here, Himchan finished eating and took the ball out to play, accidentally rolling the ball onto the ground. The ball happened to roll to Sunungju's feet, but she didn't expect that the child in front of her was the son she had abandoned that year. The moment she saw Himchan, she suddenly had an indescribable feeling. Returning home, Himchan kept praising Sunungju for being beautiful. Perhaps this was the bond of motherhood. Although they didn't recognize each other, they had a familiar feeling. Sunungju's mother was restless. Hearing the sound of her daughter returning, she was startled and sat up. Sunungju thought that her mother had caused something again. She explained that Miss Choi had asked her friend to hire a detective to investigate, which made her worried, and she didn't know what to do, but she had already told her sister about this. And at this point, Sunungju was really helpless. Her mother was anxious, wondering if her daughter's marriage would be ruined. Mrs. Choi was really driving Sunungju crazy. The urgent matter now was to prevent Mrs. Choi from investigating, but it was not easy to fool this suspicious mother-in-law. In this way, Sunungju stayed up all night and finally came up with a good idea. The next day, Mrs. Choi prepared to meet the detective. Just as she stepped out the door, a car was following her. While waiting for the red light, the car behind her suddenly crashed into the back of the car. With no other choice, Mrs. Choi had to postpone the meeting by half an hour. After arriving at the meeting point, she happened to see Sunungju. She curiously went over and asked why she was there. It turned out that Sunungju had hired 2 people to act as her sister and brother-in-law. After the man briefly introduced himself, Choi realized that this was the person Sunungju's mother had mentioned that day. The 3 people's acting was really too outstanding, and even the shrewd Mrs. Choi was fooled by them. It was like a case of diamond cut diamond, so Sunungju left triumphantly, and Mrs. Choi thought that she had almost wasted her efforts, so she called the detective to cancel today's appointment. But when Sunungju left, she was tripped up by another stumbling block. She accidentally bumped into Tae-ho because they had only met once before, and she didn't recognize him. Knowing that the other person was a friend of her ex-husband, Sunungju immediately broke out in a cold sweat, but unexpectedly, her mother-in-law suddenly came over and asked what she was doing. The mother-in-law saw her daughter-in-law talking to a man, so she stepped forward to inquire. Sunungju quickly lied that the other person was just asking for directions. Although she had fooled Mrs. Choi still felt that something was fishy. The next morning, she hid it from her son and forced Sunungju to sign a prenuptial agreement, stipulating that she could not use work as an excuse to avoid housework. She must take care of her parents-in-law, and if she was found to have a dark past, she would have to divorce immediately. Looking at the contents of the contract, Sunungju felt very angry, and she immediately felt humiliated. But in order to step into a prestigious family, Sunungju decided to sign the agreement. Returning to her room, she gnashed her teeth in anger, looking at the agreement in her hand, and swore that she would take the secret to the grave. A few days later, the wedding of Sunungju and Sungwook took place. Dong Hi came to attend, and she happened to run into her brother's best friend. It turned out that he was also preparing to get married here. The two talked about her brother, and Tae-ho said that he had seen her sister-in-law a few days ago. Hearing this, Dong Hi's heart suddenly felt uneasy, and before leaving, Tae-ho took Dong Hi's phone number. After the wedding ended, Chayiel took Dong Hi home but saw that she was unhappy. Seeing that she was troubled, he asked her what had happened, so Dong Hi told him everything that had happened earlier, hoping that her sister-in-law would never appear in front of her and Himchan for the rest of her life. Chayiel said that if she wanted to see her son again, she wouldn't have had the heart to abandon the child back then, and then comforted her not to worry too much about this matter. After holding the wedding for her son, the whole family was happy and radiant, but Sunungju was not satisfied with her bridal chamber. Unexpectedly, there wasn't a single new item in the room. If her family hadn't gone bankrupt, her new room wouldn't be so dilapidated. Although uncomfortable, she didn't dare to show it. Just as her brother's wedding ended, Chairman Kang remembered the matter of finding a wife for Chayiel, and he immediately took this opportunity to say that he and Dong Hi were dating. Choi immediately remembered, saying, "Dong Hi, the girl who has a child but isn't married?" Chayiel also nodded, confirming that he wanted to marry her, but Chairman Kang objected, saying, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chayiel had a hard time touching Dong Hi's heart, and the result was that Chairman Kang objected. Because Chayiel was not his biological son, so Mr. Kang had a responsibility to him. Chayiel insisted that he and Dong Hi truly loved each other, but no matter how good Dong Hi was, he would not allow him to marry a woman with a child. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Choi enthusiastically supported this matter, but she didn't have any good intentions, and this time, Sunungju sat on the same front as her to consolidate the relationship between her mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. She also hoped that Sungwook could stand on his mother's side. The two originally planned to go back to her mother's house, but something happened at home, so leaving at this time was not a good idea, so the two decided to stay for a few more days before returning to her parents. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mother had prepared a meal, waiting for her daughter and son-in-law to come. When she received the news that her daughter was not coming, she felt very disappointed. Remembering that neighbor Uncle Jang was at home, she called him to come and eat together. But unexpectedly, she ran into Mr. Kim taking Himchan, so she invited everyone to her house for dinner. Seeing the well-behaved and lovely child, she loved him very much. Then the two began to talk about the child's father. Hearing that the child's father had died in a traffic accident, she immediately remembered her son-in-law, but thought that there was no such thing as coincidence in the world. Meanwhile, in order to get Dong Hi to take the initiative to break up with Chayiel, Chairman Kang called her to his office, telling her to break up with Chayiel immediately. Seeing the chairman's resolute attitude of opposition, Dong Hi didn't explain anything. As soon as she got out, she unexpectedly saw Chayiel standing in front of the door. He didn't expect this matter to cause her so much grief, so he intended to rush in and argue with the chairman, but seeing that, Dong Hi quickly stopped him. Although very sad, she still strongly comforted Chayiel. Over here, Sunungju's mother found that Himchan had left his hat at her house, and the boy's name was written on the hat. Seeing that the boy's last name was also Seo, she became suspicious and then found Mr. Kim, asking to return the hat. In order to find out if the child was her grandson, she deliberately brought up the matter from that year, and confirmed that Himchan was the abandoned child that year. She was immediately petrified, and then frantically ran home, hurriedly reporting this news to her daughter. Sunungju was startled and panicked when she heard the news. In order not to ruin her future, the heartless mother abandoned her own flesh and blood. 8 years later, she not only had a successful career but also a husband who loved her very much. Sunungju had never thought about how her son was living until she remarried. and she unexpectedly received news about the son she had abandoned that year. Sunungju was afraid that everything would be exposed, so she quickly told her mother to immediately clear up her relationship with those involved, and not to mention this matter again in the future, telling her to shut up. What a heartless daughter. That night, after getting off work, Sunungju sat in the car, trembling with fear. Sunwook thought she was worried about company matters, so he asked her a few questions with concern. Sunungju quickly covered it up, saying that she was just concerned about Chayiel and Dong Hi. Hearing this, Sunwook also announced that the company was about to terminate its contract with Dong Hi, so it wouldn't be easy for the two of them to be together. Returning home, Mrs. Choi was restless and immediately asked about this matter, so Sunungju revealed that Chairman Kang intended to fire Dong Hi. In order to bring the two together, Ms. Choi would definitely not allow Dong Hi to leave the company, but Sunwook advised his mother that it was a bit too much, asking in return, if he were to marry a girl with a child, would you be happy? She immediately scolded him, asking how he could marry that kind of woman. Although he wasn't talking about her, Sunungju felt guilty. To cover up one lie, you need thousands of other lies. What is it like having to live a life of fear? That evening, Mrs. Choi pretended to be kind and brought fruit to Chayiel to reveal that Chairman Kang was planning to kick Dong Hi out of the company. Knowing this news, Chayiel immediately found Chairman Kang to argue. He didn't understand why he, who had always been impartial, was acting so emotionally this time. Chairman Kang also said straight out that if he agreed to break up with Dong Hi, he would reconsider. Having had a hard time touching Dong Hi's heart, how could Chayiel give up so easily? He said that if Dong Hi left the company, he would quit too, originally thinking that doing so would make him change his mind. But unexpectedly, Chairman Kang felt very disappointed with his actions, asking if he wanted to break off his relationship with him by saying that this family doesn't need a child like that, and kicking him out. To protect the love of his life, Chayiel was kicked out of the house by his foster father. Chairman Kang was so angry that his blood pressure increased. Seeing her nephew being kicked out, Mrs. Choi felt that she had gotten rid of the thorn in her side, and her trick of killing someone with a borrowed knife was really insidious. Sunwook was a little embarrassed for his wife in front of his son, and you do not know that his wife is far worse than she is. The next day, Mrs. Choi was beaming, while Chairman Kang frowned and was unhappy. In his heart, Chayiel was more important than his own son. Meanwhile, Chayiel came to work, upset, and seeing his bad expression, Dong Hi asked him what had happened. Chayiel quickly lied that he had drunk a little too much last night, so he wasn't feeling well today. Later, Dong Hi received news that her contract was being terminated by the company, guessing that the reason was definitely because of her relationship with Chayiel, so she didn't say anything more. On the way back to the office, she accidentally ran into Chairman Kang, who thought she already knew that Chayiel had left home, so he asked her if he was at her place. Only then did Dong Hi understand why he was so down this morning. Seeing that she was a kind and virtuous person, Chairman Kang hoped that she could understand him. Seeing Dong Hi looking sad and depressed all day, Chayiel guessed that Sunwook had told her about the termination of her contract and felt very self-reproachful, hoping that she could take Himchan and leave with him, so that no one would bother them again. Dong Hi promised to consider this matter. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mother was worried and uneasy all day about her grandson. After all, he was her grandson, so she couldn't help but feel worried. So she ran to Uncle Jang's place, asking for Himchan's address, and then hurriedly left. Seeing her hasty appearance, he felt very strange. Sunungju's mother followed the address to Himchan's house, and coincidentally met Himchan and Mrs. Jau Suk in front of the house, and the boy greeted her enthusiastically. Seeing her well-behaved and sensible grandson, she really couldn't help but love him. At this moment, Mrs. Jau Suk received a phone call saying that she had something urgent to go out and take care of. So Miss Bang quickly said that she could take care of the boy for a while, and Himchan also liked her very much. In this way, Mrs. Bang took him back to her house, and being able to meet her grandson again made her feel very happy. When she was preparing to make dinner for the boy, Sunungju and her husband happened to return to her parents' home. Sunungju eagerly rang the doorbell. Bang wondered who was ringing the doorbell, and cautiously asked who was outside. Hearing the voice was those of her daughter and son-in-law were coming home at this time, Bang was flustered, not knowing what to do, when both just had the opportunity to just visit her and get the chance to get acquainted. For a moment, she was completely flustered and overwhelmed, unable to think or act accordingly. When the couple first returned to their maternal home, the mother-in-law brought her 8-year-old son home. Seeing her daughter and son-in-law suddenly come home, she was scared and called her daughter into the room, telling her to quickly take her son-in-law away. Sunungju wondered what had happened, and she quickly said that her son was in the bathroom. Hearing this news, Sunungju turned pale with fear. Miss Bang quickly explained the reason, but Sunungju didn't care and blamed her for bringing the child back. Didn't she forbid her from seeing the child a few days ago? Why didn't she listen and instead hide it from her and bring that debt home? In order to avoid being discovered, Sunungju had no choice but to take her husband first. As soon as she went out, she saw Sunwook walking towards the bathroom. Seeing that, Sun-do quickly held her stomach and collapsed, causing Sunwook to panic and stop pooping. Bang quickly said that her stomach pain must have relapsed and told her son-in-law to quickly take her to the hospital for a checkup. The mother and son successfully fooled Sunwook, and Sunungju was also lucky to escape a disaster. The next day, she angrily went to her mother's house to ask for her child, not believing that the child was her son. Her mother said that she had confirmed that the child's father had died in a traffic accident, and that the accident that year was also in Busan, so she brought the child home. But now that Sunungju was married, she didn't want to have anything to do with that child. She begged her mother not to continue causing trouble for her. She didn't want her life to be ruined because of that child. Chayiel asked Dong Hi out for dinner and asked her what she thought about going abroad with him. Dong Hi knew that because of her, he had quarreled with his family, so she thought a lot about it, hoping that he could come back home. She also knew that Chayiel was a kind-hearted guy, so he would definitely be sad about this. After all, his adoptive father had worked hard to raise him to adulthood, so he wouldn't hurt him just because of a girl. She believed that Chayiel wasn't the kind of heartless person. Hearing Chayiel's advice, he realized that he hadn't thought things through thoroughly. He told Dong Hi to rest assured that he would definitely return home because he didn't want to run away from solving the problem. He promised to think of a way to convince Chairman Kang to agree. Although he had persuaded Chayiel, Dong Hi didn't feel happy because she didn't want him to be tired because of her. So she found Chairman Kang and told him her thoughts. She decided to break up with Chayiel, and the chairman was surprised, asking if she was serious. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she still affirmed that she would break up with Chayiel. But at this time, Miss Choi had no time to care about her business. It was hard to drive Chayiel away, but unexpectedly, he came back the next day. And even more annoying was that Dong Hi had taken the initiative to break up with Chayiel, which disrupted her perfect plan. But according to Sunungju's understanding, Chayiel was not the type to give up easily, so she advised her to rest assured, and not to worry too much. Sunungju still doesn't know that her son is being raised by Dong Hi. If Dong Hi marries Chayiel and brings her son, it will be a big trouble. Meanwhile, Dong Hi burst into tears alone, because she had agreed with the chairman to break up with Chayiel, but every time she tried to say the breakup, she couldn't control her emotions. At this moment, Chayiel also came to find her. Dong Hi finally mustered up the courage to say the words of separation to Chayiel, and Chayiel couldn't believe it. He thought that his foster father must have said something to her, but Dong Hi said that this was her decision. Chayiel didn't accept the breakup, telling her that no matter what the reason, he didn't agree. He knew that it was all because of him, so he asked Dong Hi to give him some more time. Meanwhile, Sunungju's mother had been thinking for a long time. She didn't believe that there was a mother in the world who didn't miss her child, and finally sent Himchan's address to her daughter. Sunungju really followed the address to the door. Although her heart always remembered her son, her mind reminded her that she could never do that. When she turned to leave, Dong Hi also took Himchan out. Over here, Uncle Jang knew about her and Chayiel, so he suggested that she should tell the truth about the child so that she wouldn't be misunderstood by the chairman and his wife. Although that was the case, Dong Hi didn't want to continue to pester him, having already said the words of separation. At this moment, Sunungju's mother happened to pass by. After being introduced by Uncle Jang, she realized that the other person was Himchan's mother. Knowing that the other person was the sister of her deceased son-in-law, Seo, she felt ashamed and didn't dare to look her straight in the eye. Fortunately, Himchan ran over to ease the awkward atmosphere. Seeing her grandson, Miss Bang immediately forgot about the horror just now, and happily took Himchan to buy ice cream, and happened to run into her daughter on the way. She was terrified, and hurriedly hugged the boy, hiding him behind her back. Sunungju blamed her mother for sending her that address. As the two were arguing fiercely, Himchan fearfully poked his head out, unexpectedly seeing the beautiful aunt he had just met a few days ago. Sunungju immediately recalled that the boy was Dong Hi's son. But why was her mother with this boy? Her mother helplessly said that he was her biological son, and Sunungju was terrified when she saw the boy in front of her. She couldn't believe that this was the son she had abandoned. That year, she thought she would never see her son again. But now the boy suddenly appeared, which made her unacceptable. Sunungju walked absent-mindedly on the road. Seeing Dong Hi made her even more worried and uneasy. Dong Hi saw her and asked if she wasn't feeling well, asking why her face was so pale. Sunungju nervously denied it and left immediately, and the two wondered why she was acting like a lost soul. Back home, Sunungju still couldn't believe that Dong Hi was her ex-husband's sister. But at this point, those things were no longer important. What frightened her was the prospect of Dong Hi becoming her sister-in-law, that they would live together, and she would absolutely not allow that to happen. Unexpectedly, as soon as she got home, she saw Chayiel kneeling in front of her father-in-law, begging him to agree to let him and Dong Hi get married. No matter how hard Chayiel tried to beg, his foster father resolutely refused. At this time, the only one who supported Chayiel was Mrs. Choi. Sunungju confidently believed that she could persuade him, but Chayiel didn't care about what she said. Every member of the family had their thoughts. At this moment, Chairman Kang received a phone call from Uncle Jang, arranging to meet at the restaurant, because Uncle Jang was a good friend of Chayiel's father when he was alive, so Chairman Kang has always regarded him as his brother. To get the other party to agree to the marriage of the two young people, Uncle Jang decided to reveal the truth about Dong Hi, saying that Dong Hi was actually like Chairman Kang. Chairman Kang wondered how Dong Hi was like him. Uncle Jang said that he adopted his nephew, and Dong Hi also adopted her nephew. Chairman Kang was very surprised after learning the truth, and now he understood the words Chayiel had said to him. And the more he thought about it, the more he admired Dong Hi. Returning home, he immediately went to Chayiel's room and saw him gazing intently at photos taken with Dong Hi, so he went over to look with him. Seeing Chayiel's happy appearance in each photo, he couldn't help but ask him if he was confident that he would love her and her son for the rest of his life. This sentence was accidentally overheard by Sunungju standing outside. Chayiel didn't expect his father to suddenly agree to their marriage, and he excitedly held his hand, speechless. Receiving the news, the whole family was happy for Chayiel, except Sunungju, who felt uneasy and frightened, and from here on out, her nightmare would officially begin. After many storms, the couple finally obtained the consent of their families, and the two hugged each other happily. No words could describe their happiness at this moment. The next day, Dong Hi went to the chairman's office, thanking him for bringing her and Chayiel together, but Chairman Kang didn't understand why she hadn't revealed the matter about the child sooner, almost causing him to kick her out of the company. Dong Hi said that after getting married, she would definitely tell her parents-in-law about this, but right now, she didn't want to use this as an excuse to get their consent. Seeing Dong Hi say that, Chairman Kang was very satisfied with her character, feeling that Chayiel had not misjudged her. At such a young age, she was shouldering the responsibility of both a father and a mother, which was truly admirable. Then, Chairman Kang told Dong Hi to bring her son to his house to play, because he also really wanted to meet the lovely boy, Himchan. But Mrs. Choi always felt that everyone was hiding something about Dong Hi. Seeing this, Sung-wook said that since they were all going to be family soon, they shouldn't hide anything from each other. So Chairman Kang told Chayiel that Dong Hi had agreed to let him tell everyone about this, and then revealed the story of the child Dong Hi was raising. Choi didn't expect that she had misunderstood her. Although everyone was relieved, this was just the beginning of Sunungju's nightmare. Dong Hi brought Himchan to their house to play. Everyone asked Himchan if he was Dong Hi's nephew. Dong Hi introduced Himchan, saying that Sunungju was his biological mother. Himchan happily ran over calling, "Mom, wait, what?" Turns out this was just a dream for Sunungju. She was always tormented by this. As Dong Hi brought her son to the house, Sunungju's heart became more uneasy and frightened. The whole family warmly welcomed the mother and son, with only Sunungju showing a clear expression of tension. Looking at the lovely and sensible child, Sunungju's heart suddenly felt a sourness. After the meal, the nanny took Himchan out to play. After that, the chairman and his wife began to ask about her brother and incidentally asked about the child's mother. Sunungju panicked and wanted to escape, but since they were already one family, Chairman Kang wanted her to stay and listen to the story. After beginning to recount the entire process, from the accident to the sister-in-law abandoning the child, everyone was shocked that Himchan's mother was such a heartless person, not realizing that person was Sunungju, sitting right next to them. Dong Hi was about to marry into a prestigious family, but her status as a single mother quickly attracted the attention of the press. They quickly surrounded her house for interviews. Afraid that her son would learn the truth, Dong Hi quickly told her son to go inside first. Himchan ran back crying, telling his grandparents that someone was bullying his mom. Fortunately, the uncle and aunt arrived in time to chase the reporters away. It turned out that Sunungju had orchestrated this whole thing because Chayiel had promised his foster father that he would move in with their family after getting married. Although the chairman was very happy, his stepmother saw them as a thorn in her side and was trying every possible way to send them back to America. That's why she came up with this vile plan, but because of her kind nature, Dong Hi never suspected that she was being set up. After the reporters left, Dong Hi collapsed in fear. Chayiel, knowing the news, immediately ran to her house. Seeing him, Dong Hi burst into tears, saying that she was really scared. To protect Himchan, they decided to go live in America, where no one would know them, and no one would ask about Himchan. In this way, Dong Hi's fear gradually subsided. Back home, Chayiel told his family about this, that he was about to take Dong Hi and her son away, but everyone wondered how the reporters knew about this. The first person Chairman Kang suspected was his wife, but she quickly denied it. In fact, she also had a hand in this. Initially, the woman contacted a reporter, but the reporter learned about Sunungju's secret from Tae-ho, so he used this to blackmail Sunungju. Fearing that her scandal would be exposed, Sunungju had no choice but to agree to the other party's conditions, in exchange for the reporter helping her scare Dong Hi, so that's why there was a scene of reporters surrounding her. To investigate the person behind this, Chayiel began searching for that reporter, but the reporter hid her identity very well, so they didn't find any clues. Meanwhile, the reporter received a message arranging a meeting with Sunungju. When the reporter arrived at the meeting point, Dong Hi happened to see her. She immediately recognized her as the reporter who was at her door, so she secretly followed her. She arrived at the hotel and unexpectedly saw Sunungju also there. The two completed the transaction. Sunungju asked the other party to sign an agreement to keep this matter a secret in the future, and the reporter had no interest in other people's private matters, and the two quickly signed the agreement that they would never meet again in the future. Just when Sunungju thought everything had returned to normal, she was once again standing on the edge of the abyss. Sunungju, in order to gain a foothold in her husband's family, tried every possible way to drive the second daughter-in-law abroad. When she thought everything had been arranged, she didn't expect that her plot had been discovered by her sister-in-law. Dong Hi couldn't believe that the person who ruined her life was Sunungju, but she said that she was doing this to help her. Dong Hi questioned why she hired a reporter to reveal the secret about the child. Sunungju pushed the responsibility onto her mother-in-law, saying that she wanted to drive Chayiel out of the house, and she could only use this method to force them to leave, while she, in order to prevent family conflicts, was meeting the reporter to write good things about her. The simple Dong Hi believed her, and even proactively apologized for her rude behavior just now. It cannot be denied that Sunungju was indeed very clever. Meanwhile, Chayiel was still investigating that reporter. If he found out that it was his mother-in-law who did this to drive them away, he would surely be heartbroken. So, Dong Hi lied that she had met the reporter and had taught her a lesson, but Chayiel did not allow anyone to bully Dong Hi. Seeing him resolutely wanting to go meet the reporter, she quickly stopped him, saying that she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. That evening, the reporter called Sunungju again. Hearing the mention of the reporter, Chayiel immediately realized something was up. During the conversation, Sunungju kept mentioning Dong Hi, which made him feel very strange. Under Chayiel's questioning, Dong Hi had no choice but to recount the events of this morning. Hearing the news, he was furious that his stepmother had come up with this plan, but Dong Hi felt that the matter had been resolved and didn't want to pursue it any further. Seeing Dong Hi suffer so many grievances, Chayiel felt very self-reproachful, but he still suspected Sunungju's secretive behavior. Back home, he immediately went to ask Sunungju why she helped Dong Hi. She explained that she was the eldest daughter-in-law and didn't want the family to be in a difficult position, and also declared that she wouldn't meddle in other people's business like this in the future. The next day at work, Dong Hi suddenly received a phone call from Tae-ho. Because he was passing by the company, he conveniently came to visit her. Hearing that she was raising her brother's child, he didn't understand why she hadn't contacted her sister-in-law. At this moment, Tae-ho unexpectedly saw Sunungju, and Dong Hi curiously asked him why he knew her team leader. At this time, Tae-ho realized that Dong Hi didn't know that Sunungju was her sister-in-law. He asked her if she really didn't know who that woman was. Dong Hi said that she was her team leader. Tae-ho told her that she was her brother's wife. Dong Hi was shocked, speechless. The secret Sunungju had buried for so many years was finally exposed. Dong Hi recalled the words she had said about helping her stop the reporter, and the tense expression when she met Himchan, which proved that Sunungju had known everything for a long time. Thinking of this, she felt like an idiot, always regarding that heartless woman as the savior of her life. Meanwhile, Sunungju, seeing that Dong Hi hadn't come to work, was preparing to deduct her salary. Chayiel hurried to look for Dong Hi everywhere but couldn't find her. Calling her, no one answered, which made everyone feel worried. In the end, Chayiel had no choice but to run to her house to look for her, and was told that Dong Hi still hadn't come home. It turned out that she had been waiting under the company, waiting for Sunungju to get off work. Sunungju asked why she hadn't answered her phone, and even angrily questioned Dong Hi for taking leave without permission. Unexpectedly, Dong Hi's answer made Sunungju freeze. Dong Hi asked her why she abandoned Himchan, why she abandoned him. Sunungju couldn't believe that Dong Hi knew her secret so quickly. She panicked, not knowing how to answer. At this moment, Dong Hi understood why she had prevented the reporter from spreading the news, saying that helping her was just an excuse to painstakingly cover up this matter, fearing that the matter of her being Himchan's biological mother would be exposed. Sunungju asked Dong Hi in return if she wanted to expose this matter to everyone. Hearing this, Dong Hi became even angrier. As a mother, she had never worried about whether her son was growing up healthy, whether he was often sick or had any illnesses, but only worried that her scandal would be exposed, which made Dong Hi begin to doubt whether she had ever loved her brother. Sunungju still tried to justify herself, saying that she loved her brother very much, but if she loved her husband so much, then why didn't she appear at his funeral and heartlessly abandon her newborn child? Dong Hi finally vented all the grievances and resentment that had been suppressed in her heart for so long, but Sunungju not only didn't feel sorry, but also tried to justify her wrong actions. Now, Dong Hi was no longer foolish enough to believe her lies. What disappointed her the most was that her brother had loved such an inhuman woman and had even lost his life for her. This woman was too ruthless, not only not feeling sorry for abandoning her newborn child, but also trying every possible way to cover this up. Dong Hi finally knew the truth, and she felt heavy-hearted. Returning home and seeing her aunt, uncle, and Chayiel still waiting for her, Dong Hi felt very guilty. Chayiel guessed that something must have happened to Dong Hi, which is why she disappeared all day today. Dong Hi dragged her tired body back to her room, not wanting to say anything more. Seeing her granddaughter's pale face, Mrs. Jau Suk told Chayiel to go home and rest, and whatever it was could wait until tomorrow. Seeing Dong Hi sitting alone outside, Mrs. Jau Suk came over and asked her what had happened. Seeing how worried she was about her, Dong Hi could only tell the truth, recounting that she had seen Himchan's biological mother. Miss Jau Suk couldn't believe that there could be such a coincidence in the world, so Dong Hi recounted everything. Knowing that Himchan's biological mother was Sunungju, Miss Jau Suk really couldn't believe her ears. Initially, Sunungju was the one who created the opportunity for Dong Hi to interview at the company, which made her always regard the other party as her benefactor, but she didn't expect that she was the cruel mother who abandoned Himchan that year. But the thing that bothered Dong Hi the most was that she would become a sister-in-law with her in the future. However, Mrs. Jau Suk felt that Dong Hi was using this to avoid her feelings. She had suffered so much for many years raising a child alone, so if she were to marry into that family in the future, the one who should feel guilty would be Sunungju. Jau Suk encouraged Dong Hi not to propose breaking up with Chayiel because of this. Meanwhile, Sunungju was so scared that she couldn't sleep. If her husband's family knew the truth, she would definitely be kicked out of the house. But things had already come to this point, so the best way was to make Dong Hi shut her mouth. The next day at work, Chayiel sought out Dong Hi, anxiously asking her what had happened last night, but Dong Hi didn't tell the truth. When she went out, she happened to see Sunungju eavesdropping outside. Seeing that Dong Hi hadn't told Chayiel about this, she quickly called Dong Hi over for a private talk. Hearing the conversation between the two, Chayiel felt that things were not that simple, so he secretly followed them. And Sunungju's vile behavior was finally exposed. Never had anyone seen someone as terrible as Sunungju. In order to prevent her husband's family from finding out that she had given birth, she even dared to threaten Dong Hi to break up with Chayiel. Unexpectedly, she could say such shameless words. Dong Hi asked her if she didn't feel uncomfortable now becoming sisters-in-law with her. Dong Hi said, "Why should I feel uncomfortable? The only one who should feel uncomfortable is you, Sunungju." Dong Hi knew that she was afraid that her position as the eldest daughter-in-law would be shaken, which is why she could say such despicable words. Now that things had come to this point, Sunungju finally revealed her true colors. She knew that Dong Hi always regarded Himchan as her life, so to protect the boy she wouldn't dare to say this, so her actions would not be discovered by her husband's family. As she triumphantly turned to leave, thinking that she had won this bet, she happened to see Chayiel standing right behind her. Sunungju froze on the spot. Chayiel couldn't believe it, asking her what was going on. Was she Himchan's biological mother? Dong Hi, seeing Chayiel so agitated, quickly stepped forward to dissuade him. At this time, Chayiel was completely disappointed in Sunungju. He told Dong Hi to go outside first, wanting to confirm this matter himself because the Sunungju he knew was not like this. He really wanted to know why Sunungju had the heart to abandon Himchan. But she kept trying to justify herself. Chayiel asked what about his brother. Mentioning her husband, Sunungju froze on the spot, not knowing how to answer. Chayiel didn't expect this woman to have hidden everything to marry his brother. But Sunungju justified herself, saying that she didn't have the heart to let Sunwook be hurt. Chayiel asked if she didn't think that the truth would be discovered sooner or later. If Sunwook found out about this, what would she do? Having gone this far, she couldn't turn back. So she begs Chayiel not to tell her husband. Seeing that she refused to repent, Chayiel walked away disappointed. At that moment, Sunungju felt like her whole world was about to collapse. She thought and thought, but there was no way to stop them. She was so anxious that she could barely walk. Seeing Sunungju fall, the assistant rushed to help her. After working together for so many years, this was the first time he had seen her acting like this. Even when Secretary Kim submitted the plan, Sunungju was in no mood to review it. Seeing Chayiel and Dong Hi standing in front of her, staring at her like vengeful spirits, she was even more frightened. It's like there was an unearthly being that the two were going to call on her. It just goes to show that you shouldn't do shady things in life, because no matter how well you try to cover them up, they will eventually be exposed. Sunungju successfully married a handsome and wealthy husband, hiding the fact that she had a child, but she didn't expect this to be discovered by her brother-in-law. To save face for his sister-in-law, Chayiel hoped that she would tell the truth about having been married and having a child with his brother. Only then would she have a chance to be forgiven by everyone. If she missed this opportunity, then he would tell his brother about this. Sunungju knew very well that if she told the truth, Sunwook would definitely not forgive her. But in this critical situation, she couldn't think of any other way. Looking at her husband, who loved her so deeply, Sunungju still didn't dare to say it. At this time, she was so tormented that she couldn't eat or sleep. Her mother-in-law wondered why her daughter-in-law's complexion had been so bad recently. Her father-in-law said that it must be because she had been under too much pressure at work recently, telling his son to nourish his wife. Seeing that his brother was still happy as usual, Chayiel knew that Sunungju still hadn't told Sunwook the truth. But she wouldn't say it even if it killed her, because if Sunwook knew, he would immediately divorce her. Having been friends for so long, she didn't believe that Chayiel would have the heart to watch her be abandoned by her husband. Seeing that Sunungju had no intention of turning back, Chayiel immediately turned to find his brother to talk. Just as he opened his mouth, Sunwook suddenly received a call from Sunungju, saying that his mother at home had suddenly fainted, telling him to immediately take her to the hospital. The two brothers didn't expect that this was just a plot by Sunungju. She confidently said that Chayiel couldn't reveal the truth. Chayiel asked her why she was so confident that he couldn't say it. She threatened that if he told Sunwook, then she would tell Himchan who his biological mother was. Chayiel didn't expect her to be so despicable, daring to use her own son to silence them. For her own happiness, she would dare to do anything. Meanwhile, Sunwook hurried to his mother-in-law's house. Seeing his mother-in-law lying motionless on the bed, he wanted to take her to the hospital for a checkup, but she quickly refused, saying that she was fine. Seeing her son-in-law treating her and her daughter so well, she felt very guilty. That evening, after getting off work, Sunwook wanted to take Sunungju out to eat with friends, but she was in no mood to follow him. So Sunwook went to the meeting point alone. Unexpectedly, his friend's girlfriend was a classmate of Sunwook. When mentioning Sunungju, the girlfriend accidentally revealed that she had been pregnant, but Sunwook didn't believe these rumors, immediately warning the girl not to say such unfounded rumors. Seeing Sunwook's upset attitude towards her, the girl didn't hide it anymore, revealing that not long after graduating from college, someone had seen Sunungju with a pregnant belly. Sunwook was completely shocked, unable to believe his ears. Today, Sunwook accidentally learned that his wife had given birth. Although he didn't want to believe it, thinking about his wife's unstable state recently, he seemed to sense something unusual, and Sunungju was also tormented by this matter, unable to eat or sleep, finally finding a way to solve it before daring to go to sleep. Looking at his sleeping wife, Sunwook remembered the girl's words, but in the end, he didn't believe those unfounded rumors. At this moment, Sunungju's phone suddenly received a text message sent by her mother-in-law, the message saying, "That evil thing has said that no matter what, you must not hurt Himchan, remember that. Not more, not more." This message immediately made Sunwook suspicious. He even wondered if the child in the rumor was Himchan, Dong Hi's nephew. Because he had no concrete evidence, he could only suppress this matter. Early the next morning, Sunungju got up early to cook for the whole family. Because she had resolved everything, she was in a good mood. But as soon as she arrived at the company, she ran into Mrs. Jau Suk, who, without saying a word, threw a cup of water in Sunungju's face. Sunwook happened to see this scene. Sunungju angrily asked who the other person was, and when she learned that it was Dong Hi's aunt, she immediately shut her mouth. Seeing his wife being bullied, Sunwook angrily ran to protect her. Fortunately, Dong Hi arrived in time, preventing Mrs. Jau Suk from escalating the situation. Afraid that her secret would be exposed, Sunungju quickly pulled her husband away, But in order to prevent Sung-wook from becoming suspicious, she casually found an excuse to explain. Sunungju thought that Dong Hi was definitely throwing stones, but Dong Hi felt that she shouldn't bother with such trivial matters, and should think of a way to prevent her husband's family from finding out. Afterwards, Sung-wook called Dong Hi to his office, asking what exactly happened that day. But Dong Hi couldn't tell the truth. In the elevator, Sung-wook ran into Chayiel again. Because he was a bit troubled, he asked his cousin out for a few drinks. But tonight Chayiel had arranged to have dinner with Dong Hi and her son. After learning the restaurant they would be going to, he also took Sunungju there. In this way, they met at the restaurant as Sung-wook had arranged. He said that since they had met by chance, he would treat everyone to dinner today. Although everyone felt awkward, no one dared to refuse. In this way, Sung-wook let Sunungju sit next to Himchan, which made her feel anxious and uneasy. And Sung-wook was also testing his wife's reaction. While ordering, they discovered that Sunungju had inherited a disease from her mother. Both were allergic to Chinese cabbage. Because very few people are allergic to this kind of vegetable, this once again reminded Sung-wook of his friend's reminder. Sung-wook began to become cold towards Sunungju. The husband who always loved his wife deeply now didn't want to have lunch with her, and didn't come home on time in the evening, even often coming home drunk. No matter how her husband treated her, Sunungju didn't dare to say a word, only blaming it all on her brother-in-law, because only Chayiel knew this secret. Sunungju believed that Chayiel had told her husband that she had a child, but Chayiel didn't want to mention this matter. Instead, he advised her that it wasn't too late to tell her brother the truth now. Although she felt that something bad was about to happen, she stubbornly refused to repent. Seeing Sunungju's attitude, Chayiel didn't want to argue with her, only feeling guilty for hiding this matter from his brother. In fact, after a long period of observation, Sung-wook had confirmed the rumors and had even obtained Sunungju's toothbrush. Now, he only needed to wait for the DNA test results. Because he loved Sunungju very much, he hoped that she would take the initiative to admit everything to him. So he decided to give his wife a chance, asking her if she had anything to tell him. She didn't understand what Sung-wook wanted her to say. Sung-wook suggested that she ask him about something that would hurt him or something that she hadn't had a chance to say recently. He was still looking forward to asking her if she didn't have anything to tell him. Looking at his beloved wife in front of him, Sung-wook hoped that she could say those words, but Sunungju's answer made him very disappointed. Returning home, Sung-wook called the hospital. He quickly got the test results, but when the delivery man arrived, Sunungju happened to see him and took the delivery to his office for him. Recently, Sunungju had been feeling sad about being treated coldly by her husband, not knowing that he had discovered her secret. Holding the test results in his hand, Sung-wook hesitated for a long time. Although he had already guessed the answer, he still clung to a sliver of hope. Opening the envelope and seeing the results on the paper, his heart shattered. Being deceived by the person he loved the most, Sung-wook really couldn't bear this pain. Late into the night, he staggered back home, kneeling in front of his parents as soon as he stepped inside, repeatedly apologizing. His parents were curious about their son's sudden change. Seeing his brother like this, Chayiel quickly helped him to his room. When Sunungju prepared to help her husband change his clothes, he unexpectedly pushed her away, telling her to get lost and not touch him. Sunungju vaguely didn't understand why her husband had changed so much, but she still believed that her scandal hadn't been discovered by her husband. In this way, she sat by his side, watching him sleep all night. Until the next morning, when Sunungju was brushing her teeth, she discovered that her toothbrush had been switched. She immediately felt that something was wrong. Recalling the delivery that was sent to Sung-wook that day, she hurriedly ran to her husband's office, and sure enough, she found the DNA test results there. What on earth had happened to have a mother-in-law charge in and beat her daughter-in-law? Even the husband who always loved and doted on Sunungju didn't stand up to protect her. No matter how much Sunungju knelt down and begged, she was still kicked out of the house by her mother-in-law. It turned out that Sunungju's secret had been accidentally learned by her husband, but he didn't expose this scandal. After a long time of being neglected by her husband, Sunungju also sensed something unusual. Until she saw the test results on her husband's desk with her own eyes, she understood everything. Chayiel had repeatedly advised her to take the initiative to admit it to Sung-wook, but Sunungju only knew how to pursue her happiness, determined not to let her husband know the secret she had hidden. Now that things had come to this point, Sunungju didn't know what to do. She was trembling with fear that Sung-wook would divorce her. Chayiel didn't understand why. Even at this point, she was still thinking about this. Chayiel asked her if she had ever loved his brother. Unexpectedly, this question made her angry, because Dong Hi had asked the same question a few days ago. If she really loved someone, then at this time, the thing she should be afraid of isn't whether she would be abandoned by the other party, but how much the other party was hurting. Hearing this, Sunungju was immediately speechless. Seeing Chayiel leave, she began to blame everything she had encountered on him. No matter what, Sunungju still tried to find a way to beg for her husband's forgiveness, but Sung-wook had given her so many opportunities. Now that the matter had been exposed, what was the point of coming out with the truth? Sung-wook had no way to forgive her. What disappointed him the most was that Sunungju still stubbornly justified her mistakes. Sung-wook couldn't believe that he had married such a shameless and inhuman woman. He told her to pack her things and get out of the house immediately, and never appear in front of him again. But Sunungju's life had never admitted defeat before, so no matter what, she refused to leave. Back home, Sung-wook didn't even glance at his wife in front of his parents. This made Sung-wook feel very ashamed, not knowing how to face Chayiel and Dong Hi in the future. But he couldn't help but admire Sunungju for being able to be so calm when standing in front of her son. At this time, he really regretted marrying her. Meanwhile, his parents downstairs always felt that something was wrong, which led to the scene of the mother-in-law beating her daughter-in-law. But how could Sunungju be willing to be kicked out of her husband's family like this? After many sleepless nights, she finally came up with a plan that was perfect for everyone. Having stepped into the door of a wealthy family not long ago, she had already received divorce papers, but with a high personality like hers, how would one possibly let this all go to waste to the winds? Knowing that her children were her husband's weak point, Sunungju forged the test report. Knowing that his wife was pregnant, Sunwook was surprised. Sunungju said that after the divorce she couldn't keep this baby, and then began to complain to gain sympathy. Hearing this, Sunwook felt very conflicted, saying that he needed to think it over carefully. And so, Sunungju began to fake morning sickness at the company. Because she had experience with pregnancy before, she acted very convincingly, and the news quickly spread throughout the company. Sunwook, after much consideration, decided to tell his parents about this. After all, he had loved her, so he couldn't help but feel attached to Sunungju. But Mrs. Choi didn't believe her daughter-in-law's lies, and quickly told her son to tell Sunungju that she would personally take her to the hospital for a checkup. The next day, Sunwook called his wife. Hearing that her mother-in-law wanted to take her for a pregnancy test, the two were terrified. Now that things had come to this point, Sunungju had no choice but to go along with the plan. Her mother advised her daughter not to be stubborn anymore, saying that if her fake pregnancy was discovered, the consequences would be very serious. But if she didn't go for a checkup with her mother-in-law, they would become even more suspicious. To fool her mother-in-law, Sunungju found someone to take her place. But on the way to the hospital with her mother-in-law, the other person called and said that the pregnant woman had something urgent and couldn't come. Receiving this news, Sunungju immediately fell into a panic. In the end, she still didn't know how to repent. As soon as she got to the gate, she used the excuse of going to the bathroom. Now that she was here, her mother-in-law thought that she couldn't do anything else. Unexpectedly, in the bathroom, Sunungju met a pregnant woman, a woman who was in the same month of pregnancy as her. But after hearing Sunungju's request, the girl just felt that the other person had a mental problem. How could anyone help with this? Sunungju then used the money to solve the problem. Under the power of money, the pregnant woman immediately agreed to Sunungju's unreasonable request. But next, Sunungju still had to find a way to fool her mother-in-law. At this moment, Mrs. Choi received a call from a man, saying that he had accidentally crashed into her car, so he wanted her to come out and deal with it quickly. In this way, Sunungju successfully fooled her mother-in-law. Seeing that her daughter-in-law was pregnant, Mrs. Choi could only accept this fact, and Sunwook also brought his wife home soon after. Although she had fooled her in-laws for now, the next step would be even more difficult. She had to get pregnant quickly to maintain her position as the eldest daughter-in-law in the family. Sunungju confidently believed that Sunwook would accept her, but unexpectedly he suggested sleeping separately. The couple was about to walk down the aisle, but while feeling that Chayiel was gradually avoiding her, even wanting to postpone the wedding date, the two who were once so in love, Dong Hi didn't understand why her boyfriend had suddenly changed so much. A few days ago, Chayiel came to Dong Hi's house for dinner, and the three sat around together, making Chayiel feel the warmth of a family. Himchan wanted to quickly call him dad, and Chayiel told the boy that day would come soon. After the meal, Himchan showed Chayiel his drawings. Chayiel thought the person in the picture was him, but the boy said that the man was his uncle, and then took out a photo of his uncle for Chayiel to see. The moment he saw the photo, he immediately recalled the accident 8 years ago, and the man Sunwook had killed 8 years ago was Dong Hi's brother. Chayiel couldn't believe this cruel truth, and this matter had always been a big stone weighing on his heart. At this point, he no longer had a face-to-face with his girlfriend and hurriedly ran out to get his bag and leave. Dong Hi wondered what had happened, and Chayiel panicked, unable to explain to her. Dong Hi quickly asked her son what had happened to Chayiel. Himchan recounted the events of earlier when Chayiel suddenly became like this after seeing his uncle's photo. Knowing the truth, Chayiel felt very sad, afraid that Dong Hi would abandon him after learning about this, and he himself felt very guilty towards her. The next day, Chayiel went to the office and recounted everything to his brother. Knowing that the person he had killed was Dong Hi's brother, Sunwook also couldn't accept it. Chayiel is really hoping his brother will finally come clean about something huge. He wants Sunwook to go with him to apologize to Dong Hi. But here's the thing. Sunwook was actually the one driving the car in that accident years ago, and he's terrified of going to prison. Chayiel is basically begging him to reconsider and do the right thing. That night, Sunwook stumbles home, clearly upset, and spills the beans to his mom. But get this, she already knew, and she tells him point blank that she'll do absolutely anything to stop him from confessing no matter what it takes. Sunwook, being a mama's boy, just goes along with her plan. Meanwhile, Sunwook can't shake the guilt he feels whenever he sees Sunungju. After all, she was Dong Hi's ex-husband, and he felt awful about the whole situation. This guilt has completely flipped his attitude towards his wife. He's suddenly being super attentive and loving. Over at Chayiel's place, his adoptive mother, Mrs. Choi, confronts him. She asks if he's really going to tell Dong Hi the truth. She argues that it happened so long ago and that forgetting it is the best way to move on. But Chayiel is adamant. He doesn't want to live with this guilt and regret for the rest of his life. He begs her to talk to Sunwook and convince him to confess, saying it's not too late to make amends. Choi completely twists the story around, blaming everything on Chayiel. She knows Sunwook was the driver, but she challenges Chayiel to prove it. She points out that it was Chayiel's car and that their trip to Busan was 8 years ago. No one can remember things that well. Chayiel is stunned. He can't believe what he's hearing from the woman who raised him. He knew she didn't like him, but he never imagined she could be this cruel. She's willing to protect her son at his expense, even if it means putting him on trial. Later, Sung-wook even tells his mom that she shouldn't treat Chayiel so badly. But she retorts saying, "If I don't, will you confess that you were driving and go to jail? How confident are you in that?" Everyone has forgotten. No one will know if we keep quiet. The question silences Sung-wook. He figures Chayiel won't say anything since Dong Hi would not marry him if he confessed. As the mother-son duo are plotting, Chayiel walks past and sees them on his way to work. He is silent and leaves the house, hurt by his adoptive mother. At dinner, Sung-wook notices that Sunungju looks weak, so he asks her to take time off work to rest. After all, it's the first trimester, and she needs to be careful. But his mom chimes in, saying that this isn't her first pregnancy and she should know what to do and what not to do. Sung-wook thinks his mother is being too hard on his wife, so after dinner, he calls Sunungju into his room and comforts her, telling her to ignore his mother's words. Sunungju acts all sweet and says that as long as his mother isn't angry, she can accept anything. Sung-wook is even more remorseful, seeing that his wife is kind and tolerant of his mother. He hopes he can live happily with her in the future and forget everything in the past. Seeing that her husband has had a change of heart, Sunungju excitedly holds his hand, happy beyond words. The next day, Sunungju goes to the obstetrics department for an examination, but the doctor gives her news that she can't accept. She had a difficult delivery last time, and her ovaries were damaged, which led to her being unable to get pregnant again. If she can't get pregnant, her false pregnancy will soon be exposed, so Sunungju has to continue to use her high IQ. The next day is her prenatal checkup. Sung-wook prepares to go to the hospital with her, but Sunungju says that the company has an important meeting today and that the fetus is still small, so he does not need to worry. Unexpectedly, her father-in-law is worried that she will be in danger if she goes alone, so he asks his wife to go with her. With no way out, Mrs. Choi reluctantly agrees, and Sunungju cannot refuse. Sunungju, realizing her fake pregnancy is about to be exposed, makes a seriously daring decision. She's basically betting her life on this. Sunungju fought tooth and nail to get into this rich family, but turns out, being a wealthy housewife isn't all it's cracked up to be. Not only is she constantly dealing with her mother-in-law's crap, but the woman's even getting physical with her. A few days ago, Sunungju accidentally miscarried. Sung-wook took her back to her room to rest, but instead, she started packing her bags to leave. She knows that without the baby, she has no reason to stay in this house. Sung-wook won't let her leave. He couldn't possibly kick his wife out over this, right? It's all part of Sunungju's twisted plan. Her mom calls, asking if everything goes as planned. Even though they successfully tricked the in-laws, her mom feels guilty towards her son-in-law. But Sunungju doesn't have time to care about that now. She's willing to go to any length to stay in that house. That evening, her father-in-law gets home from work and rushes to see his daughter-in-law, comforting her and telling her to rest. After he leaves, Mrs. Choi immediately drags her son out, hoping he'll divorce Sunungju ASAP. But Sung-wook is adamant. He says no matter what, he'll never leave Sunungju. Mrs. Choi fires back, asking if he really thinks it's normal to be sleeping with the wife of the man he hit and ran from. Sung-wook says that's exactly why he can't divorce her. If it wasn't for that, he would have left her long ago. Suddenly, they hear a strange sound coming from nearby. It's Sunungju! She's been eavesdropping on their conversation. She can't believe that the man who killed her ex-husband is her current husband. When Sung-wook goes outside to check, Sunungju quickly hides. The next morning, she acts like nothing happened and sees her husband off to work. Then, the OBGYN's office calls, asking why she didn't come in for her appointment. Sunungju rudely tells them she miscarried. Not long after, the main doctor herself shows up at the house. She's good friends with Mrs. Choi and wanted to check on Sunungju. As she's leaving, she sees Sunungju come out, but Sunungju doesn't recognize her. The doctor even says that she has never met Sunungju. The mother-in-law asks her what exactly is going on, but Sunungju easily admits to lying about miscarrying yesterday. Furious, Mrs. Choi scolds her for being shameless and raises her hand to slap her. Sunungju just accidentally found out that her current husband was the driver who killed her ex-husband. Though she cannot accept this information, she has found a way to turn the tables. Smugly, she asks Choi if she is in any position to see her as trash. The hit-and-run driver and the one who killed her ex-husband is her son. Mrs. Choi is shocked. So, her daughter-in-law knows the secret and records her conversation with her husband. Since Sunungju has the evidence in her hand, she is sure that her mother-in-law will not expose her lie. Mrs. Choi has always known that her daughter-in-law is dangerous but did not expect her to be this despicable. But to protect her son, she can only swallow her anger. Afraid that her daughter-in-law will secretly report her son, she goes to Sunungju and tells her she will accept her with the condition that she protects Sung-wook. The thing she is worrying about right now is that Dong Hi will report the police because she knows Chayiel will reveal the secret to Dong Hi. Knowing what her daughter-in-law is thinking, she knows that Sunungju will be able to figure out a way to help Sung-wook resolve the matter. Sunungju knows that as long as she can keep Sung-wook on her side, she will not be kicked out of the house. As Mrs. Choi comes downstairs, she catches her son returning from work and informs him that Sunungju knows everything. At the same time, she tells him not to worry since Sunungju will stand on their side. But when Sung-wook gets to the room, Sunungju is acting as if nothing has happened. Sung-wook begs her for forgiveness, but Sunungju ignores him. The important thing right now is to silence Chayiel. Sung-wook is freaking out because Chayiel is going to confess everything to Dong Hi tomorrow. Sunungju knows Chayiel's personality once he makes up his mind. There's no changing it. so she's decided to go after Dong Hi instead. Meanwhile, Dong Hi has noticed that Chayiel has been acting super weird lately. She knows something's up because he gets strangely tense whenever she mentions her brother. Today, Assistant Kim told her that when going to the market survey with Chayiel, they saw Dong Hi's flyer for the missing driver in his car. All of this just makes her more and more suspicious. Back home, she can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. A terrifying thought suddenly crosses her mind. Could Chayiel be involved in her brother's accident? But she can't believe that he would do something like that. To get to the bottom of it, she decides to confront Chayiel. When she calls him, he doesn't answer. Turns out, Chayiel has gone to the memorial site for Dong Hi's brother. He's decided that after apologizing to the deceased, he's going to find Dong Hi and tell her the truth. Since she can't get a hold of Chayiel, Dong Hi calls Sunungju. Coincidentally, Sunungju was just about to go find her, so they decide to meet at a cafe to talk. Dong Hi asks why Sunungju wants to see her. Sunungju counters by asking why she was standing in front of her house. When Dong Hi doesn't answer, Sunungju guesses that she must have something important to talk to Chayiel about. Something related to her brother, maybe? Dong Hi is shocked and asks how she knows. If she knows why she's looking for Chayiel, then she must know who killed her brother. Sunungju admits that she does, then drops the bomb. It was Chayiel. Dong Hi is completely stunned. The girl who has worked so hard to raise her nephew for the past year while constantly searching for the person who killed her brother, now found out that the person is her fiancé. The sister-in-law advises her to hide this issue so that she will receive a large compensation, but she tells her to shut her mouth. Dong Hi is devastated, having realized the truth. She doesn't understand how it ended up like this. She's not answering Chayiel's calls and doesn't want to see him. Sungguk knows that his wife met with Dong Hi. After all, he was the driver, so he didn't want to blame Chayiel. Sunungju is adamant, saying that this is the only way to prevent Dong Hi from going to the police. She also points out that they don't have any evidence. Sungguk can't do anything at this point. The next day, Dong Hi meets up with Chayiel to talk. He sees that she looks weak and exhausted, so he quickly tells her to get in the car to rest. She asks him if he was the driver who killed her brother, if he was the hit-and-run driver all those years ago. Answer me. Before he can even say anything, Dong Hi already knows the truth. She sees Chayiel kneel before her, and then she believes that all of this is true. Dong Hi doesn't understand how Chayiel, who is such a kind and compassionate person, could have abandoned her brother and fled the scene alone. Chayiel is overcome with guilt but doesn't explain anything. Back home, he collapses to the floor and starts sobbing uncontrollably. He's been under so much pressure for so many years. Now, he doesn't dare to ask for Dong Hi's forgiveness, but he's terrified of losing the woman he loves. The next day, Dong Hi submits her resignation at work because she doesn't want to see Chayiel again. Then, she goes to the river and takes off the engagement ring that Chayiel gave her. Although it's painful, she throws it away. Just then, Uncle Jang calls, telling her that he has already heard about it. He can't bear to see Chayiel and Dong Hi in so much pain, so he calls her to tell her something important. Dong Hi knows now that Chayiel did not kill her brother that year, but he always felt he was the wrongdoer. Here she realized that Sunungju has an intention. That evening, Chayiel comes home drunk. Mrs. Choi, afraid that her husband will find out, drags Chayiel back to his room. Choi is only worried about whether Dong Hi will go to the police. She's not even thinking about how Chayiel is feeling. He wishes he could go back 8 years. That way, he wouldn't have gone to Busan, wouldn't have killed Dong Hi's brother, and wouldn't be constantly threatened by his mom. Just then, Mr. Kang barges in, asking what he's talking about. He asks whether something happened. He is the president of a big company, but also a normal father. He put his honor and prestige down to kneel in front of his employees and ask for forgiveness to redeem his son. Dong Hi feels indescribable. A few days ago, President Kang happened to find out that his son killed Dong Hi's brother all those years ago. He can't believe this crime has been covered up for 8 years. President Kang closes his eyes, angry and speechless. Mrs. Choi is continuously explaining that she is to blame for all this. Kang, who is very upright and honest, tells his son to immediately confess the crime and pay for what he did. Because Mrs. Choi is very scared he will be sent to jail, Mr. Kang shouts at his wife to shut her mouth. How can a mother teach their child in this way? She should have told the police immediately. Kang doesn't feel like there is guilt for what she did and continuously defends what his son did. With this personality, no wonder Sungguk became like this. The next day, Dong Hi goes to Sungguk to give him a chance to confess since she knows he is not a bad person. Dong Hi seems to know his thinking when seeing his thought about not answering. He wishes that she will hide this secret and that he will compensate for this. She had thought that he was an honest person, but turns out that she was very wrong. Even an honest person will also listen to the instigation of his wife and mother. She is going to make him pay for what he did since he blames Chayiel. Sungguk goes to find his father, and Kang advises him not to run from the responsibility. Hearing what his father said, he kneeled in front of him, begging him for forgiveness. He also said that he is very afraid to be jailed because he is too cowardly. He can't even imagine thinking about it, and that it makes his whole body shiver. So he asked his dad to help him, just one time. His father is very hurt when he sees his son like this, so he is going to find Dong Hi. He drops all his honor and kneels in front of her since his son wants to say something about Sungguk. Mr. Kang knows what happened, and that the truth is that he did not commit that crime. The thing he is most mad about is what that guy wanted to do for him and has done. He also knows that this will affect both of you and is very sad, knowing what that guy wanted to do for him and has done. Mr. Kang knows that Sungwook has committed a crime that can't be forgiven. He just doesn't want to see his son get destroyed. Sunungju will not have any position in her husband's family, so for her to get pregnant, she snuck to the hospital for treatment, but it was not successful. The doctor advises her to make sure that she has a good emotion. For her to be in her husband's family, she will be able to live in peace with the pregnancy. She accidentally drops her customer card as she takes out her phone. Her mom told her that she has to undergo the surgery if the treatment is not going to be successful. Sungwook still did not know that his wife was not pregnant, so she couldn't let him know. Sungwook accidentally received the card and wondered why his wife was going to the hospital, so he went to find the doctor to do the test, and she said that she did not do the test for Sunungju, and also said that he had to ask Mrs. Choi about this. Sungwook comes home to ask his mom what exactly is happening. He knows that there is something that she is hiding since his mother looks nervous. Then his mother is going to confess that the truth is his wife is not pregnant and did not have a miscarriage. Sungwook is totally blindsided. He can't believe his wife has been playing him this whole time, and he's clueless why his mom would side with her and keep him in the dark. Turns out Mrs. Choi has been threatened by her daughter-in-law. That's the only reason she hasn't spilled the beans. Sungwook is horrified that the woman he married could be so ruthless. To keep her quiet, Mrs. Choi tells her son to act like he doesn't know anything. She adds that she'll ruin everything if he tells anyone. Meanwhile, President Kang, trying to protect his son, goes to Dong Hi's house to beg for forgiveness. Out of respect for her boss, she says she'll think about it and sends him away. Sungwook feels terrible that his dad had to humiliate himself for him. But his dad tells him that he'll respect whatever decision Dong Hi makes and that he needs to be prepared. Dong Hi meets up with Chayiel because she wants to find the former driver Kang and know more about what happened back then. Chayiel says that his mom told the driver Sung to handle the situation, and after that he was fired, but he said he can find a way to contact him. Chayiel quickly finds Sung's address and calls Dong Hi with the good news. She rushes to the address, but at the gate, she meets Sung's younger brother. He tells her that his brother passed away long ago. Dong Hi is shocked and leaves, disappointed. While collecting trash, an old woman suddenly feels a sharp pain in her chest. Dong Hi sees her and helps her back to her house. After taking some medicine, the woman slowly recovers and thanks Dong Hi for saving her. As she's about to leave, Dong Hi notices that the house is filled with clothes and trash. Turns out the old woman has two sons, one who is missing and one who is unemployed and always getting into trouble. The old woman is old and weak, but still has to starve herself, picking up trash every day to support her useless son. After waking up, the old woman finds the room clean and there's a meal on the table. Seeing the note on the paper, she's touched to tears. She always feels guilty towards Dong Hi. She knows that the black box footage that Dong Hi has been searching for is in her hands. 8 years ago, her son was a driver for a rich family. But the lady's son was drunk and crashed into her son. Mrs. Choi gave money to her son to resolve this issue and forced him to disappear from the city. Before he left, Sung gave the video to his mom, knowing that the family of the victim would look for him someday. Just like the prediction after 8 years, Dong Hi looks for them. The old woman knew that her son had done bad things, but just pretended not to know. Seeing that Dong Hi is so kind, she suddenly feels very sorry for her. She finally decides to give the video to Dong Hi, but her younger son overhears her phone call and snatches the USB drive from his mother. When he sees the content on the video, he's stunned. But then he realizes that this is his chance to get rich. He goes to Mrs. Choi's house and demands 1 billion won. Mrs. Choi, desperate to get the evidence back, reluctantly agrees. That evening, he came home drunk. While her son is asleep, the mother quietly takes back the black box footage. She calls Dong Hi and tells her to come get it ASAP. Dong Hi calls Chayiel to tell him the news. He quickly gets dressed to go there, but as he's heading out the door, his dad stops him, asking where he's going so late. Right now, Choi knows that there is something urgent. She immediately feels like there is something bad, so she calls her brother to ask where it is. At the moment, he finds that he doesn't have it. As he runs outside to find his mother, he runs into Dong Hi. Seeing her son, the old woman quickly tells Dong Hi to run. She tries to hold her son back, but he pushes her to the ground and chases after Dong Hi. Dong Hi ran to the intersection and saw Chayiel. Seeing the man closing in, she ran towards Chayiel, but her eyes were glued on her forehead, a saying that means she's not paying attention, and she didn't notice a truck barreling towards them. In a desperate situation, Chayiel pushed Dong Hi aside, and he himself was struck by the car. The director told him to stop so the car could strike him, lying in a pool of blood. Dong Hi was terrified. Her brother had also left her because of an accident, and she was truly afraid of a repeat tragedy. Chairman Kang, upon hearing the news, also rushed to the hospital. Luckily, Chayiel survived, but he might never wake up. Hearing this, Dong Hi immediately collapsed. Seeing Chayiel unconscious, his foster father couldn't help but feel heartbroken. At that moment, his driver brother Sung called, and Madame Choi questioned him why this happened. It was then that she found out that this accident was caused by her asking him to go take the memory card, leading to the traffic accident. Little did they know, their conversation was overheard by Sungwook. So the reason Chayiel had a car accident was because of his mother. She didn't care whether Chayiel lived or died, but only thought about that video. Seeing his brother unconscious in front of him, Sung-wook felt extremely guilty. If it weren't for him, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Seeing his brother on the verge of life and death, Sung-wook couldn't forgive himself, so he mustered the courage to make a bold decision. On the other side, Madam Choi met with the driver's brother Sung, preparing to retrieve the dashcam. As the two were making the transaction, Sung-wook called, advising his mother not to worry about him anymore, and that he would turn himself in. Madam Choi felt that her son must have gone crazy, but Sung-wook really didn't want to continue running away. He went to his father's office, telling him that he was going to turn himself in. Chairman Kang also couldn't understand his son's sudden decision. Sung-wook explained that his brother had a car accident because of him. It wasn't until then did Chairman Kang realize that it was because of his wife. Sung-wook hoped his father wouldn't blame his mother, because she did it for him. Although he loved his son, he was still glad that his son could make this decision. As he was about to go to the police, Sunungju rushed to stop her husband, but the person he wanted to see the least at this time was her. They went past each other and went straight to the police station. The police asked what he came for. He tightly gripped his hand and made up his mind to answer that he wanted to turn himself in. Saying this sentence, he seemed to feel much lighter. 8 years ago, Sung-wook unfortunately killed his wife's ex-husband in a car accident. This had brought him too much pressure, and finally, he had taken the courage to go to the police station to turn himself in. Sunungju hurriedly ran home to tell her mother-in-law the news. Madam Choi blamed her for not being able to stop Sung-wook, but this wasn't the time to blame each other. Sunungju told her mother to quickly call lawyer Kim, telling him to quickly stop Sung-wook. Just as Madame Choi picked up the phone, Chairman Kang suddenly barged in, snatched the phone, and told lawyer Kim to pretend he hadn't heard what he had just heard. Madam Choi thought her husband didn't know about their son turning himself in, and quickly explained that she had called lawyer Kim only to stop Sung-wook. Unexpectedly, Chairman Kang immediately flew into a rage. Now Chayiel had to be hospitalized because of this matter. His life or death was uncertain, and his wife still wouldn't come to her senses. It was then that she realized that her son had said everything. He didn't understand how his wife could be so cruel. Chayiel had grown up alongside their family since he was little. How could she be so heartless to him? But not only did she not feel guilty about her actions, but she also kept making excuses. Seeing that his wife was beyond saving, Chairman Kang was so angry that he wanted to divorce her immediately, and finally bluntly announced that he would prepare divorce papers. Hearing this, Madam Choi became afraid. On the other side, Sunungju called her mother. She was really afraid of being kicked out of the house. Her mother advised her daughter to move out quickly before she was kicked out, but having lasted until now, Sunungju was truly unwilling to leave like this. At this point, her mother also had to give up. Sung-wook was now being investigated by the police. The police were puzzled why he had come to turn himself in now, after so many years. Sung-wook said it was because of his younger brother. He was the one who killed someone and evaded responsibility, and ultimately implicated his brother. It wasn't too late to turn himself in. The police told him to go home first, because this matter still needed to be investigated in detail. Leaving the police station, Sung-wook silently took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief he had never felt before. As soon as he got home, his mother began to blame him, not expecting her son to dare to turn himself in. Sung-wook firmly said that he would never evade responsibility again. At this time, Sunungju was also uneasy. Seeing Sung-wook return only made her even more afraid. But what was coming was coming. Sung-wook told her that they should get a divorce soon. The two of them should never have met, and this relationship should end. Chayiel was unfortunately injured while saving his girlfriend, and Dong Hi was in pain, always attending near, praying for her boyfriend to wake up soon. Looking at the gift she gave him on his birthday, Dong Hi recalled the happy times they had together. She told Chayiel, pleading for him to wake up soon. When he wakes up, she will put the necklace on him again, begging him to wake up soon. It seemed that in his coma, Chayiel had heard her call. On this side, Himchan also called to encourage his mother to take good care of Uncle Chayiel and that he would be obedient at home, not letting his mother worry. As soon as she hung up, Chairman Kang entered and saw her complexion growing paler and paler. He had told her to go home and rest, but she didn't want to leave Chayiel for a moment. Seeing this, Chairman Kang reported that Sung-wook had turned himself in. Although it was a bit late, it was still the price they had to pay for their brother. Over here, Madam Choi had been held back by Sunungju for a long time and had suffered a lot of anger. Now that her son had turned himself in, she hoped that her daughter-in-law could move out of the house on her own. Sung-wook had prepared everything and also submitted his resignation. He didn't want his work to affect the company. His father asked Sung-wook what his plans were for the future. He said that during the investigation of the case, he wanted to take care of Chayiel so that his conscience could feel relieved. Chairman Kang also strongly supported his son's actions. Sung-wook went to the hospital room, and when Dong Hi saw him, she thanked him for taking the initiative to surrender. Sung-wook also sincerely apologized to her, even though it was late. He was truly sorry to her. Dong Hi said it wasn't too late, and also thanked him for having the courage, but Sung-wook felt that he didn't deserve to hear that. Sung-wook hoped that Dong Hi could agree to take care of Chayiel with him, so that she wouldn't be too tired and would also give him a chance to take care of his brother. Seeing how sincere Sung-wook was, Dong Hi could only nod in agreement. After Dong Hi left, he silently knelt in front of his brother. Sung-wook truly regretted not listening to his brother then. He felt extremely sorry for his brother, telling his brother not to forgive him. Sung-wook had repeatedly forgiven his wife's evil actions, but in the end, Sunungju was still kicked out of the house by her mother-in-law. She was unwilling to leave like this and frantically beat on the door, begging her mother-in-law to let her stay by her side. After all, a lot of things had happened in the family recently, and if she left, who would be her strategist? Now that the family has been disrupted to this extent, The mother-in-law finally had a legitimate reason to kick her daughter-in-law out. How could she let her back into this house? With no other choice, Sunungju had to pack her luggage and go back to her mother's house. Seeing her daughter return, her mother immediately understood everything, advising her daughter to leave that house as soon as possible, but her daughter wouldn't listen. She hoped Sunungju could accept the truth and stay put in the house for the time being, but by now she had turned a deaf ear to her mother's advice. Sunwook returned home and saw the empty room, feeling a pang of sadness in his heart. Such a perfect and happy family had been destroyed like this. Madam Choi came in, advising her son not to worry, that she would definitely think of a way to help him out of the case. But Sunwook didn't want his mother to do that. When he decided to turn himself in, he had already prepared himself mentally, and only by receiving appropriate punishment could he feel relieved. Seeing her husband return from work, Madam Choi warmly greeted him, forgetting that he was filing for divorce from her. Seeing her husband take out the divorce papers, she didn't expect him to really do it. Sunungju had been kicked out. Was it her turn to be kicked out now? At this time, Chairman Kang realized that his wife had kicked their daughter-in-law out of the house. So Madame Choi recounted the story of Sunungju's fake pregnancy and miscarriage to her husband. He didn't expect such a terrible thing to have happened in the house. Then, she hurriedly recounted the anger that she had to endure. Her wife, who had never suffered, was being led by the nose by her daughter-in-law. It was really tit for tat, a case of the pot calling the kettle black. Over here, Uncle Jang heard the news that Chayiel had an accident, and he also rushed to the hospital. Why did the two good children have to go through such a tragedy? But the good thing was that Dong Hi was always by Chayel's side, but that meant that the person under the greatest pressure at this time was Dong Hi. After experiencing so many things, she had to bravely pick herself up. The moment she saw Uncle Jang, she really couldn't control her emotions anymore. What she was most afraid of at this time was that Chayiel would never wake up, but Uncle Jang believed that good people would be lucky. The next day, Sunungju changed her clothes and prepared to go to work. Seeing her daughter wanting to go out, her mother was speechless. After being kicked out by her in-laws, how could she still have the face to go to other people's company? But Sunungju thought that she was not at fault at work, so the company had no reason to fire her. On this side, Madam Choi was very dissatisfied to hear that Sunungju was still going to the company, wondering where she got the courage to go there to work. How could she let it rest? As expected, not long after, all of Sunungju's bad deeds were posted on the company's forum. Sunungju was so angry when she read this. To kick her daughter-in-law out of the company, her mother-in-law lost her mind and posted her dirty truth on the company's forum, thinking that this would bring down Sunungju, but never thinking that it would embarrass her family. Even the employees had to speak up and ask Sunungju if this was really true, but she firmly denied it. Representative Kim suggested that she must find the anonymous attacker, and Sunungju already knew that the person behind this was her mother-in-law. Chairman Kang quickly learned about this and hurriedly called his wife. On the phone, she also frankly admitted what she had done. Chairman Kang felt that his wife had really gone crazy. How could this scandalous thing be spread? But Madame Choi firmly believed that this was the best way to get rid of Sunungju, because she still didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. Chairman Kang was speechless with anger. To kick out his daughter-in-law, his wife had smeared his face and Sunwook's face with dirt. Over here, Dong Hi was by Chayel's side day and night, hoping that he would wake up soon. At this time, Madame Jau Suk brought Himchan to visit, and she was also preparing to go out to buy a cup of coffee to stay awake. Just like that, she and Madame Jau Suk went out together, leaving Himchan alone with Chayiel. The boy hoped that his uncle would wake up soon because he was still waiting for Uncle Chayiel to take him biking, believing that even if he was in a coma, he could still hear his voice. At this time, what Ms. Jau Suk was most worried about was that Chayiel couldn't wake up. If that was really the case, how would Dong Hi live in the future? But Dong Hi had decided that she would always be by Chayel's side, even if it was for 10 or 20 years. She wouldn't give up, because she always loved Chayiel deeply, and if she left him, she would be even more painful. Seeing Dong Hi say that, Myung Suk could only support her granddaughter's decision. After all, Chayiel had saved her life. At the moment, everyone's only wish was for Chayiel to wake up soon. Over here, Sunungju's affair was also making a fuss in the company, not expecting Sunungju, who was beautiful and talented, to do such a shameful thing. Although Sunungju had heard it, the colleagues still pretended not to see anything, and even stood in front of her, scolding her that she was worse than an animal. At this time, Sunungju couldn't bear it anymore, and she didn't care about her face. She angrily picked up a trash can and dumped it on the female colleague's head, but the other party was not willing to be weak. So, the two started fighting. Fortunately, the assistant ran over in time to separate the two. Sunungju had never been bullied like this before, and her anger had really reached its peak. When she got home, her mother saw her daughter's miserable appearance, guessing that something must have happened at the company. So Sunungju told her mother about the good things her mother-in-law had done for her. She couldn't believe that there was such a cruel mother-in-law in the world. Even if the daughter-in-law did something wrong, she couldn't do something so heartless. She blamed her daughter for not being stubborn enough to go to work at the company. If she had listened to her from the beginning, she wouldn't have suffered this humiliation. But even if she left, she wouldn't be able to live in peace because Sunungju really couldn't swallow this anger. Knowing that her daughter was planning something, she asked her what she wanted to do again. She said with a vicious expression that she should wait and see what she could do. Sunwook was furious after learning about this. What good would it do for her to post bad news about her daughter-in-law on the company's forum? Wouldn't it ultimately become a laughingstock for the world? But she never thought that her daughter-in-law still had a trump card in her hand and even urged her son to quickly divorce Sunungju. Soon after, she received a call from her lawyer because the person who was about to face the risk of divorce was her. Madam Choi always thought that her husband just wanted to scare her, but she didn't expect that he really didn't want to live with this woman with a black heart anymore. But no matter what, Madam Choi wouldn't accept the divorce. At this point, she was just like her daughter-in-law Sunungju, like mother-in-law, like daughter-in-law. The next day, Representative Kim was passionately gossiping, thinking that Sunungju definitely wouldn't have the face to go to work, because it was almost lunchtime and she still hadn't seen her. On this side, Madame Choi called the company to inquire and was secretly happy to learn that Sunungju had not gone to work yet. It was only this way that it was useful. So she thought that if she had obediently resigned from the beginning, she wouldn't have to endure this humiliation. Not long after, Sunungju leisurely walked into the office. It seemed that everyone had underestimated her. Then, Sunungju called a reporter, preparing to spread her mother-in-law's secrets online. On this side, Madame Choi was leisurely preparing to go out shopping, and immediately after, she received a call from a close friend because she still didn't know that the news that her son had driven and killed someone had been spread. The moment she opened her computer, she was completely stunned. A wealthy heiress covered up her eldest son's hit-and-run accident, blaming it on her second son. Secrets that had been hidden for so many years were suddenly made public on the website, making Madame Choi unable to accept it. When she was feeling scared, the reporter called. At this time, the mother-in-law knew that all of this was caused by her daughter-in-law. Chairman Kang learned of this, and his blood pressure skyrocketed. This information directly stirred up the company. At this time, Sunungju had prepared her resignation. Suddenly, her mother-in-law called. She didn't expect Sunungju to be able to do such a heartless thing to avenge herself and dare to do this to her husband, proving that she had no feelings for Sungwook, and also not thinking about how ruthless she was with her daughter-in-law. The matter had come to this point, Sunungju knew clearly that there was no turning back, so she didn't care about anyone's feelings. After learning the news, Sungwook hurried home. Madame Choi complained to her son about how Sunungju was really too heartless, who told her to poke her first. Currently, this incident has been on the hot search, causing the company's stock to continue to plummet. Madame Choi didn't expect that her irrational actions would cause such a big problem. This time, she really had no face to face her husband, and the divorce would come sooner or later. Sunungju looked at the resignation letter in her hand, feeling reluctant to leave the company. After saying goodbye to everyone, she decided to submit her resignation. Over here, her mother saw the news spreading all over social media and knew that her daughter had caused it, so she stood up to persuade her. Her mother-in-law had already gone too far, and she couldn't believe that her daughter could do such a heartless thing. Currently, netizens are calling each other not to buy clothes from that company in the future, so Sungwook's company will quickly face the risk of bankruptcy. At this time, Sunungju realized the seriousness of the situation. She only wanted to avenge her mother-in-law but ended up harming her husband and the company. At this time, Madame Choi was so shocked that her blood pressure rose and she was preparing to go to the hospital for a checkup. The maid reported that reporters had surrounded the outside, so she had no choice but to leave from the back door. But as soon as she arrived at the hospital, she was recognized by outsiders and even stopped and scolded her. At this time, the saddest person was Sungwook. If he had listened to Chayiel that year, the situation wouldn't have turned out this way. Then, he called and asked Sunungju to come out and talk. Although her actions had seriously affected the company, Sunungju still didn't feel regretful. However, it was useless to mention this now. Sunungju thought that her husband had come to her because of this matter, but Sungwook wanted to break off relations with her. Their relationship stopped here. Although she was reluctant, Sunungju still tremblingly signed the divorce papers. What sin did this family commit to meet this scheming daughter-in-law? Ever since they brought Sunungju home, the family hadn't had a peaceful day, and finally fell apart, and even the company was facing the risk of bankruptcy. After all, Sungwook had decided to divorce, but the person he was most concerned about at this time was his mother. If she hadn't pushed Sunungju to the end, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Seeing Sungwook return, Madame Choi hurriedly sat up, begging her son to help her persuade her husband not to divorce her. Sungwook understood his father's temperament, so he didn't dare to guarantee that he could persuade him. As expected, Chairman Kang returned home and found his wife to settle the score. Sungwook hurriedly stopped his father, saying that his mother was tired, and advised him not to blame her temporarily. She breathed a sigh of relief when her husband didn't enter the room. At this time, the person that Chairman Kang felt most sorry for was his brother. Not only did he fail to manage the company well, but he also led Chayiel to this end. On this side, Chayiel still hadn't improved. If he didn't wake up in another week, he would be declared brain dead. The doctor advised Dong Hi not to worry too much, but she must be by his side and talk to Chayiel more. Although he was in a coma, he would sometimes be able to hear other people talking. This sentence gave Dong Hi a glimmer of hope. She held his hand tightly, recalling the sweet moments of the two. When she went out to get new clothes for Chayiel, Sunungju came in and told Chayiel that she had left the company and divorced Sungwook, and now she had lost everything. She put all the blame on Chayiel. If he didn't like Dong Hi, Himchan wouldn't have appeared, leading to a series of nightmares. Looking at Chayiel unconscious, Sunungju didn't feel sorry but felt that this was karma for Dong Hi and him. At this time, Dong Hi happened to return and asked why Sunungju was here, reminding her not to say too much in front of him because he might be able to hear it. But in Sunungju's mind now, there was only hatred left. The thing she regretted the most was hiring Dong Hi to work at the company. Dong Hi angrily told Sunungju to leave quickly, afraid that she would say things that would affect Chayiel. Sunungju said that the person who made Chayiel become like this was Dong Hi. It was because of Dong Hi that it was hard for her. At this point, Dong Hi is deserving getting her reward. After the examination, the doctor announced that this was just a normal reaction. Seeing this, Sunungju was extremely frightened. Hearing that Chayiel was fine, Dong Hi dared to breathe a sigh of relief. If something really happened to him, Dong Hi would never let Sunungju go into her life. And the most troubled person at this time was Chairman Kang, because the company's current situation was very critical. If he didn't think of a way to solve it in time, he would face the risk of bankruptcy. So, he invited all the shareholders and felt very sorry that his family's affairs had seriously affected the company's reputation. To appease public opinion, he took the initiative to withdraw from his current position. On this side, Madam Choi couldn't accept the news and hurriedly ran to inform her son, telling him to quickly think of a way to stop his father. But this matter had already been discussed with Sungwook, because this was the only way to save the company at the moment. After solving the company's affairs, Chairman Kang hurried to the hospital to visit Chayiel. At this time, he finally had time to be with his son, quietly sitting down, holding Chayiel's hand tightly, saying sorry, hoping that his son would wake up soon. He felt very sorry for his deceased brother for not taking good care of Chayiel and the company. The next day, Dong Hi came to the hospital and ran into the doctor examining Chayiel. The doctor announced that his current situation was not very optimistic. Usually, if he had been in a coma for so long, he should have woken up by now, so the doctor couldn't help but worry. Hearing this, the two were stunned, but Dong Hi still suppressed her pain and comforted the chairman. Chairman Kang returned home and ran into his wife waiting for him at the door. Unexpectedly, as soon as he saw him, Madam Choi began to complain to her husband about why he had given up his current position. He was furious and said, "What if he wasn't the chairman anymore?" Chayiel was in trouble. If Madame Choi hadn't sent someone to rob the video at that time, Chayiel wouldn't have had an accident. But not only did she not feel guilty, but she had never even visited Chayiel once. Chairman Kang hoped that before Chayiel passed away, she would go there and sincerely apologize to him like her son. This was also a way for his wife to atone for her sins. Hearing her husband say that, Madam Choi was a little scared and finally realized her mistake. What if something really happened to Chayiel, after all? He had grown up with her since he was a child. Although she didn't like Chayiel, she couldn't bear to see him die. On this side, Dong Hi was always by Chayiel's side. Just as she stood up to prepare to go out, she accidentally saw his hand move, but when she turned back to check, she didn't see any movement, thinking that she was hallucinating. Just as she turned away, she heard a familiar sound. After a long series of days in a coma, Chayiel finally woke up. After the examination, the doctor announced that his health was normal, but what worried them the most was Chayiel's memory. At this time, Chayiel suddenly remembered the evening of the traffic accident that day. Fortunately, his consciousness was still very clear. Like this, he would be able to recover to normal soon. Hearing this, Dong Hi was extremely happy. The nurse said that she had probably moved God to bring Chayiel back from the dead. On this side, Chairman Kang received the news that his son had woken up and was extremely happy. After waiting for so long, he finally received good news. The whole family showed happy smiles, planning to quickly go to the hospital to visit Chayiel. But Madam Choi hesitated because she had harmed her son to this point, so she didn't have the face to see him again. Her husband and son left her, and she hid in the room alone, quietly bursting into tears. Chayiel being able to wake up was the happiest thing. At this time, Chairman Kang thanked Dong Hi for taking care of Chayiel during this time. Sungwook said emotionally that it was because Chayiel couldn't let go of Dong Hi that he persisted to the end. Hearing this, Chayiel lying on the bed nodded slightly. In the evening, Madam Choi waited until everyone had left and quietly went to the hospital. Seeing that he had recovered, she also felt relieved. Over the years, she had never cared about this son and had almost killed him. Thinking of this, she deeply regretted her actions, but Chayiel didn't blame her. Seeing her son say that, she felt even more remorseful and also thanked Chayiel for waking up. This was also the first time he had heard such warm words from his mother. Just like that, the two had resolved all their hatred. Over here, Sunungju asked Captain Han to help her find a new job, but her bad news had spread everywhere, making it very difficult for him. Seeing Captain Han say that, Sunungju had no choice but to leave in disappointment. At this time, Chayiel was so eager to be discharged from the hospital that he wanted to sneak out for a walk, but because he had been lying in bed for too long, his muscles had no strength. So Dong Hi pushed him in a wheelchair and took him out for some fresh air. She really wanted to know why he had risked his life to save her. Chayiel seriously said that to him. She was more precious than his own life. And Dong Hi also had Himchan, who needed her to take care of him. He felt that the most correct thing in his life was to love her. So he used his life to protect Dong Hi, and also had a reason to continue living. So his only wish now was to live happily with Dong Hi until old age. She also wanted to be with him forever. They decided to start over. The two finally had a short, happy time. Going through the boundary between life and death had proven the lasting love between them. Today, Himchan came to visit Uncle Chayiel, and he was finally about to have the father he had wanted. The days to come would be full of happiness. But things didn't stop here. Sunungju hadn't received the appropriate punishment yet. Today, she was going to a job interview, still with that confident demeanor, feeling like she was still the boss of the world. As expected, the interviewer asked her why she had resigned from her old company. Sunungju explained that it was for personal reasons, thinking that if she said that, others wouldn't know about her bad behavior in the past, but the other party wasn't stupid. They just didn't want to expose her. Seeing Sunungju still stubbornly covering up the truth, The other party didn't give her any face, and bluntly announced that they knew all the things she had done at the old company. With such a bad character, she still dared to apply for a job. Sunungju was immediately speechless and had to leave in resentment. Sunungju is really shameless. They don't want to work with someone who doesn't know shame like you. On this side, Madame Choi was trying to whitewash herself, turning back to being a good person. Seeing her husband, she hurriedly and meekly bowed and eagerly ran to pour water, but it was useless. Chairman Kang still decided to divorce her. Madame Choi didn't expect her husband to really do it this time, and had never thought about the outrageous things she had done. Chairman Kang told his wife to quickly prepare the divorce papers and then meet him in court. From his brother Chayiel, he learned that a lot of things had happened while he was in a coma. He had divorced Sunungju, and his father had also given up the position of chairman, and was even about to divorce his mother. Sungwook hoped that his father could give his mother another chance, so he came to ask Chayiel to help him persuade him. Only his words could make him change his mind. On this side, after Chayiel woke up, Dong Hi always had a smile on her face. Seeing this, her aunt and uncle were much relieved. Dong Hi told everyone that she and Chayiel had gotten back together. Madame Jau Suk didn't object either. After all, he was the one who saved her granddaughter's life, so it could be regarded as atonement, and also advised her granddaughter not to feel guilty, believing that her brother in heaven would also bless them. Now, they were only waiting for the court to convict Sungwook. Dong Hi received a call from a colleague. It turned out that the company was preparing to recruit new interns, asking Dong Hi if she wanted to go back to work. This was originally a job she loved. How could she refuse the opportunity to return to the company? At this point, everything seemed to be developing in a good direction, and there was also her younger aunt and Uncle Jang were about to get married. They were busy preparing for the wedding, not knowing if it was due to the power of love or not. But her younger aunt was getting more and more beautiful. Switching scenes, Chairman Kang went to the hospital to visit his son. Seeing him recover day by day, he felt relieved. Chayiel advised him to withdraw the divorce papers with his mother. Hearing this, Chairman Kang was surprised. Madame Choi treated Chayiel like that, but even now, he was still speaking up for her. Chayiel said that Madame Choi had sincerely apologized to him, so he wanted to forgive her. How long would the cycles of vengeance last? He didn't want everyone to live in hatred forever. If he really divorced his wife, he would feel guilty and live in regret for the rest of his life. Hearing his son say that, Chairman Kang hesitated a little. Did she really intend to repent this time, or should he give her a chance? Not long after, Chayiel was finally discharged from the hospital, which was inseparable from Dong Hi's hard work. Thanks to her meticulous care, Chayiel was able to recover so quickly. At this time, Sungwook also came to the hospital to pick up his younger brother. He looked much gentler than before, and the clothes he was wearing were also very handsome. Over here, Madame Choi began to soften and beg her husband to give her a chance, promising that she wouldn't cause trouble again in the future. In fact, Chairman Kang had listened to Chayiel and quietly withdrew the divorce papers. After this incident, Madame Choi had learned a lesson and didn't dare to bully Chayiel unreasonably again. Not long after, Sungwook came before Dong Hi's brother's memorial tablet, apologizing for his criminal actions. Although it was late, Sungwook's willingness to admit his mistakes was somewhat comforting to the deceased. The trial day quickly arrived in an atmosphere of suffocating tension. After speaking on behalf of the victim's family, they had long forgiven the two brothers, and they hoped that the court could reduce their sentences. The court announced that the defendant, Kang Chayiel, was innocent, and the defendant, Kang Sungwook, was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Before leaving, Sungwook asked his younger brother to take care of their parents, and Chayiel told his brother not to worry. At the court, the two brothers were being tried. Dong Hi, the sister of the victim, had fallen in love with the man standing before the defendant's dock. Fortunately, Chayiel's situation was very optimistic because he was not the driver, and at that time he had wanted to call the police. Plus, Dong Hi's request for a reduced sentence was finally ruled innocent, and the mastermind, Sungwook, was sentenced to 6 months in prison. This may have been the lightest result for the crimes of both, and Sungwook was willing to serve his sentence to atone for the sins he had committed. Before being taken away by the police, he didn't forget to bow to apologize to his parents. During the time he wasn't at home, Chayiel returned to take care of his parents. At this time, Chayiel was still concerned about his brother's affairs. Seeing this, Chairman Kang comforted his son that Sungwook had to take responsibility, and this was the appropriate punishment. And this time, Madame Choi didn't blame Chayiel, but blamed herself. If she hadn't forced the two brothers not to call the police that year, things wouldn't have come to this. But in this world, there is no what if. Now, regretting it was useless. Madame Choi shed tears of regret. Her blind love for her son had ruined her son's future. After everything had calmed down, Madame Jau Suk still had an unspeakable feeling of remorse, feeling that her nephew had died too tragically. Well, this was his fate, and it had finally ended. At this time, a colleague called to inform Dong Hi that she had been accepted back into the company. After all, Dong Hi had done a good job in the past. She quickly informed Chayiel of this news, wanting to surprise him. This time, after returning, Chayiel had the motivation to work. Ms. Bang read the news about Sungwook and quickly informed her daughter, but Sunungju had already known about it, but pretended that it didn't matter to her. Her mother suggested that she visit her ex-husband once. After all, they were once a family, and Sungwook had treated her mother and daughter so well in the past, but Sunungju had no intention of doing so. They had divorced, and now only regarded each other as strangers. Sunungju told her mother not to worry about other people's business. At this time, she was only concerned about finding a job, but what large company would hire someone like her? So Sunungju went online to find a small design company, declaring that she was confident enough to lead that company. On this side, Dong Hi's family was immersed in a joyful and lively atmosphere, celebrating Dong Hi's appointment and the wedding of her younger aunt. This old aunt was finally going to marry. With Dong Hi at the door, the whole family was immersed in happiness. Seeing his sister about to get married, Mr. Kim felt a little reluctant. The younger aunt told her brother to rest assured, she would definitely be happy. In fact, Uncle Jang couldn't believe that he could still meet someone he loved other than his wife at this age, thinking that his deceased wife had brought the other party to his side. On the wedding day, the two held a small party with the participation of family members. The atmosphere was very warm, and under everyone's blessings, the two exchanged wedding rings. Just when they thought the wedding would end in perfection, to heat up the atmosphere, they suggested that Uncle Jang carry the bride out of the wedding hall. As a result, he tried too hard and fell, making his nose bleed. Switching scenes, the Kangs went to visit their son. Although he had to go to prison, Sungwook felt more relieved than ever before, as if he had atoned for his sins. He advised his parents not to worry about him, and also urged Chayiel and Dong Hi to get married soon, without waiting for him to get out of prison. But how could Chayiel do that? After all, they were family, and he believed Dong Hi would understand him. Over here, Sunungju had scheduled an interview with that company, feeling that nothing would happen this time, thinking that she could transform again in the future, but would everything go smoothly according to her wishes? Everyone in the office warmly welcomed the return of Dong Hi and Chayiel. The office returned to its lively appearance, only Sunungju was missing. The colleagues regretted. It seems that due to her bad reputation spreading far and wide, it would be difficult for her to step into the job market in the future. She was probably struggling to find a job, and they heard she was preparing to go to an interview, not knowing how the situation was. On this side, Sunungju's opening was very good, and the interviewer seemed very satisfied with her. Perhaps the other party still didn't know about her bad deeds, so they happily told Sunungju to start working tomorrow. She happily called and informed her mother. When she hung up the phone, she prepared to leave and found her necklace had fallen in the office. At this time, the interviewer had learned all the bad news related to Sunungju from the female employee. Even though the company was small, they couldn't just recruit someone like that to work. There was really no conscience. The interviewer was seriously impressed and so sent a rejection text. At this time, Himchan returned from school and happened to see Sunungju and ran over to talk to her. Seeing her son, Sunungju immediately exploded, telling him to go away quickly. But after taking a few steps, the boy ran back and handed Sunungju a handkerchief, telling her to use this to wipe her tears and that he would sit here until she stopped. Sunungju had abandoned her son that year, and now that she had returned to zero, she wanted to snatch her son back. Looking at the well-behaved and sensible Himchan, she couldn't help but burst into tears, not knowing if it was out of shame or regret for having abandoned her son. No matter what, this woman didn't deserve to be forgiven. What was even more uncomfortable was that Sunungju even took the boy to eat, not knowing what she was planning. Before, she had tried every means possible to make Himchan leave her life, but now she wanted to regain custody. It was only the children who didn't understand things, and Himchan was kind, feeling that the other party needed someone by their side. At this time, Dong Hi returned from work and found that Himchan hadn't returned home yet, thinking that he was playing at a classmate's house. When she picked up her phone to call, he was standing in front of the gate with Sunungju. Unexpectedly, Sunungju asked Himchan to keep it a secret and not tell anyone that he had met her today. Looking at her son's back as he entered the house, Sunungju's emotions were very complicated. When he got home, Himchan kept his promise and did not tell Dong Hi about this. He only said that he had gone to his classmate's house to play and just came back. Perhaps this was also the first time he lied to his mother. Back home, Sunungju isn't upset about failing the interview at all. In fact, she's unusually cheerful, which makes her mother suspicious. Given Sunungju's usual personality, she would have thrown a fit by now. Could it be that Himchan has helped her correct her bad habits? Meanwhile, Chairman Kang learns from Chayiel that the design team has been missing a key member for 3 months. The company can't operate properly like that, and it makes him suspect that the current management isn't fulfilling its responsibilities. Chairman Kang immediately calls to inquire, but the person on the other end tells him not to worry. Will Chairman Kang be able to reclaim his original position in the company? That night before bed, Sunungju remembers the short time she spent with her son and smiles happily to herself. Ever since Sungwook went to prison, Mrs. Choi has been unable to eat or sleep, worrying about how her son is living in there. Seeing her like this, Chayiel quickly offers to visit him regularly and encourages her not to worry too much, believing that Sungwook wouldn't want to see his mother in such a state of anxiety. Strangely, Sunungju suddenly turns into a caring mother, picking Himchan up from school every day and taking him out for delicious food. The restaurant owner even mistakes them for mother and son. Upon hearing this, Sunungju isn't angry at all, but rather asks if she really looks like the boy's mother. The owner confirms that she definitely does. It's impossible to feel at ease with someone like this. Later, Mrs. Bang accidentally sees her daughter holding Himchan's hand on the street and is horrified. As always, Sunungju instructs the boy not to tell anyone that he met her, taking advantage of his innocence and making him lie again and again. Then, the two exchange contact information and promise to meet again. Meanwhile, Chayiel visits his brother in prison, and Sungwook is concerned about whether Sunungju is doing okay. It seems that he still loves his ex-wife very much. It's hard to understand him. That kind of woman doesn't deserve his love. Back home, Mrs. Bang worries that her daughter is becoming close to Himchan and that the boy will be hurt when he learns the truth. But Sunungju doesn't care about that, arguing that what's the big deal if he finds out. How can a mother say such a thing? Even her own mother can't stand to listen to it. That night before bed, Dong Hi asks her son what he did today. After thinking for a while, he decides not to tell his mother about meeting Sunungju. Dong Hi would be very sad if Himchan lied to her. Meanwhile, Sunungju looks at a picture of her son with a happy expression. When she sees a picture of Dong Hi with her son, the smile on her face immediately disappears. At that moment, Dong Hi discovers that Himchan has Sunungju's number in his phone and is shocked. Seeing this, the boy finally tells the truth. Dong Hi's expression signals that a war is about to break out. Dong Hi has raised her nephew as her own son for 8 years. Now, Sunungju wants to reclaim custody. She's shocked to learn that Himchan has been secretly meeting Sunungju recently. The boy quickly apologizes for lying, but he's just a child and naively thinks that Sunungju cares about him. Dong Hi is afraid that her son will overthink things, so she doesn't say anything more, only instructing him not to meet Sunungju anymore. But Sunungju isn't someone who can give up so easily. Before, she hated it when people said she and Himchan looked alike. Now, she's strangely happy when people praise them as mother and son. Her mother regrets that if her daughter hadn't abandoned the boy, the three of them would have had a happy life. She clearly loves her grandson very much, but it's too late to say anything now. It's all in the past. Hearing this, Sunungju is even more determined to win back Himchan. Meanwhile, Dong Hi senses danger and knows that someone like Sunungju can resort to any means to achieve her goals. She's very afraid that Himchan will be hurt. Because she feels uneasy, she tells Chayiel about Sunungju secretly meeting Himchan. Someone who has always hated children is now changing 180 degrees. There must be some sort of plot. Chayiel offers to go meet with Sunungju directly, but Dong Hi thinks it would be more appropriate for her to handle it. Incredibly, Sunungju hangs up on Dong Hi when she calls. Afterward, as if nothing had happened, she goes to pick Himchan up from school, wanting to take him out to play. But Himchan promised his mom that he wouldn't meet with Sunungju anymore, so he refused her invitation. As Sunungju is wondering what to do, Himchan's classmate comes up and asks who this woman is. Seeing her opportunity, Sunungju says she'll take them all out for fried chicken. How can innocent children resist that temptation? Just like that, Himchan is dragged along by his friend. After they're done eating, Sunungju calmly takes the boy home, but Himchan is sad because he broke his promise to his mom. He doesn't understand why his mom won't let him see the pretty lady. Hearing this, Sunungju quickly says she knows the reason. Just as she's about to reveal the truth, a little girl suddenly runs up and interrupts their conversation. So Sunungju keeps her mouth shut. Back home, she calms down. She was really getting too eager. At that moment, Dong Hi calls and asks to meet to talk. Everyone can guess what they'll talk about. Sunungju puts on an innocent face and says Himchan is her child, so she has the right to see him. What a shameless face. Even though she's his biological mother, she's never been responsible as a mother. Dong Hi doesn't allow Sunungju to take Himchan away, nor will she allow her to hurt him. But Sunungju brazenly says she can see Himchan whenever she wants. Dong Hi absolutely forbids them from seeing each other, but Sunungju cruelly says she doesn't know what she'll do then, challenging Dong Hi, putting her in a difficult position. Dong Hi is very afraid that Sunungju will reveal the truth, because if Himchan finds out about his real identity, he will be deeply affected. Dong Hi's sister-in-law suggests letting Sunungju see Himchan to prevent her from going crazy. Just don't let her tell him the truth. Perhaps it's the best way for now, but Dong Hi doesn't want to do that. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bang sees Sunungju clinging to Himchan and asks her what she wants to do. What if the child finds out that he was abandoned and is devastated? But Sunungju doesn't care about that. Mrs. Bang asks if she plans to use Himchan to threaten Dong Hi. Sunungju doesn't want to listen to her anymore and goes to her room. Mrs. Bang scolds her, saying this is what a mother should do. This kind of person won't know repentance even when they die. The next day, Sunungju prepares food, saying she wants to go out and play, so it looks like she's planning to take Himchan with her. Soon after, Sunungju calls Dong Hi, and she immediately asks to take Himchan out to play. Dong Hi angrily scolds her, asking if she's crazy, then hangs up. If you think Sunungju will stop here, you're wrong. There's no way she's that docile. Soon after, she goes to Dong Hi's house. She easily abandoned her son years ago, but now she's determined to get him back. Tell me that this kind of person only exists in movies, right? Surely there isn't this kind of person in real life. After many days, she finally reveals her true colors, announcing that she's claiming custody of Himchan. Because Sunungju's ambition is so great, seeing her son once a week would already be a great favor to her. But now she's going back on her word and demanding Himchan. This action completely infuriates Dong Hi. At first, she still felt some sympathy for Sunungju because Sunungju carried and gave birth to Himchan, thinking she truly loved him. It seems that Sunungju just wants to satisfy her competitiveness. She even tries to justify herself, saying she loves Himchan very much, but Dong Hi no longer believes her words. Finally, she warns Sunungju not to dream of seeing Himchan again. Even so, with Sunungju's personality, she definitely won't obey quietly. Dong Hi is afraid that she'll find an opportunity to approach Himchan again. So she asks Jau Suk to closely escort Himchan to and from school during this time, not allowing Sunungju to get near him. Afterward, Dong Hi deletes Sunungju's phone number from Himchan's phone and instructs her son not to meet that woman again. Fortunately, Himchan isn't sad about this, and he always listens to his mom. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bang waits for her grandson at home, but only Himchan returns. Seeing her daughter's bad mood, she can guess what happened. Sunungju decides to legally fight for custody of Himchan, feeling that being his biological mother is the most favorable condition and believing that she can definitely win custody. Meanwhile, everyone reminds Dong Hi that with Sunungju's personality, she might resort to the law to regain custody. If that really happens, they wonder which side the law will take. Uncle Seo tells Dong Hi to discuss this matter with Chayiel and have him ask his lawyer about how to handle this situation. Sunungju alone has made the whole family anxious. The next day at work, Dong Hi tells Chayiel about this matter. He tells her not to worry too much. According to his understanding of the law, in this situation they usually consider who the child will be happier living with, so Dong Hi still has the advantage. No matter what anyone says, Himchan is still his son. How could he let people take his son away? He won't allow that to happen, so she should just trust him. Chayiel was right when Sunungju sought legal advice. She learned that with her current situation, don't even mention custody, she doesn't have any other rights either. Hearing this, Sunungju feels ridiculous. She gave birth to him, so why doesn't the biological mother have any rights? Perhaps she has forgotten how she abandoned Himchan in the past, thinking that simply giving birth to a child makes her worthy of being a mother. The lawyer says that based on the current situation, Himchan continuing to live with Dong Hi is the happiest choice for both sides, so the law will not grant her custody. Sunungju is ashamed and angry, criticizing the lawyer as incompetent and saying she'll find someone else who is competent. But even after finding many lawyers, the answers are all the same as the first time. Some lawyers even say that being allowed to see him twice a month is already very lenient, so it seems that the law is not on her side either. Meanwhile, Dong Hi also hears the answer from Chayiel and dares to breathe a sigh of relief. This time, Sunungju must give up. Before, she was still occasionally allowed to see her son, but this time, it's truly over. All stupidity must be paid for. Her mother blames Sunungju for being too greedy, saying that this is all her daughter's own doing. Changing the scene, Dong Hi's sister-in-law suddenly has labor pains, and everyone rushes her to the hospital. Soon after, she gives birth to a lovely baby boy. Receiving the news, the younger sister-in-law can't help but admire her because she wants to have a child with Uncle Jang. Suddenly, she feels nauseous right after. Meanwhile, the company announces the good news that Dong Hi has been promoted to a regular employee, and assistant Kim has also been promoted to team leader. For the time being, everything is fine except for Sunungju, who still doesn't know repentance. Dong Hi has blacklisted her phone number, causing Sunungju to harbor hatred. To see her son, she stands in front of the school gate, but Himchan is picked up by Mrs. Jau Suk first. So she goes to his talent class to pick him up and runs into Chayiel and Dong Hi, who have come to pick him up on time. Sunungju stays up all night, and at this point, she decides that if she can't have him, she'll destroy everything, preparing to tell Himchan everything. If he knows that she's his real mother, she believes he will choose to live with her. Miss Bang tells her not to daydream, saying that giving birth but not raising is not what a mother is. A truth that everyone understands. She advises her daughter not to hurt Himchan, but Sunungju no longer cares about anything. She goes alone to the school gate and runs into Jau Suk, who is there to pick him up. She also happens to meet her son's classmate and takes advantage of the boy to lure Himchan out. Sunungju has truly resorted to any means to achieve her goals, standing in front of Himchan and telling him that she is his real mother. Himchan doesn't understand and asks again. She says that she's the one who gave birth to him. Sunungju revealed the truth to Himchan, causing him great shock. The person who raised him since he was little isn't his biological mother. Even an adult would be greatly affected by this, let alone a 9-year-old child. Sunungju has truly caused Himchan severe emotional harm. She wonders how a mother can treat her child like this. Doesn't she feel any pain? Himchan can't believe it's true and returns home crying. Chayiel is also present and thinks his son fought with his friend. He's shocked when the boy cries and asks Dong Hi if she's really his biological mother. Dong Hi is stunned. Faced with Himchan's fatal question, she's flustered and doesn't know how to answer. Chayiel is also very surprised and asks, learning that Sunungju told him everything. Himchan turns to ask each member of the family, hoping that what Sunungju said is false and that she's just lying to him. But reality is always cruel. Dong Hi wants to explain, but the boy gets agitated and runs back to his room, not wanting to hear anything more. His little heart has been deeply wounded. The boy locks himself in his room and sobs uncontrollably. No matter what Dong Hi says, it's useless. Jau Suk is filled with anger and wants to go to Sunungju's house to kill her, but Dong Hi stops her. This time she has to step forward. As always, Sunungju doesn't realize that her actions were wrong. Dong Hi grits her teeth in anger. She has stabbed a knife into Himchan's heart. How can she have the face to call herself his mother? Mrs. Bang now knows that her daughter has caused a big problem, but she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She even blames Dong Hi for not lying to the boy in the first place and for pretending to be Himchan's mother. Even the biological mother beside her can't accept this person, scolding Sunungju and asking if she's crazy. How can she say such things? Seeing her mother siding with Dong Hi, Sunungju is furious, but Dong Hi's next words silence her. She would rather die than let Himchan be hurt because he was abandoned by his biological mother. Even Mrs. Bang can't forgive her daughter's actions, feeling that she doesn't deserve to be a mother. Dong Hi returns home. Himchan is no longer crying, but he's still hiding under the covers and refuses to talk. It's clear that the boy is very confused, believing that all adults are liars. Seeing Himchan like this, Dong Hi feels incredibly sorry for him and can only silently stay by his side. Meanwhile, Dong Hi's sister-in-law has given birth, and the whole family is happy when Mrs. Jau Suk suddenly mentions Sunungju's matter. Hearing the news, everyone can't help but exclaim, "What kind of person is she? How can a normal person do such cruel things?" As if making things this bad wasn't enough, She even wants to convince Himchan to come live with her. Her mother tells her to wake up and not cause any more trouble. Currently, the person who is suffering is Dong Hi. She's deeply tormented because she didn't protect Himchan. What she couldn't have expected was that early in the morning, Himchan, when no one was paying attention, secretly left the house, causing everyone great anxiety. Calling his phone, they didn't see him answer the machine. So Himchan decided to run away from home. The whole family split up to search everywhere, but Himchan was nowhere to be found. An emergency. Dong Hi urgently calls to inform Chayiel, and this time, even the family of President Kang knew about the story that Sunungju caused. When Choi received the news, she could only sigh. Only a crazy person like Sunungju could do this. It seems that the story of Sungwook and Sunungju's reunion is impossible. Bringing a depraved woman would only bring harm. Dong Hi has excluded no possibility. Getting to Sunungju's home to search, to know that Sunungju criticized and scolded Dong Hi's family, that a child can't be watched over. I don't understand why she can utter these words. Wasn't it something that happened to her, or what to make things right? She is the type of person who would not recognize to repent or reflect, even upon death. Finally, Dong Hi has no choice but to report to the police, worried that something bad will happen to Himchan. Dong Hi bursts into tears of fear, and Chayiel quickly pulls her into his arms to comfort her. At this moment, Himchan is sitting on a park bench, watching a mother and child walk by. Remembering the happy times with his mom, he cries and calls out, "Mommy!" The boy sat alone crying in the park. After learning that Dong Hi was not his biological mother, Himchan runs away from home, making Dong Hi extremely worried. The whole family searched everywhere for him. Every possible place was searched, but Himchan was still nowhere to be found. When asked of two old men in the park, they said that they had seen a boy sitting over there. But when the two people chased after, Himchan was no longer there. Dong Hi collapsed, considering the worst-case scenario. What if something happens to the boy? If anything happened to him, she wouldn't want to live anymore. Chayiel quickly comforts her, saying that nothing will happen to Himchan. It can be seen that Dong Hi has completely exhausted herself after a day of searching. Everyone returns home wearily, and now they can only wait for news from the police. Dong Hi goes to the police station again to inquire, begging them to quickly find the boy. After a day of running around searching, Dong Hi is helped back home by Chayiel, and the whole family is anxiously awaiting news. Himchan is still in the park, and in reality, he has nowhere else to go or just wants to be alone. Mrs. Bang, worried for her grandson, tells Sunungju to call and check on him. Dong Hi mistakenly thinks it's the police calling with news, and when she sees it's Sunungju calling, she disappointedly hangs up. Jau Suk said that even after this point, there would be a call that was received by the call for to the person. This type of person is not at all worthy to be known. A little later, Chayiel's phone rings. The caller is Sunungju, and in reality, he can't stand her either, wanting to find her to settle the score. Chayiel angrily scolds her on the phone, and every word is so deadly that Sunungju can't say anything. She loves herself more than Himchan. Saying that she needs Himchan is just to satisfy herself. To achieve her goals, she even hurts the boy. Does someone as selfish as her have the right to be a mother? After hanging up, it takes Sunungju a long time to calm down. Chayiel's words are like a knife stabbing deep into her heart, and combined with Himchan running away from home, even someone as cruel can't sit still like nothing happened. Seeing that it's getting dark, Dong Hi becomes even more anxious, and she restlessly waits for Himchan to return. Chayiel comforts her, telling her to calm down and wait a little longer for good news. As expected, the police, while on patrol, found Himchan sleeping soundly in the park. When Chayiel and Dong Hi decide to go out again to search, they suddenly receive a phone call from the police with good news. The whole family rushes out, and Himchan has caused the whole family a scare. Seeing that Himchan has been found, everyone dares to breathe a sigh of relief. Dong Hi arrives at the police station and sees that her son is safe, so she runs over and hugs him tightly, so glad that nothing happened. After the events, the two take Himchan home, and the whole family runs out to greet him. Seeing that the boy hasn't eaten anything all day, Jau Suk feels incredibly sorry for him, and Himchan is an understanding child. He no longer resents Dong Hi. Just like that, Dong Hi and Chayiel stand next to each other, feeding the boy. Himchan even praises that the food is much tastier than usual, probably because he was so hungry. Sunungju is remembering Chayiel's words from today, and the more she thinks about it, the more uncomfortable she feels, not knowing that Himchan has been found. Chayiel returns home and announces that everyone doesn't need to worry because the boy has safely returned. Sungwook tells his younger brother to call and inform Sunungju to avoid worrying her. Sure enough, the only person who cares about Sunungju is Sungwook. Perhaps he has been blinded by love. Chayiel agrees and returns to his room, sending a message informing Sunungju. Receiving the news that Himchan has safely returned, Sunungju breathes a sigh of relief. Over here, before going to bed, Dong Hi bathes Himchan and cleans him up as usual, wanting to talk a little with him. Unexpectedly, Sunungju, worried about her son, has secretly come to the house and is hiding in a corner. Dong Hi decides to tell the boy everything, including the truth about his parentage. The sensitive Himchan has already somewhat guessed that he was abandoned by his mother, but Dong Hi immediately denies it. She can't let the child be hurt, only saying that she wanted to raise him, so she kept him by her side. Hearing this, Sunungju, standing outside, feels incredibly ashamed and doesn't dare to face her son. Dong Hi grew up lacking the love of her parents, so she understands how pitiful a child without parents is, hoping that Himchan won't be like her, always being pointed at, wanting to give him complete love. Himchan deeply feels this. Even though mom didn't give birth to him, no matter what others say, she's still his mom, and he knows that mom loves him very much. After hearing it, Sunungju burst into tears of sorrow. She finally knows where she went wrong. For Dong Hi, Himchan's existence is the most important thing. For him, Dong Hi can give up everything, including her happiness, while Sunungju is the opposite, thinking only of herself from beginning to end, never caring about the boy's feelings. Until that night, witnessing Dong Hi's treatment of Himchan, she realized that she wasn't qualified to be a mother. Sunungju finally sheds tears of regret. Meanwhile, Dong Hi and Himchan are back to normal. Dong Hi asks Himchan why he ran away. In reality, the boy didn't have bad intentions, just felt sorry, and wanted to make his mom worry a little. Himchan has now realized his mistake, promising not to make his mom worry anymore. After this incident, Dong Hi feels that she shouldn't stop Himchan from seeing his mother anymore because the boy also has his own thoughts and rights. Finally, she decides to stop, allowing the two mothers and sons to meet, but Himchan, after learning the truth, doesn't know how to face his biological mother, and he also needs time to accept the truth. The next day at the table, everyone is very concerned about Himchan, and it can be seen that the whole family spoils the boy very much. Growing up in a family like this, Himchan is really happy. Mrs. Jau Suk tells Dong Hi to bring Chayiel home for dinner tonight, as they worked hard all day yesterday looking for Himchan, and by the way, discuss their marriage. Hearing that she's going to Dong Hi's house for dinner, Chayiel is as happy as a child being given candy, hinting that he will give her mother a certain big shock to his mother. At lunchtime, Dong Hi plans to go eat with her colleagues when she receives a call from Sunungju. But this time, she doesn't plan to cause trouble, but has completely transformed into a different person. In reality, Dong Hi also wants to meet with her, allowing the other party to see Himchan in the future. Hearing this, Sunungju suppresses her tears of guilt. After everything, Dong Hi still can't hate her, so that is not something she can do. Next, Sunungju sincerely apologizes to Dong Hi, admitting all her mistakes, guaranteeing that she will not appear in front of Himchan again. She finally understands that the moment she abandoned her son at her in-laws' house that year, she lost her qualifications to be a mother. She's very grateful to Dong Hi for raising Himchan so well in her place, and she's also happy that Chayiel has become the boy's father so she can rest assured. She promises not to appear in front of Himchan again, and she says that this is the only thing she can do for Himchan. Sunungju visits her son for the last time but only hides in a corner and silently watches, sending her farewell. She knows that this is the best way for her son. Switching scenes, Mrs. Jau Suk goes out to buy nourishing medicine for his daughter and accidentally bumps into Mrs. Choi, but this chance meeting isn't very pleasant. Jau Suk sees that Mrs. Choi almost ran over her without getting out of the car to check on her, feeling that the other party is a terrible person. Seeing that Jau Suk isn't someone who is easily bullied, she hands her a check, intending to use money to buy peace. This action makes Jau Suk feel insulted, scolding Choi and asking if she thinks money can solve everything. Even though she doesn't know how much money is on this check, she expresses that if something like this is to be handled, it would happen here. The scene is truly impossible not to laugh at. Jau Suk's expression is also too real. Afterwards, Choi goes to the company and tells her two sons about what happened earlier. Hearing what she had to say, her children's reaction caused Chairman Kang to scold her. Choi, in turn, thought it was appropriate. Anyway, they would never meet again. Seo also heard about the story, and his reaction caused him to criticize her, and he stated he was starting to see that the money had blinded his wife, throwing away any sense of dignity as a result. Jau Suk, in response to him, would let Choi know that, with a certainty of this being an action she was willing to partake in by throwing money at the woman's face, and, in response to it, walk. It is not known what would have happened with those actions if there had been a meeting between the two sides of those two in-laws. After finishing the dinner at Dong Hi's house, Chayiel takes out the secret gift. It turns out that he has prepared matching pairs of necklaces, identical to the birthday gift Dong Hi gave him, believing that this can connect the three of them, then personally putting the gift on Dong Hi and finally putting it on Himchan. Just like that, the three reveal bright smiles. As with what happened with Chayiel, with Sunungju is what happened, and with how it has taken a path to a fortunate end. She seemed, as a result of what happened with and as a product of those actions, to have her head struck a headache that was coming in with the force of blows, and as a result, went quickly to the medicine store and pharmacy that sold those medications. But as she went on her path from the store back to her house, Sunungju had a sudden sense of her view being that of the spinning of the world. In that moment, after that thought had occurred in her thoughts, Sunungju fainted, passing out onto the road. The doctor comforted her that if she had surgery, the success rate would be very high, but it would affect the optic nerve and leave sequelae, bluntly saying that there would be a possibility of blindness. Sunungju couldn't believe the truth. Was this God's punishment for her evil deeds? Sunungju left the hospital like a lost soul. She accidentally ran into Sungwook, who was also here. After exchanging a few words, Sunungju was about to leave when Sungwook called her back. He wanted to sit down and talk with her. Although the two could not return to the way they were before, Sungwook still hoped that Sunungju would live well, and as for the things in the past, felt that everything was over. Sunungju sincerely apologized to him, and the two gradually resolved their conflicts. Sungwook told her to come to him if she had any difficulties, and promised to help her find a job. Her ex-husband's concern made her feel very guilty. Didn't he hate her? And then she got up and left because she was too ashamed. Returning home, Sunungju finally burst into tears. She blamed herself for doing so many evil things, and yet everyone still tolerated her. Mrs. Bang went to her room and asked what had happened. Sunungju said in tears that she wanted to spend the rest of her life paying for the mistakes she had made, but now there was no opportunity anymore, and her mother didn't understand what she was talking about. And Sunungju continued to cry in pain. Today, Chayiel brought the two mothers and sons to play at home, and Choi looked at the boy and remembered Sunungju, feeling uncomfortable, but everyone shouldn't forget that the specialty of our obedient Himchan is making others happy. In just one note, he runs over to give Choi a bouquet, saying that it was specially prepared for her. It turned out that last time they came to play at home, she accidentally heard her say that she liked this kind of flower, so the boy remembered this, and just like that, Choi's attitude towards Himchan immediately became gentle and warm. Chairman Kang planned to meet with Dong Hi's family this weekend to discuss their marriage. And after their marriage, Chayiel decided to move back home as planned. And this news made Chairman Kang happy. It can be seen that he also likes children very much, especially a lovely boy like Himchan, and even a cold person like Choi has to laugh. Having children in the house is indeed very lively, and Chairman Kang also likes the boy very much. Meanwhile, Mrs. Myung-suk's family is surrounding the baby, and seeing the way the youngest daughter is holding the child, Seo regrets that if she had married a little earlier, she would have a child to hold now. Unexpectedly, the youngest daughter is really pregnant. This news makes Mrs. Myung-suk very worried because the youngest daughter is already old, and when the child goes to college, she will be 70, and Mr. Jang will be 80. Just thinking about it is scary. At this moment, Mrs. Myung-suk realizes that Dong Hi hasn't come home yet, worrying that her granddaughter is being bullied by her mother-in-law, but clearly she has been overthinking it because of Himchan's loveliness. Choi loves the two mothers and sons even more, admiring Dong Hi for teaching the child so well, proving that she's not a bad person, and finally happily keeps the two mothers and sons for dinner. Returning home, Himchan gives his mother a red envelope that Choi gave him. A person with money is indeed different. Myung-suk immediately worries about her position, afraid that Himchan will be bought off by Choi and won't like this grandmother anymore. So she asks Himchan which is more beautiful, her or that grandmother. Himchan, faced with a difficult question, quickly changes the subject, saying that he's very sleepy. Myung-suk, unwilling to give up, decides to dress up in a glamorous way to crush the other mother-in-law. But unexpectedly, the two have already met, and the best part is yet to come. At night, Sungwook, while processing work, suddenly remembers when he met Sunungju at the hospital, he felt that something was wrong with her, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was overthinking it. Meanwhile, Sunungju is tormented by pain, hurrying out to take painkillers. Seeing her mother coming, she pretends that nothing has happened, even saying that she wants to go on a trip with her mother, but God doesn't give her that opportunity. And early the next morning, Bang sees her daughter fainted on the floor. Dong Hi pulls Chayiel into her room, causing him to secretly rejoice and have dirty thoughts. Unexpectedly, she has been overthinking it. It turns out that Dong Hi wants to personally make wedding clothes for him. This is really a very romantic thing. Unexpectedly, Chayiel starts teasing her, saying that he doesn't want to wear that bizarre style outfit at such an important event, and isn't looking down on his girlfriend's skills. The two scold each other affectionately, looking very sweet. Then, Dong Hi takes a tape measure to measure Chayiel. The distance is so close that he can't stand it. He quickly hugs her, wanting to take this opportunity to warm up their relationship. But after all, there are still people in the house. What if Himchan sees them? Chayiel, how can he miss this opportunity? Forcing Dong Hi to kiss him to let him go, and with no other way is he not able to take over the demands set out. Just as he's about to act, Himchan appears, asking what the two of them are doing. It seems that Chayiel has to be wary of this little tale in the future. After going out, Himchan quickly informs everyone that Uncle Chayiel and Mom are hugging each other, and everyone laughs after hearing it, having already guessed the scene in the room. Then, Dong Hi and Chayiel also go downstairs to eat, and seeing the couple, the whole family looks at each other and smiles, causing Dong Hi to feel embarrassed, with only Himchan being confused, not understanding what is happening. Over here, Bang takes her daughter to the hospital, and at this time she learns about her daughter's illness. The doctor says that the only way now is to quickly perform surgery and not delay any longer, telling her to quickly persuade Sunungju to have surgery. Unexpectedly, while her mother wasn't there, Sunungju secretly returned home. Her mother told her to return to the hospital immediately, but Sunungju had lost the motivation to live, so she didn't want to have surgery. And besides, even if the surgery is successful, there's a possibility that she will lose her eyesight, so it's better to die. Seeing her daughter like this, a mother can't help but feel sorry. Over here, Sungwook is arranging work for Sunungju, and if he knew her current situation, I don't know how he would feel. At this time, while Bang is trying to persuade her daughter to have surgery, Sungwook calls. Sunungju quickly hangs up, and then he sends a message informing her that he has arranged a suitable job for her. Perhaps the movie is about to come to an end. Sunungju's condition is getting worse, and Bang has no choice but to ask Sungwook for help, hoping that he can persuade Sunungju. Today happens to be the day the two families meet. Sungwook also tells his parents about Sunungju, saying that he can't come today, but don't become friends with Sunungju. Also, he can't bear to see her like that, so Sungwook hurries to Bang's house, and today's meeting is bound to be stormy. Myung-suk and Choi quickly recognize each other. Both of them don't have a good impression of the other, and Mr. Seo and Chairman Kang, standing in the middle, are very embarrassed. Both of them apologize for their wives. As a result, it goes without saying that neither of them can put up with the other. Myung-suk's hot temper can't sit still, returning the money to Choi right on the table, but is rejected by the other. Looking at Dong Hi's in-laws' arrogant appearance, Jau Suk kicks out her foot with a look as though to get to reach and connect with and express her emotion in what was said previously. Choi asked, "Why are you kicking people?" Jau Suk pretended that she didn't mean to, saying sorry to Choi, but with the kick, it was felt that she had come to a conclusion and reached the purpose of letting herself out. After the meeting, Dong Hi learned about Sunungju from Chayiel and that she has refused treatment, to which leaves Sungwook at a loss, so Dong Hi personally goes to meet Sunungju. She feels that giving up on life is an irresponsible act, and if she really feels sorry for Himchan, she must continue to live strong as a mother. Isn't this what she should do? To prevent her son from being hurt, she must continue to live on? Sunungju, after causing so many bad things, finally received retribution. She was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor and lost everything. Sunungju also gave up her will to continue living, but Dong Hi in the end couldn't bear to watch her die. And if Himchan knew about this, his young soul would be hurt again. She tells Sunungju to try to live for her son, and this sentence awakens Sunungju in time. She finally realizes that easily giving up on life is a selfish and irresponsible act. Early the next morning, Sunungju starts packing, and her mother thinks that her daughter wants to run away from home. In reality, she has thought it through, wanting to go to the hospital to receive treatment. Although Chairman Kang's family isn't very enthusiastic about Sunungju, after hearing the news that their ex-daughter-in-law is sick, they also have an indescribable feeling. After all, they were once a family. Although she is hateful, Sunungju's fate is also very difficult. Perhaps this is God's punishment for her. Bang calls Dong Hi, informing her that Sunungju has changed her mind, thanking her for persuading Sunungju, and that she helped her daughter have the motivation to continue living. Receiving the news, Dong Hi and Chayiel are also somewhat relieved. Over here, the first person to visit Sunungju at the hospital is Sungwook, and it can be seen that he is always sincere with Sunungju. It's just that she was too greedy and selfish. Sunungju didn't expect that after everything, everyone would still care about her, and ridiculed herself, saying that this is God's punishment, thanking everyone for helping her realize and change through their care. But even so, don't whitewash Sunungju so much. The message the movie wants to send is that the warmth between people will change everything. A proud and vain Bang has now completely changed, and Tae-ho, who is idle all day, has also found a job and become the pillar of the family. Life is already very difficult. So please care and help those around you more, don't make others suffer because of your greed and selfishness. Returning to the movie, the wedding day is coming soon, so Dong Hi is busy sewing, with every stitch and every thread containing deep love. This gift is truly more precious than anything else in the world. Chayeol is very happy wearing the clothes Dong Hi made, and let us look forward to their wedding together. Over here, Sunungju's surgery day is also approaching. She is worried that she will not be able to leave that room. Looking at her son's picture, she is reluctant in her heart. Her mother advises her not to think wildly. Seeing that Sunungju misses Himchan very much, she calls Dong Hi to ask if she can let the two mothers and sons meet before the surgery, considering it as showing more courage for Sunungju. Dong Hi is very sympathetic to the two mothers and sons, so she asks Himchan if he wants to go see Sunungju, but the matter is too sudden, making the boy unable to prepare well. Dong Hi tells him to think carefully about it, although he doesn't have feelings for Sunungju. After all, she is the one who gave birth to him, and this is a truth that can't be denied. At night, Himchan quietly prays for Sunungju. He doesn't want to see anyone sick. This is indeed a good-hearted boy. At this time, Sunungju is preparing for the surgery, and Bang is anxiously waiting for Himchan to come. At this time, Dong Hi walks in, and Sunungju doesn't understand why she came here. Then Himchan timidly walks into the ward, and in the moment of seeing her son, Sunungju chokes up, unable to say a word. Dong Hi tells the boy to stay and talk with Sunungju, then goes out with the second mother. Himchan starts encouraging Sunungju, saying that he has helped her pray so that she can recover soon. Hearing these words, Sunungju breaks down in tears without knowing that Himchan's next words will make her cry all her tears out. Himchan thanks her for giving birth to him. Sunungju can't believe it and asks her son what he said. He says, "Thank you, Mom, for giving birth to me." Bang raises her hand in front of her daughter, asking her what number this is, then is happy that Sunungju's vision is still okay. She is happy with how the strength of what has helped her give joy will allow her to receive more and more help. After all, before the surgery, the doctor said that there would be a possibility of losing her eyesight. Fortunately, Sunungju can still see, making her happy, and as long as she cooperates with recovery, it will be okay. Sunungju remembers that tomorrow is Dong Hi and Chayeol's wedding. Because it's inconvenient to attend, she has asked her mother to go there in her place to give her blessings. After everything, Sunungju finally returns to being a good person, further strengthening her faith in the future. Over here, Dong Hi, thinking about the upcoming wedding day, always has an indescribable feeling. Thinking about leaving this house, she feels reluctant to leave. And in Dong Hi's heart, her uncle and aunt are just like her parents. In reality, Jau Suk is also reluctant to leave her granddaughter. She tells Dong Hi to treat this as her own home, and everyone always welcomes her back here. Chairman Kang's family is also raising a toast to celebrate, and Choi also sits down to join in the fun, and they have finally become like a family. Everyone is happy and harmonious, no longer having conflicts like before. Choi has recognized Chayeol as her son, and is also a member of the family. And she also loves the lovely Himchan very much, even offering to love the boy, the whole family laughing and talking happily. Perhaps happiness is just that simple. Before the wedding, Chayeol calls Dong Hi, saying that he's so happy that he can't sleep, and that he can't wait until tomorrow. Feeling like he's dreaming, Dong Hi tells him to rest quickly and not turn into a panda at the wedding. Finally, the day we have been waiting for the most has arrived, and Miss Seo, looking at the suit, praises that it suits Chayiel very well, proudly showing off Dong Hi's skills, unable to hide his happiness in front of the parents. Then, Bang also arrives at the wedding, and Sung Wook, upon seeing her, asks about Sunungju. Fortunately, the surgery was very successful, and Bang tells him not to worry because this is all everyone's blessing. At this time, Sunungju is like a new person, sincerely congratulating Dong Hi and Chayiel, hoping that their family of 3 will be happy and fulfilled. Next, we will welcome the most important part, and with the applause of everyone, Dong Hi, arm in arm with Chayiel, enters the wedding hall, and after so much suffering, their love has finally had a truly admirable result. The host of today's wedding is Uncle Jang, and if it weren't for him, this movie would have lasted more than 100 episodes. And he is also the one who has witnessed the difficulties on the road to love of the two, and the difficulties have further strengthened their love. Let us together bless them, and after the wedding, Jau Suk and everyone return together in a cheerful atmosphere, with only Himchan being sad because his mom didn't take him on vacation with her, so he feels a little sad, and the reason why the two didn't take him with them doesn't need to be thought about. Seeing that Chayiel has finally settled down, Choi starts urging Sungwook to remarry soon, but he doesn't have that thought because he still has feelings for Sunungju and has moved out and is no longer a man attached to his mother's skirt. Switching scenes, the newlyweds, having just arrived at the hotel, call Himchan, worried that he will feel left out because his mom has only belonged to him before, and it's no longer like that, but fortunately, Himchan is well behaved and understanding. After hanging up, Chayiel immediately lies down, and Dong Hi prepares to take a bath, but Chayiel wants to take a bath together. Is he crazy? This couple is also really lovely, hoping that they will live the happiest days. After bathing, Dong Hi tiptoes out, but Chayiel is only pretending to sleep, then gets up to take a shower, making Dong Hi a little nervous. At home, Jau Suk is worried about her granddaughter's wedding night, but over here, Chayiel, having finished showering, sees Dong Hi sitting in front of a wine table, wanting to drink a little wine for courage. Seeing Dong Hi so lovely, Chayiel wants to tease her even more. The two clink glasses, and although to Dong Hi, it seems not to feel that the wine has worked. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Chayiel gently holds her hand and reveals his heart, and she responds to him. Fortunately, Chayiel is considerate and warm, and the room is filled with an atmosphere of love. This part is fast-forwarded through. After their honeymoon, the two return to her parents' house, and the whole family knows that the two have had beautiful days, teasing Dong Hi, making her blush. Having not seen her mother for a few days, Himchan runs out of the room and hugs his mother tightly. This is the first time he has been away from his mother for so long, and Chayiel promises to take him on vacation next time. Seeing that Himchan still calls Chayiel uncle, Jau Suk tells him to change it to dad, and it can be seen that Himchan hasn't adapted to this new term yet, and doesn't want to rush him, wanting to let him accept it slowly. Over here, Choi is restless and wants to meet Chayiel's family, having been restless since early morning, so she calls to urge them. Although he misses his son, Chairman Kang, because of his image, firmly refuses to admit it, and Choi has prepared the rooms, just waiting for the three of them to return. Having just gotten married, her family started asking the two when they will have children, and Dong Hi says with a smile that she hasn't thought that far, but Chayiel is very eager. Clearly he promised to have a few kids, but now he's not admitting it, so it's really losing credibility, suggesting to give birth to a football team and not to miss out on good genes like that. Over here, Sunungju, after the surgery, is gradually recovering in a positive direction, and the doctor says that there are no major problems now, just needing to work hard to nourish her body. When the two mothers and sons return home, they see a box of tonic medicine in front of the door, and it turns out that Sungwook bought it. After all, the person who is best for Sunungju is still him. Sunungju calls to thank Sungwook, although she knows that she's greedy. Bang really hopes that her daughter can get back with Sungwook in this world, who treats her son and daughter as well as him. Sunungju advises her mother not to think wildly. Switching scenes, the two wives and husbands bring Himchan home, and they will live together from now on. Choi has become a different person, warmly welcoming them back, and just like that, Chayeol's old room has become Himchan's room, and he has to sleep alone from now on. Dong Hi is a little worried, afraid that her son won't be used to it. Unexpectedly, he takes out a wind chime, and as long as it's hung on the head of the bed, he won't have nightmares. Chayeol says that he will help him hang it up later, and Himchan thanks his dad. Chayeol, after hearing it, says that he is the father of what has come, having to admit, the boy's EQ is very high, and Dong Hi's education is also very good. Over here, Sungwook's room has been taken over, and as soon as they enter the room, Chayeol happily hugs Dong Hi. Now he can finally hug her comfortably. It's just that there's another lamp getting in the way. It turned out that Choi called the two of them to change clothes and come down for dinner. Next time, if the two of them want to be intimate, they must remember to lock the door. Hearing Choi recount what happened earlier, Chairman Kang is startled and tells his wife not to climb up there if there's nothing to do. At the table, Chayiel openly cares for his wife right in front of his parents. Choi glances helplessly, and Chairman Kang freezes for a few seconds. And Choi, admiring that, quickly follows suit, feeding her husband a spoonful of rice, but he refuses to cooperate. At night, Chayiel is eager to contribute to the reproduction of humankind. And let's fast forward through the next scene. Everyone can imagine it themselves. Time flies, and Sungju's hair has grown long, and the youngest daughter is about to give birth. At night, Jau Suk's family receives the good news that both the mother and child are safe, and only Dong Hi and Chayeol haven't had any news yet. Unexpectedly, that night, Choi dreamed of picking up golden peaches, believing that it was a pregnancy dream. Early the next morning, she hurries to ask Dong Hi if she's pregnant, and Chayiel is confused, not understanding what's happening, disbelievingly asking again and again if Dong Hi is pregnant. Hearing the news that he's about to become a father, Chayiel is happy, hugging his wife and forgetting about his mother. And just like that, the three of them look at each other and laugh. He hurries to report the good news to Chairman Kang, and receiving the news, he is overjoyed, telling Himchan that he's about to become a big brother. And hearing this, the boy jumps up with joy, eager to meet the baby. Chairman Kang tells his wife to take Dong Hi for a prenatal checkup, and Chayiel wants to take time off work to take his wife for a checkup. But today the company has an important meeting, and Choi advises her son to rest assured and take care of the company, and Dong Hi can be left to her. Just like that, the two go to the hospital for a checkup, and Dong Hi is 8 weeks pregnant, wanting to take the photo to the company for Chayiel to see together. Although Choi wants to take her there, Dong Hi doesn't want to trouble others, so she decides to take a taxi there. Unexpectedly, as soon as Dong Hi leaves, Choi accidentally meets Sunungju. Sunungju comes out of the hospital and sees her, hurrying over to bow and greet her, and Choi asks about Sunungju's health. And the doctor informs her that she won't need to undergo treatment anymore, and Choi is happy for her. After saying a few words, Sunungju feels a little embarrassed, so she makes an excuse to leave first, but Choi calls her back, wanting to find a place to sit down and talk. Afterwards, from what Choi Sunungju is told, Does gets word that Dong Hi is pregnant and is happy for their family. In reality, before coming here, Choi had a lot of words to say, but when she sat down, she didn't know where to start. Knowing that the other party is keeping her image and doesn't dare to speak up first, Sunungju takes the initiative to apologize to her, admitting all her mistakes in the past. Hearing this, Choi is also very sorry, knowing that she is no better than her, so she sincerely apologizes to Sunungju. The two resolve their conflicts, and their moods are also much better. Choi hopes that Sunungju can forget the past and start a new life. Her design skills are so good, believing that she will definitely shine in the future. And hearing Choi's words of encouragement, Sunungju is moved to tears. Over here, Dong Hi, as soon as she arrives at the company, shows Chayiel the ultrasound photo, making him so touched that he almost cries, and even praises the dot in the ultrasound photo for being so beautiful. And Dong Hi tells him that he's saying nonsense. Chayiel says that his child is always beautiful, and even teases how Dong Hi can be so lovely. It's hard to be at home and have a mother-in-law and son as lights, and at the company, she's troubled by the young couple. It turns out that her colleagues, knowing the news that Dong Hi is pregnant, have bought flowers to congratulate her. Unexpectedly, Chayiel is so quick-mouthed, having spread the news all over the company already. At this time, the person with the most pressure is Sungwook. Sungwook's status as an unmarried man with no children has become a point of concern for Chairman Kang, who's been urging his son to find a girlfriend. Sungwook, content with his solitary life, dismisses the advice. Chairman Kang counters, saying, "You haven't seen Chayiel and his wife, have you? If you did, you definitely want to get married." For the past 2 days, Chayiel and his wife have been radiating happiness, showering the family with their affection, to the point where even Mrs. Choi is impressed. Sungwook playfully suggests that his father should emulate Chayiel and be more attentive to his mother. Uncle Jang, seeking more time with his newborn daughter, has decided to sell his store. Today, someone is coming to view the property. Mrs. Bang, upon hearing the news, makes a bold decision. She will take over the store. Uncle Jang finds it hard to believe, questioning her capacity given her delicate demeanor. Mrs. Bang insists that she is transformed into a new person. Seeing her serious resolve, Uncle Jang relents. Meanwhile, Sunungju, having been out of work for a while, is eager to re-enter the job market. Sungwook had previously promised to help her find employment. Sunungju comes to him for assistance, requesting only that it be a small company. Sungwook readily agrees. The happiest person at the moment is likely Dong Hi, who receives unwavering care from Chayiel and Himchan each day. What's even more admirable is that Chairman Kang also dotes on his daughter-in-law, personally buying flowers and gifts to celebrate Dong Hi's pregnancy. Sungwook desires to do the same, but his father has already taken the initiative, leaving Mrs. Choi in awe. The entire family revolves around Dong Hi. Mrs. Choi is finally content when Chayiel jokingly says he will buy her a pair of shoes. She specifies that she prefers high heels, instructing her son to remember to buy a pair with high platforms. In the evening, the couple converses, wondering who the child will resemble more, but with their virtues. Either way, the child will be wonderful. Time passes swiftly, and Dong Hi's belly grows larger each day. After seeing her husband and son off, she sits down to sew clothes for the child in her womb. It's at this moment that she feels the baby move for the first time, a truly magical feeling. The day of the birth finally arrives. She endures the pain in the delivery room, fortunate to have Chayiel by her side, offering encouragement. Not long before, Chayiel was sound asleep when Dong Hi suddenly woke him up. A wave of pain washed over Dong Hi, soaking her in sweat. Chayiel hurriedly called for everyone. His in-laws immediately jumped up, rushing Dong Hi to the hospital. The aunt and uncle, upon hearing the news, also rushed to the scene, but couldn't find Chayiel anywhere. It turned out that he had entered the delivery room with his wife. Through the monitor, he could sense Dong Hi's pain. Chayiel squeezed his wife's hand tightly, silently wishing that he could take her pain. He truly loved his wife. Time seemed to stand still as the parents outside grew increasingly anxious. It had been so long, and still no news. Could there be complications? Moments later, the cry of a baby rang out from the room. Their daughter had finally been born. They had given Himchan a lovely younger sister. Receiving the news, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. then called to share the good news with everyone, including Sunungju. Today coincidentally marked her first day at work. Sunungju reassured Sungwook that she wouldn't let him down. At this time, Mrs. Bang was also about to take over Uncle Jang's store, preparing to start her own business. Mrs. Jau Suk, after returning from the hospital, couldn't stop praising Chayiel as a good husband and a good father. Today, she could truly see how much he valued Dong Hi. She was also happy that her little one had found someone who loved her the way Chayiel loved Dong Hi. They were truly lucky. A few days later, Dong Hi and the baby were discharged from the hospital. The family had a new member, and radiant smiles adorned everyone's faces. Chayiel knew that Dong Hi was the one who had worked the hardest. On the other side, Sungwook gazed at a picture of the baby, perhaps wishing to have a child of his own. At this moment, Mrs. Choi suddenly called, asking her son if seeing Chayiel's family so happy still didn't make him want to get married. Sungwook advised his mother not to worry, saying he would go on a blind date this week. But when she asked who the girl was, Sungwook hurriedly hung up the phone. Could it be? Could it really be Sunungju? Luckily, they only happened to meet on the road. The blind date wasn't Sunungju. This girl was also pretty and lovely. Sunungju, standing outside, secretly wished him happiness, then quietly left. Shifting the scene, Mrs. Bang's store opening was completely deserted, with not a soul in sight. While she was wondering what to do, the man from the blind date came by, wanting to start over with her. It seemed the two still had a connection. Returning to the happy family of 4, today was a beautiful day, and the couple planned to take their children out to play. After the children left, Miss Choi started to coax her husband to take her out to play, not wanting to be outdone by the young couple. Seeing this, Chairman Kang could only agree. The drama had finally reached its conclusion. Dong Hi recalled the events of the past, from the moment Chayiel was moved by her to when she accepted his feelings, and the difficulties and obstacles in their love story. Although there was no shortage of misunderstandings and tears, it had all proven the strength of their love. Hopefully, viewers of this drama will find their happiness. Remember, happiness isn't readily available. It stems from your actions. Let's all try our best. Today's episode ends here. Please click follow to look forward to the next dramas.